Rise of the European Emperor by Taishan Laonyo.
Chapter 1851. I can't kill your country, but I can kill you. This time, the action on land was actually Marin's way of telling the arrogant Portuguese a fact: no matter how powerful you are at sea, you always have a weakness in your hometown. In this world, the only country that is not afraid of having its hometown stolen is probably England, which is isolated overseas. For other maritime powers, their hometowns are often weaknesses. For example, Venice's hometown was exposed to the threat of Austria. In later generations, Venice was really annexed by Austria for a long time. The same is true for the Netherlands. Don't look at the sea coachman, who is very powerful at sea. However, the landlubber French directly sent troops to their homeland, and the Dutch were immediately defeated. Portugal is the same as the Netherlands. Although it looks so powerful at sea, its homeland is also a weakness. The Spanish sent troops to their homeland in 1580 and eventually annexed Portugal. If Spain hadn't committed suicide later and participated in the 30 Years' War and lost, Portugal would have had no chance to become independent again. In fact, in the Atlantic, Portugal's power is greater than that of Spain. After all, the focus of Spanish navigation was initially in the western Mediterranean Sea, which was the territory of the Kingdom of Aragon. The navigation industry of the Kingdom of Castile was not very developed, and it only had one colony of the Canary Islands. Earlier, when Portugal faced Spain, it was also arrogant during negotiations and looked down on Spain. But at that time, Marin gave Spain an idea: if you don't obey, just besiege Lisbon. Now Portugal is scared. They can certainly fight against the sky, the earth and the sea in the Atlantic Ocean, but facing the threat from Spain on land, they really have no choice. Therefore, the Portuguese were forced to agree to Spain to share its Indian spice trade interests. But for other countries that do not border Portugal, the Portuguese still have a psychological advantage: you can't easily besiege Lisbon, I'm afraid of you. And Marin sent people to Silva's territory to make trouble this time, just to tell those Portuguese, I don't need to send troops to besiege Lisbon, I just need to fight against the territory of a certain noble. As long as you are not afraid of the territory being destroyed, then we can hurt each other. In fact, the destruction of Baron Silva's territory this time is a warning measure. Therefore, Marin did not intend to kill anyone. However, after the destruction, he would send a note to Baron Silva's castle: be careful, I will touch your son. This is terrible. You know, because of the backward medical conditions, many European nobles have difficulty in having children. Just like Rui Silva, who has been married for many years and has only a 5-year-old son, staying in the castle of Baron Silva. If this only son is killed, the Silva family will have no future. In theory, this practice is very unruly and will be collectively rejected by European nobles. But the problem is that Rui Silva himself is also very bad, pretending to be a pirate to rob other people's ships, which is also despised by the world. Therefore, even if they receive threats, the Silva family dare not make it public, and can only be frightened. Of course, Marin will not really touch other people's sons. After all, if he really did this and it got out, it would definitely be a heavy blow to his reputation. Threatening the other party like this is actually mostly to scare the other party. However, the Silva family did not dare to bet whether this was a scare. Because if they lost the bet, they could not afford the consequences. As for the revenge of the Silva family after losing the heir, Caesar usually went out, and there were dozens of knights around him, so there was no way to assassinate him. And the Silva family. Although there were several fief knights under their command, they only appeared a few times a year. Only when something big happened would the Silva castle appear. Usually, the only ones who protected the little master were a few soldiers and servants in the castle. In the face of assassination, the protection capabilities of the two were not at the same level at all. Therefore, when a king and a small noble competed, the strength of the two was not at the same level at all, and there was no comparison. Moreover, this was also a principle of doing things that Marin learned in later generations: try to narrow the target range of the opponent and avoid expanding the scope of attack. It's a very simple truth that the Chinese in later generations would definitely not be able to deal with the Americans. Don't look at the boasting in the news, but generally it is a passive counterattack, not daring to take the initiative to provoke the Americans. Because, that is not wise. However, if it is aimed at a certain company or individual in the United States, it is easy to deal with. As long as the country's power is used, even those leading companies in the United States will have to bow their heads. For example, the two giants, Rotten Apple and A Bit Soft, must immediately admit their weakness in the face of China's dissatisfaction. After all, they still have to do business. Even if it is Lockheed Martin, which only does weapons business, it is not difficult for China to deal with them. You are awesome, right? But your weapon parts must always be taken from other companies. Isn't it enough for me to restrict your suppliers? I can't fine you, but I can't fine your part suppliers. For example, A Bit Soft is a system supplier, and General Boeing is also a hardware supplier. As long as the fine stick is raised, targeting those part suppliers of weapons sold to Taiwan, it can actually strangle the opponent's neck. In this way, it is still easy to target only a certain unit or individual in the United States as long as the country can pull the skin. But if you are not clear-headed and insist on confronting the entire United States, you are a brain dead. Because, I can't fight back. Just like Marin now, it's not that he doesn't have the strength to fight back against Portugal, but he doesn't dare to distract himself to fight back. After all, the matter with France has not yet come to an end, and we can't provoke a strong enemy at will. However, I don't want to fight against the entire kingdom of Portugal, but I can't fight against you, a bold baron. You are a Portuguese baron, no matter how powerful you are, can you be as powerful as the Grand Duchy of the North Sea? I will fight against you, a baron, with the power of one country, and I will win. Moreover, the cost is low. In a word, I can't kill your country, but it's easy for me to kill you, an individual who instigated your country to deal with my country. If you are not afraid of death, just try. Of course, if the other party is a big boss like the Prime Minister in office, doing so may anger the country. However, if it is just a local official like Rui Silva, there is no need to be so careful. Moreover, Marin did not really kill, but frightened the other party. In addition to frightening the Silva family, Marin also intends to remind other Portuguese nobles. So, he wrote a note in Latin with only one sentence on it, I can't kill your country, but I can kill you. This sentence was murderous and threatening, and everyone could feel the deep chill from it. When facing a boss with no bottom line, everyone would be afraid. Unfortunately, Marin did not sign his name, so Portugal could not use this as evidence to find fault, nor could it attack the North Sea country. Because the Portuguese army could not beat. If the two countries really tore their faces, and Marin was willing to be shameless, this sentence would be a sword hanging over the head of the Portuguese or faction. Because the meaning of this sentence is very clear, whoever dares to instigate Portugal to attack the North Sea country may be assassinated. Usually everyone may be very disciplined, because everyone is a beneficiary of the rules. But if it really comes to a fight, there are no shortage of people who break the rules in history. Just like the many civil unrests in England, they are all things that break the rules. If the two countries fell out, they might not send someone to assassinate Manuel I, but killing a few Portuguese ministers would not be a big deal. In this way, those Portuguese ministers would be cautious when expressing their opinions and intending to attack the North Sea kingdom. As long as they heard about this, they would be cautious. Unless this person is stubborn and not afraid of death. Chapter 1852 Ada's new ship. In fact, Marin's approach would never work in the future. At least, in the future, people cannot be killed casually, even if they are from the enemy country. Unless, this person is not a politician. Of course, you don't have to kill someone to get him, her, there are ways. But that was in the future, an era with international law, and everyone would follow certain rules. But this era is different. Although there are many unspoken rules that everyone defaults to, it is hard to say whether they abide by them or not. To put it bluntly, in this era when international rules have not yet been established, the rules that everyone defaults to are not written on paper, and whether to abide by the rules depends on personal will. If it is a general situation, if the bottom line is not touched, everyone is still willing to abide by the rules. However, if you want someone's life, don't blame them for killing you. In this era, there are many things about sending assassins to assassinate opponents. Even Pope Alexander VI personally poisoned his opponent, not to mention ordinary nobles. Of course, when nobles send people to do it, they generally pay attention to not leaving handles, so as not to be sprayed by everyone. In other words, assassination is something that can be done but not said in this era, not nothing. However, if this is really done, even if rumors spread, the blow to reputation is huge. However, even if the Portuguese know that this is Marin's warning, it is not easy to discredit Marin. Why? I don't know where to start. The source of this matter is that Rui Silva saw the money and robbed the transport ship of the North Sea Kingdom, which angered Marin. If you want to discredit Marin, you have to explain the cause of the matter clearly. But the Portuguese can't tell the cause. Therefore, this matter can only be circulated in Portugal and cannot be spread out. After all, this matter is also a black spot of Portugal, and it will only make people laugh if it is told out. Moreover, Marin is also very smart. He did not target the entire Portugal because of this matter, but focused on the Silva family, so that other nobles lost the reason to intervene. Moreover, many Portuguese nobles actually looked down on Rui Silva, lucky villain, who relied on his sister to get to the top. As long as you don't foolishly confront the whole of Portugal, then Portugal will not be unified because of this. After all, this matter has nothing to do with others. It looks like a personal grudge between Marin and the Silva family. What Marin wants is to make outsiders mistakenly think that this is a personal grudge and then have the idea of not wanting to intervene. But in fact, there is no personal grudge in the sea battle. Sea power and so on are the foundation of the country. But Marin wants to dress this up as a personal grudge, not only to make outsiders unwilling to intervene, but also to establish his authority. Marin wants to tell others through this matter I am very vengeful and I have a strong desire for revenge. In this way, when others rob the North Sea merchant ship, they have to weigh what will happen to them after being targeted by Marin's small-minded. In fact, if it was not a Portuguese noble who took action this time, but an ordinary pirate captain, Marin would have ordered him to be killed long ago. Moreover, he would go to hunt this person down with great fanfare. In this way, it can also be regarded as establishing authority. After all, America is so big, and Marin does not want adventurers to get involved. Therefore, he really needs an unlucky guy to establish his prestige. But because America has always been low-key before, coupled with Marin's negative propaganda, pirates have no interest in America. Only the people of the Azores know that America has output. Because the goods loaded on the North Sea merchant ship passing through the Azores on its way back home cannot deceive people. But only the people of the Azores know this, and pirates generally cannot know it. Because before the great development of America, the Azores was simply a poor and remote place far away from the European continent. Except for a few North Sea transport ships that occasionally pass by every year, there are no ships passing by here at all. Pirates will only choose to operate here if they are stupid. Pirates are also profit-seeking animals and will not go to places where there is no oil and water. Just like in later generations, why are there so many cases in big cities? Because scum from all over the country have gathered in big cities to find opportunities. After all, those thieves are not stupid. They know where there are many opportunities to make money, so they will go there. Similarly, pirates generally appear in places with rich oil and water. For example, South Sea pirates usually appear in the Strait of Malacca, the golden waterway for maritime trade. Because there are many merchant ships here, if you succeed in a deal, you will be rich. The Somali pirates of later generations also breed pirates because they are close to the busy Gulf of Aden and there are many merchant ships. Pirates are unwilling to go to a place where few ships pass by. Originally in history, the rise of Caribbean pirates was also due to the huge profits of Spanish treasure ships, which attracted a large number of people who were not afraid of death and were willing to take risks. If there was no profit, pirates would not look at it. But pirates are also people. They are certainly fearless, but the premise is to let them see the wealth that makes them jealous and crazy. For example, the Spanish treasure ship. If it is an ordinary merchant ship, they also have to weigh whether it is cost-effective to rob the ship. And the transport ship that Marin is passing through the Azores now, the value of the goods on the ship is not low, but it is not gold and silver that can be used as cash. These bulk goods always have to find buyers. This is a very troublesome thing, and it is easy for people to trace it. Therefore, for pirates, it is best to transport treasure ships. It is better to directly rob gold and silver as money, and it is not easy to be exposed. If Marin had taken the initiative to retaliate against pirates and kill people to establish his prestige in the early period when there were no treasure ships, he could still curb the breeding of pirates to a certain extent. After all, everyone cherishes his life. If you are destined to rob money but have no life to spend, no one will be willing to rob. In addition, it should be pointed out that if there is no support behind the pirates, it is easy to finish. Historically, the reason why English pirates were rampant was because the Kingdom of England supported them behind the scenes. Even some English warships would pretend to be pirates to do a job. However, since the Pirate Kingdom of Britain ordered the elimination of pirates in 1718, the pirates disappeared quickly. Why? It's not that the English fleet is very fierce, but that the pirates also have their own homeland. What is the purpose of pirates robbing merchant ships to get money? Isn't it to go back to their country to squander? If his country turns a blind eye to this, it will naturally be very convenient. However, if the country where the pirates are located begins to eliminate pirates, then the pirates are really finished. Because the pirates who have landed are very vulnerable, and any team of militia can capture them. Moreover, if they have huge amounts of property of unknown origin, they are also easily targeted. If the money robbed at sea cannot be squandered openly, and there is a risk of being hanged by the government, who would be willing to be a pirate? After all, pirates rob money to spend. Therefore, when the homeland of the English pirates began to hunt down all pirates and hanged a large number of pirates, the group of English pirates that had been crisscrossing the sea for 100 years quickly disappeared. Although there are still some fish that slip through the net, they are not a big deal. The same is true for Marin's means of establishing power. If any pirates dare to rob American transport ships, then they will directly send people to hunt down the pirates on land, even their families. Assassinating nobles may need to be kept secret because it is against the rules. However, if it is to hunt down pirates, no one dares to stop it. Because this matter occupies a righteous name. Therefore, it is not necessary to play hide-and-seek on the sea to hunt down pirates, as long as someone is sent to the pirates' homes to guard them. Unless there is a rogue country like England that deliberately shelters pirates. Otherwise, it is difficult for pirates to become a big deal. As for playing dirty tricks, sending people to pretend to be pirates to rob merchant ships, Marin was not afraid at all. Because the value of Portuguese spice ships was much higher than that of ordinary transport ships. As long as a few spice ships were robbed, the Portuguese would be unable to bear it. Just when Marin was deliberately looking for trouble with the Portuguese and thinking about killing a few pirates to establish his authority, Da Vinci suddenly pushed open the door of his office excitedly and said loudly, "Your Majesty, I have made a new ship that is very suitable for inland navigation. Please go and have a look." New ship? Marin was stunned for a moment, and then said happily, "Is it a motor sailor? What are we waiting for? Let's go and have a look." After that, Marin couldn't wait to follow Da Vinci to see the new ship. Chapter 1853, High-Speed Diesel Engine Speedboat. The so-called motor sailboat is to add mechanical power to the sailboat so that it is not restricted by wind force and wind direction. Generally speaking, the wind is strong on the sea, and the demand for mechanical power is not so strong. But in inland shipping, because the wind is small inland, the demand for power other than wind power is very large. Before, Marin also discussed this problem with Leonardo da Vinci, and described the general principle of the motor sailboat, and then ignored it. Later, Marin also instructed Leonardo da Vinci to come up with a single-cylinder Watt steam engine and a single-cylinder diesel engine. However, there are big problems with these two machines on board. First of all, the Watt steam engine, because this thing is the first-generation version, the speed is very slow and the efficiency is also very low. Leonardo da Vinci installed it on the ship for testing, and the result was only 3 or 4 knots, not as fast as the sailboat. The most fatal thing is that this first-generation version of the Watt steam engine is very bulky and requires a lot of space. For example, after installing a Watt steam engine on a 200-ton ship, not only the speed increase is limited. Moreover, the Watt steam engine, boiler and coal storage room actually took up 1/3 of the entire ship's space, which was very uneconomical. In fact, because the steam engine and boiler were relatively bulky, they also dragged down the speed of the ship driven by the sail. In short, this first-generation version of the steam engine can be used to pump water, but it needs great improvements to be practical to drive ships or even trains. This was actually the case during the Industrial Revolution. Watt invented the Watt steam engine in 1785, but its application to ships did not get a good start until Fulton's Clermont in 1803. But the speed of the Clermont was also very low, only 9 km per hour, which is about 4.85 knots. Then, after decades of improvements, it was not until the mid-19th century that motor sailing ships equipped with steam engines gradually replaced pure sailing ships. Although Leonardo da Vinci had Marin's guidance, Marin was also a half-baked level. He only learned the principle of Watt's steam engine in middle school, and did not understand the principle of the 2-cylinder steam engine on the train or even the 3-cylinder steam engine on the ship. Otherwise, he would have been able to bring the North Sea Kingdom into the steam age in one step. However, based on his memory of the broken hand tractor at home when he was a child, Marin also asked da Vinci and the craftsman to restore a 12-horsepower single-cylinder diesel engine. But this single-cylinder diesel engine has a bigger problem, because it requires more parts and a faster speed, and the manufacturing requirements of this diesel engine are also extremely high. Using the standard of making a stupid, big, black and rough steam engine to make a diesel engine. So, at the beginning, the batch of 12-horsepower single-cylinder diesel engines had many problems and broke down at any time. Sometimes, the time to repair the diesel engine was more than the normal operation of the diesel engine. Then, Marin ignored the mechanical matters and was busy with his own affairs. But Leonardo da Vinci did not give up. He divided dozens of college students from the Department of Mechanical Engineering under him into 2 groups according to their personal interests. One group specialized in the improvement of single-cylinder steam engines, and the other group was led by him personally to specialize in the improvement of 12-horsepower single-cylinder diesel engines. In addition, Leonardo da Vinci also remembered the description of inland speedboat that Marin had told him, which was to hang a single-cylinder diesel engine on the stern of an inland boat as a hanging engine to drive the boat to run on the river. Therefore, in the days that followed, Leonardo da Vinci personally led the team to improve the 12-horsepower single-cylinder diesel engine and greatly reduce its problems. At the same time, he was also studying how to turn a single-cylinder diesel engine into a marine hanging engine. During this period, Leonardo da Vinci also asked Marin about the propeller problem. Marin didn't care. He casually drew a propeller pattern for him according to the blade style of the electric fan and asked him to find someone to process it himself. Of course, this pattern is not nonsense. Because the blades of the electric fan used by Marin in his previous life are said to be made in the style of simulating submarine propellers. At that time, this was not used as a publicity gimmick. Marin then remembered the style of the electric fan, and then gradually forgot it. But after crossing, his memory became stronger, and many forgotten memories were sorted out by him. While drawing the propeller pattern for Leonardo da Vinci, Marin also drew him a schematic diagram of a speedboat driven by a hanging engine in the future. Marin didn't care about this matter, just as an inspiration to Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci was very concerned about this matter. While optimizing the single-cylinder diesel engine, he was also experimenting with installing the single-cylinder diesel engine as a hanging engine on a small inland boat. After some improvements, Leonardo da Vinci found that because of the faster speed and stronger power, the wear of diesel engines is far greater than that of steam engines. Therefore, while standardizing the manufacturing process, designing space for adding oil in the parts of the diesel engine that are prone to wear can reduce wear as much as possible. Then, Leonardo da Vinci found students from the Department of Chemistry to help him extract high-temperature resistant mineral lubricants from a pile of asphalt after refining gasoline and diesel for the lubrication of diesel engines. Another problem is overheating. The diesel engine speed is very fast, and it can turn hundreds of revolutions per minute. Even if lubricating oil is used, friction heat, coupled with the compression and combustion of diesel, produces very high temperatures, and a practical cooling method is required. However, this is nothing. Because Marin pointed out their diesel engine structure, there is a water cooling box that can cool the fuselage more fully. Moreover, the cooling of the fuselage should not be taken too seriously. It is necessary to ensure that the fuselage has a certain temperature, otherwise it is difficult to meet the conditions for diesel combustion. After a long period of optimization and transformation, the 12-horsepower single-cylinder diesel engine can finally run for a long time without problems. At this time, Leonardo da Vinci began to try to install the single-cylinder diesel engine, which had few problems, on a small inland boat to make what Marin called a speedboat. It was not difficult to install a diesel engine on a boat, and Leonardo da Vinci quickly had it done. However, it was more difficult to hold the diesel engine and the propeller system together with one hand to change the direction, as Marin said. Because later speedboats generally use lightweight diesel engines, not bulky diesel engines. Leonardo da Vinci tried many times and found that it was really difficult to easily turn a diesel engine weighing hundreds of pounds. Even if it turned, it took a lot of effort. In desperation, Leonardo da Vinci later changed the method, which was to fix the diesel engine and propeller. As for the steering problem, he also set up two linked rudder blades on both sides of the stern, connected together with a long pole. When you need to change the direction, just hold the long pole to adjust the direction of the rudder blade. After many experiments, Leonardo da Vinci finally made the so-called speedboat described by Marin. This speedboat is indeed very fast, at least, it seems so to people of this era. Because, he didn't rely on any other power, just the power of a single-cylinder diesel engine, and he actually ran at a high speed of 7 knots. But when da Vinci proudly showed the high-speed diesel speedboat to Marlin's expression was very weird. Damn, 7 knots is called a high speed? Chapter 1854, the weak version of the magic modified de Fay. What is the speed of 7 knots? It is 7 nautical miles per hour. And each nautical mile is 1.852 kilometers, which means that the speed of 7 knots is 12.96 kilometers per hour. Damn, even bicycles on the road can reach a speed of 20 kilometers per hour, and this speed is also very impressive. However, only Marin, who has seen the world, thinks so. In the eyes of others, a speed of 7 knots is indeed very remarkable. At least, among inland ships, this speed is very fast. You know, in this era, ships on the sea can only run at a speed of 10 knots at most with full sails and favorable winds because of the strong sea breeze. Only narrow and long speedboats can run at a high speed of 12 knots. But that is on the sea, and the wind is strong. In inland areas, the wind is not even as strong as in the Mediterranean. Therefore, inland ships are generally very slow. Even if a paddle boat is used, because of the limited strength of people, the heavy oars cannot be rowed to fly, and the boat can only be rowed at a speed of 5 or 6 knots. It is not that it is impossible to draw a speed of 7 knots, but that is generally an empty boat, and the rowers row desperately. However, rowing like this cannot last long, after all, people cannot row at such high speed for a long time. Therefore, under normal circumstances, it is difficult for a paddle boat to reach a speed of 7 knots. On the contrary, a Calais can reach a speed of 7 knots with the blessing of the sail power and the rowers rowing together. But under normal circumstances, the rowers also have to conserve their physical strength and will not burst out often. Only when escaping or chasing in a naval battle can such a speed be burst out. Therefore, facing the speedboat that can stably drive at a speed of 7 knots, others are amazed and think it is simply a miracle from God. Is this a miracle? I am really ignorant. Marin rolled his eyes and decided to do something fierce. So he called Leonardo da Vinci and ordered, "How many sets of this diesel engine and propeller system do you have?" Leonardo da Vinci replied, 10 sets, all of which are qualified diesel engines selected by me and my students after improvement. In fact, the craftsmen of the North Sea Kingdom have manufactured more than 112 horsepower single-cylinder diesel engines in total. However, due to the manufacturing process and various improper operations, in the end, da Vinci and his mechanical engineering students only selected 10 qualified products. As for the propeller system, that was not a big deal. Among the more than 20 sets of nickel-steel transmission rods and propeller blades, 12 sets were qualified, which was almost half of the qualified rate. 10 sets, right. Ada, I'll teach you something fun, to make the boat go faster. Da Vinci was confused, and Marin suddenly asked again, Ada, do you know Da? Da? Who is it? Da Vinci was confused. Alas, it seems that he is not a time traveler, and he doesn't know Da. So, what is Da? It is actually a speedboat used for smuggling. The speed of ordinary speedboats is only 30 to 40 kilometers per hour. However, as a smuggling speedboat, Da often modifies the speedboat to make the speed of the speedboat very high in order to escape the interception of the anti-smuggling ship. The means of modification are also very simple: install 6 or even 7 250 horsepower marine hanging engines side by side at the rear of the speedboat. In this way, the 6 marine engines can work together to push the speed of the speedboat to a very high level. Generally speaking, a big fly loaded with a car or more than 300 boxes of cigarettes can run at a speed of more than 90 kilometers per hour. Because of the resistance of water when sailing at high speed, speedboats often break through the obstacles of water and fly on the water, so they are also called big flies. The speed of the big fly is too fast, with a speed of more than 90 kilometers per hour, and it can also reach high speeds on land. The speed of anti-smuggling ships at sea is generally about 60 kilometers, and at most 80 kilometers per hour. There is really nothing you can do when you encounter such unreasonable and fast, big flies. However, later China became rich, and the customs department was allocated sufficient funds from above, and it directly replaced the shotguns with cannons and equipped with helicopters. Nima, no matter how fast your big fly is, can it be faster than an airplane? Then, the big fly was restrained by the real fly machine. Of course, in this era, everyone has not seen the power of the big fly. Marin smiled mysteriously and began to instruct Da Vinci and his mechanical students to modify the hull. The boat weighed more than 10 tons, and 4 12-horsepower single-cylinder diesel engines were directly hung at the stern. This was because the boat was too small, and the diesel engine needed to be started by cranking, so there had to be space. Otherwise, Marin planned to install 6 at a time. After the 4 diesel engines were installed, Marin ordered the 4 mechanical students to crank the handle together to start the diesel engine. Then, shift gears. Of course, there was only one gear, and the other was neutral. After shifting gears together, the speedboat rushed out quickly like an arrow from a string. The rope section and empty barrel used to measure the speed were also quickly towed away. Da Vinci and a group of mechanical students were directly Spartan. What is the speed? After a long while, seeing that the rope and the empty barrel were pulled away, he began to ask for records. Up to 18 knots. How much? Da Vinci thought he had heard wrong, so he grabbed the record book and took a look. It was correct, 18 knots. At this time, Marin realized something was wrong and ordered, quick, catch up on horseback, use the horn to order the boat to stop. The small river used by the Department of Mechanical Engineering to test the speed of the boat was only a dozen kilometers long, but it could not withstand the running of the boat. As a result, it was still a step too late. The speedboat rushed onto the river beach at the end of the river at a speed of 18 knots. The 4 students in charge of the Mechanical Engineering Department were injured, but fortunately none of them were too serious. But the hull of the wooden boat was directly damaged, and even 2 diesel engines were broken. Da Vinci comforted the injured students and sent them to the hospital. He was so excited that he danced with joy. If all ships are equipped with this kind of power, who can catch up with the ships of the North Sea? But Marin poured cold water on him. Don't dream, Ada, there is not enough diesel. Indeed, now the North Sea Kingdom can only import oil from the Galicia River Valley in Poland, and will soon obtain oil from the Chukchiangking in Taiwan Island, and can also import oil from Persia. However, even so, the oil production is still low. The oil production in the Galicia River Valley is very low, only 1 or 2 barrels a day, and this is the production after Marin's heavy investment. The scope of the Chukchiangking has been determined, but well drilling and exploration are still underway. Moreover, it is necessary to wait until the Zhutong well is opened before mass production can begin. On the Persian side, according to the information sent back, the Baku area there can indeed produce hundreds of ships of oil every year, but Marin can only buy dozens of ships. Because the Middle East also needs oil to treat skin diseases of cattle and sheep. So, Marin now needs to vigorously develop new oil fields, and at the same time, he plans to discuss with Persia to take the initiative to invest in the development of the Baku oil field and drill more deep wells to obtain more oil. Only with enough oil can this modified big fly be truly put into use. However, calling it a big fly is really an insult to the name of big fly. Because the speed of this ship is too low. 18 knots looks bluffing, but in fact it is only 33.3 kilometers per hour, which is only a little faster than an electric bicycle after the speed limit. Of course, this is also related to the fact that the speed of the diesel engine is not as fast as that of the gasoline engine. In addition, this diesel engine as a hang-up is too shabby. The real, big plane is equipped with an imported marine hang-up engine with 250 horsepower, which is extremely powerful. However, Marin's weak version of the modified big plane is equipped with a 12 horsepower single-cylinder diesel engine, and the single power is less than 1/20th of that of others. Therefore, the real, big plane, can fly on the sea. The weak version of the modified big plane made by Marin can only rush in the inland river. However, the speed of 18 knots did shock the natives of this era. Even Leonardo da Vinci, the peerless genius, was a little frightened. If they were asked to evaluate this weak version of the modified big plane, they would definitely agree with the title of big plane. Because, in the eyes of these natives, a speed of 18 knots is equivalent to flying. The speed of 18 knots is my guess, but I haven't tried it, mainly because there is no condition to test it. Chapter 1855 The embarkation of the De Fay and the Dover ship. The scene of this modified, big flying boat, speeding, on the water surface left an indelible impression on everyone present, which was extremely shocking. But after calming down, I was thinking about a question: what is the use of this modified big flying boat? You said to take it to war, but it is useless just because the speed of the ship is fast. After all, the ship is not used to collide with people. Even if you catch up, you have to rely on firepower to solve the opponent. The speed of the North Sea warship is not lower than that of warships of other countries, and it can catch up by itself. Using a diesel engine does not seem to be very cost-effective. If it is used as a speedboat to transmit information, no matter how fast the boat is, it is not as fast as a pigeon. If it is a super long distance across the Atlantic Ocean, where pigeons are difficult to reach, this big flying boat can be used, but it is too fuel-consuming. According to estimates, the 12 horsepower single-cylinder diesel engine that Marin had people copy consumes 2 to 3 liters of diesel per hour. If 4 engines are in parallel, it can consume 11 or 12 liters of diesel per hour. If it runs for 10 hours a day, a big plane will consume more than 100 liters of diesel. But for Marin at present, diesel is in short supply. The current reserve is only 10 barrels of diesel, which is about 1,590 liters, which can't withstand the consumption of several big planes. If it is just to send messages, Marin might as well make a clipper. In that way, at least it doesn't consume fuel. If you want to really use diesel engines, it will be of great use. For example, for naval battles. Okay, this time we'll play a little bigger and move the diesel engine directly onto the warship. Marin fooled Da Vinci and his disciples to go crazy together. Everyone came to the hidden William naval port and started to attack the warships anchored in the port. First of all, the rudder blades placed in the middle of the stern must be modified. Because, according to the standards of the big plane, the rudder blades in the middle are easy to conflict with the parallel propellers. Therefore, the rudder blades can only be placed on both sides. Fortunately, this problem is not a big deal. As long as there is a steering wheel system, a labor-saving lever system combining a fixed pulley and a movable pulley can be installed, and the rudder blades can be placed on both sides of the stern. Then, the captain just stands in the middle of the stern and turns the steering wheel. Then the diesel engine is installed. The 250 class armed merchant ship is 7 or 8 meters wide. Marin installed 8 12 horsepower single-cylinder diesel engines in a space of 1 meter. The next step is testing. It is different from the test of inland boats. After all, it is a large ship with a displacement of 250 tons. The total horsepower of 8 12 horsepower diesel engines is only 98 horsepower, while in later generations, fishing boats start with 150 horsepower. As a result, the test showed that without raising the sail, the 250 class armed merchant ship driven by 8 12 horsepower diesel engines has a speed of only 8 knots. However, if the sail is hung and the 2 powers are added, the wind can run at a speed of more than 13 knots. If it is against the wind or there is no wind, the speed of 8 knots is the king. After the transformation of the 500-ton battleship, the effect was even worse. After all, the tonnage doubled, but the power did not change. In fact, 12 single-cylinder diesel engines can be placed on a 500-ton battleship. However, Leonardo da Vinci and his mechanical students only had 10 useful engines in total, and 2 were damaged. Currently, only 8 can be used for testing. It is naturally very difficult to drive a 500-ton ship with 96 horsepower. In a windless state, the speed of a 500-ton battleship is only a little more than 4 knots. This power is not as good as the oarsman rowing. Even if it is fully loaded with 12 single-cylinder diesel engines, Marin estimates that the windless speed is only a little more than 5 knots, which is not very meaningful. There is no way, the ship is too big, and the diesel engine power is too small. Marin wants to increase the power of the diesel engine, but unfortunately, he didn't study mechanics in his previous life. The principle of the internal combustion engine is taught in middle school textbooks. The structure of the single-cylinder diesel engine is remembered by following my father to repair the hand tractor at home. As for the design principle of diesel engines and how to improve power, sorry, I am not a professional. As for the great scientist Leonardo da Vinci, he learned the kinetic energy equation and other power calculation formulas from Marin, and we can expect him to improve. If Leonardo da Vinci was 20 years younger, we might still be able to expect him. But anyway, the standardized 12 horsepower single-cylinder diesel engine is there. As the Department of Mechanical Engineering trains mechanics one after another, there will always be excellent mechanics who can improve diesel engines. Marin knew that if a diesel engine wants to achieve high power, it must use multiple cylinders. However, he didn't even know the principle of multiple cylinders in a steam engine, let alone a diesel engine. Therefore, he could only write this sentence in the textbook of Leonardo da Vinci's Department of Mechanical Engineering. According to the great sage Einstein's speculation, if more cylinders are added, it is estimated that the power and performance of steam engines and diesel engines can be improved. As for the rest, Marin can only hope that there will be another genius like Leonardo da Vinci among the students of the Department of Mechanical Engineering who can burst out and design a high-power multi-cylinder diesel engine. For this reason, Marin offered a very high reward. Whoever can make a multi-cylinder steam engine or diesel engine will be rewarded with 10,000 gold coins and a non-hereditary knighthood. This is a very high reward. A great god like Newton was only a knight until his death, because he became the president of the Royal Bank of England. Others, who are not of noble origin, have almost no shortcuts except to go to the battlefield to make military merits. Therefore, Marin's reward is actually over the standard and very tempting. But Marin knows that compared with the benefits it brings, this reward is really nothing. You know, once the steam engine realizes double-cylinder linkage, it can be applied to trains, allowing trains to run at a speed of 20 to 30 kilometers or even 40 kilometers per hour. When applied to ships, it can also make ships run at a speed of more than 10 knots. If the diesel engine can achieve multi-cylinder linkage, it will be even more amazing. Its extremely fast speed will enable people to enter the era of internal combustion engines, and the speed will also be greatly improved. The most important thing is that it can make diesel-powered cars appear and change people's travel methods. Marin began to regret not taking the mechanics exam in his previous life. If he had known that he would travel through time, he would have studied history and mechanics for a double degree. Back then, he took the college entrance examination and got 3+2, which means Chinese, math, and English plus any 2 subjects, which can be chosen by oneself. For example, candidates can choose the strange combination of physics and history. Later, they probably felt that although this model was humane, it was not convenient for management and teaching, so they changed it later. You know, at that time, students who chose courses across arts and sciences, if they chose physics and history, might have to attend science classes in the morning and go to arts classes to study history in the afternoon, which was a bit like the university model, making it extremely difficult for the school to manage. But how can students fight against the school? Therefore, it is normal that this humane course selection model was cut later. In fact, it is already great that Marin can bring the simplest single-cylinder diesel engine to this era. Because this simply disrupts the development of the normal technology tree of the world. You know, even a hand tractor is a very powerful existence. Not to mention the efficiency of farming, even if it is running on the road, it can run at a speed of more than 10 or 20 kilometers per hour without resting, which is much better than horses. Moreover, the cargo capacity is much greater than that of a horse-drawn carriage. In addition, the engine head of a single-cylinder diesel engine is also a versatile product. It can drive a rice mill to grind rice, a steel mill to grind flour, and a water pump to pump water for irrigation. Well, with the addition of specially designed suspension equipment, it can also act as a harvester, which is much more efficient than humans. The only problem is that the oil extraction technology is backward and there is no sufficient oil. Therefore, after thinking it over and over again, Marin did not think it was necessary to install diesel engines on 500-ton warships. Because, for these warships, as long as their speed is not slower than that of the enemy ships, it is enough. In terms of firepower and durability, who can compare with the galleon warships of the North Sea Kingdom that are dozens or hundreds of years ahead of the times? However, it is feasible to install diesel engines on 250-class armed merchant ships. Because, a windless speed of 8 knots is also very fast in this era. Although speed is generally useless, if you learn Bidas's roving tactics, it is very valuable. If 8 single-cylinder diesel engines are installed at the stern of the sailing paddle boat designed by the North Sea Kingdom, how high will the speed of this sailing paddle boat be after the war? Even in a windless area, it can reach a speed of 8 knots, which is faster than the galleon. If the oarsmen cooperate with a few more strokes, the speed is estimated to reach 10 knots. By then, in terms of maneuverability, who can compare with the 250 modified sailing paddle boat? With the lizard cannon in front of the sailing ship, Bidas's tactics can be used to the extreme. Well, it's settled. Select a few 250-level armed merchant ships, modify them, and install 8 single-cylinder diesel engines. Since the French ship is called a Calais ship, then this ship will be called a Dover ship. Marin decided. Dover is the English port directly opposite the port of Calais. The two ports jointly control the narrow Strait of Calais, called the Strait of Dover by the British. Since he will stand on the side of England after all, Marin naturally considers the issue from the perspective of England. Moreover, this ship is also designed for the Calais ship. In the future, regardless of whether the Calais ship can attack the English ships, once Marin installs the Dover ship with 8 single-cylinder diesel engines, the French Calais ship will not be able to escape. Chapter 1856 Makai, Zidahua. Although Marin does have very little oil now, with the opening of the Persian route, it is still no problem to import dozens of ships of oil a year. Therefore, it is unrealistic to promote diesel engines nationwide, but the fuel can still be supplied by installing diesel engines on only a few warships. According to John Laffite's report, the French are only preparing to equip 6 Calais ships. If you want to target France, you don't need many, and 6 are enough. The ships of the North Sea country are more resistant to artillery fire, and the warships will definitely be covered with iron sheets, which will be more resistant. Then, each Dover ship pretends to have 8 single-cylinder diesel engines, which will run faster than the Calais ship. Marin really can't think of any reason to lose to the 6 French Calais ships. What is certain is that once those Calais ships are destroyed, France's dream of becoming a naval power will continue to die down. But now Marin does not intend to take action, because England is not under Marin's jurisdiction, and he does not need to take action. It would be better if the Calais ship could cause trouble to England a few times. In this way, after he takes control of England, he can send the Dover ship to kill the French Gaules ship, and he can also brush up his reputation in England. But while attacking the French navy, he must also bear the retaliation of France on land. Therefore, Marin has only now ordered the construction of border defense lines and core area defense lines. There is no other reason, just to prepare for entering England. At this time, Regent Bidas, who wants to bravely lead the French navy to defeat the English, is currently busy receiving 6 Gaules ships coming from the Strait of Gibraltar. However, there are no cannons on this Gaules ship. No wonder, with the Spanish style, how could they allow a warship equipped with a 7,000-pound Lizard cannon to pass through the Strait of Gibraltar? Therefore, the 6 Gaules ships were all fruit ships with all their weapons removed, so they could pass through the Strait of Gibraltar. As for the Lizard cannons on the 6 Calais ships, the Venetians sent another merchant ship to hide the cannons in the bottom hold and quietly transport them to France, and then let the French reinstall the cannons on the bows. Although the Lizard cannons weighed 7,000 pounds and were very heavy, the French didn't care, as there were many people and craftsmen. As long as manpower and machinery were used well, the 7,000-pound heavy cannons could be hoisted and transported. Once the Lizard cannons were transported and loaded onto the warships, it would be a good time for the Calais ships to go out to sea to find trouble with England when the wind was weak. However, poor Bidas didn't know that before he had even started to fight the English, Marin had already been keeping an eye on the news of his ships and cannons, and had also created a more powerful Dover ship. If Bidas knew this, he would definitely vomit blood and shout, "Since there is a Calais ship, why is there a Dover ship, Liang?" After deciding on the modification plan, Marin returned to Auric. When he was free, he still had time to teach the children to read. Seeing that little Ma Yun is growing up, when he comes of age, he will definitely be sent to the Ming dynasty to study abroad. So, from now on, Marin began to keep an eye on little Ma Yun's studies. Unlike what Caesar learned, in order to adapt to the Ming dynasty society, Marin asked little Ma Yun to start directly from the 4 books and 5 classics when learning Chinese. Moreover, he asked Lu Tai, who was well read in poetry and books, to help teach. Although Lu Tai was an imperial physician, he was also educated and passed the examination for a scholar. But he didn't pass the examination for a jurin, otherwise he would have abandoned medicine and become a writer. After all, civil officials were considered people in the Ming dynasty, and medical officials could not be on the stage. Although Marin is a Chinese soul, he was educated under the red flag since he was a child, and he was really not good at ancient Chinese. Therefore, the task of educating little Ma Yun in the 4 books and 5 classics fell on Lu Tai. And for the future of future generations, Lao Lu also tried his best to teach little Ma Yun to read. Moreover, Lao Lu had a wish, which was to let his grandson return to the Ming dynasty with Xiao Ma Yun to live, and it would be best if he could get an official position. He was judged to be a member of Lu Jin's party, and he was already a member of the eunuch party, who could not gain a foothold in the Ming dynasty. Under normal circumstances, it would be difficult for their whole family to return to the Ming dynasty, and even if they did, they would be despised. But if they held Xiao Ma Yun's thigh, it would be fine. The Ming dynasty could not tolerate the eunuch party, but Dongfan Island could. Anyway, it was all within the scope of the Ming dynasty, and it was also considered returning home. He was old and had no hope of returning home. However, his grandchildren were still young, and there was still hope to go back, even if they lived on Dongfan Island. Ma Lin naturally had no objection to this. As long as Xiao Ma Yun was educated well, this selfishness was still allowed. As for Lao Lu's education level, Ma Lin didn't care. Because he asked Xiao Ma Yun to study the 4 books and 5 classics, not to really let him go to the Ming dynasty to take the imperial examination, but to let him face those Ming dynasty civil servants so that he would not understand what they said. The civil officials of the Ming and Qing dynasties, influenced by the 8-part essay, liked to quote classics when speaking, that is, they were unwilling to reveal their own meanings, but liked to let people guess. This is not the fault of those civil officials, but the regulations of the imperial examination. They must quote classics and are not allowed to have their own opinions. Therefore, not only did their writing style become like this, but they also liked to quote classics and beat around the bush when speaking. If you don't have a certain foundation in the 4 books and 5 classics, you can't understand what they are saying at all. Just like when Ma Lin went to Daming last time, it was okay to talk to people, especially when talking to eunuchs, it was even more straightforward. But when talking to those civil officials, they always beat around the bush and let you guess. It's not that they do this on purpose, it's really a habit. If you go to Daming occasionally, you naturally don't need to play the guess me game with those Daming civil officials. But if little Ma Yun wants to be active in Daming in the future, he must understand it, otherwise he will be fooled. Therefore, Ma Lin asked Lu Tai, who had passed the examination for a scholar, to help teach little Ma Yun the 4 books and 5 classics so that he can adapt to his future life in the Ming dynasty. At the same time, Caesar and Robert often went to listen in. After all, they are children, and they are also very interested in different cultures in foreign countries. Moreover, Caesar has a good foundation in Chinese. He started learning Chinese very early, so it is easier for him to listen to Lu Tai's lectures. Robert, because he is not an heir, has not learned Chinese, which is regarded as a secret by Marin, so it is naturally difficult to listen. Fortunately, the same is true for little Ma Yun. Without a foundation, the 2 brothers are unlucky together, and their palms are often beaten red and swollen by Lu Tai's small board. In this regard, Marin also strongly supports it, and repeatedly emphasizes to little Ma Yun that teachers must be respected. In Daming, students must never disobey their teachers. Therefore, these boards are compulsory courses. On this day, when the 3 children including Marin were listening to Lu Tai's lecture, Lu Tai talked about the issue of courtesy names, and wanted to give Xiao Ma Yun a courtesy name. This is a custom in Daming, the teacher helps them choose courtesy names. But Ma Lin waved his hand and said, no need, the courtesy name of little Ma Yun has already been chosen, Hua Teng. Dr. Lu felt a little disappointed. You know, giving students courtesy names is also a way to confirm the teacher-student relationship. Unlike ordinary disciples who curry favor with famous teachers, Dr. Lu was rushing to curry favor with little Ma Yun, so he naturally wanted to help him choose a courtesy name and establish the teacher-student relationship first. But Ma Lin didn't give him this opportunity. At this time, Caesar, who was listening, suddenly asked, Dad, do I have a Chinese name? Ma Lin thought about it and said, Ma Caesar. No, just call me Ma Kai. The courtesy name. At this time, Dr. Lu interrupted, Your Highness the Crown Prince is virtuous and elegant, why not give him a courtesy name De Hua? Ma Lin was stunned, Nima, how did my baby Caesar become Ma? De Hua. Chapter 1857 Need to show the horror of syphilis. Suddenly, Ma Lin looked at Dr. Lu with extremely dissatisfied eyes, Nima, how can my son Caesar look like Zhu Beiji? Dr. Lu was also shocked. After thinking for a while, he said in his heart, there is nothing wrong, De Hua, virtuous, and talented, how auspicious. Then, he asked carefully, Lord, is there anything wrong with this? Now Ma Lin was depressed, how could he say it was inappropriate? Not to mention that Mr. Ma De Hua was born hundreds of years later, even Wu Qinzhen, the author of Zhu Beiji played by Mr. Ma, seemed to be a 16-year-old boy, and had not yet created the character of Zhu Beiji. Could it be that the ancestors still have to avoid people hundreds of years later? Forget it, De Hua is De Hua. Besides, Ma De Hua is not the same as Zhu Beiji, he is just the most classic actor. Speaking of which, Mr. Ma is still a respected senior, but a little bit of an old naughty boy. If you dare to suggest calling it Cohen, I will definitely deduct a year's salary from you. Marin thought viciously. Then, Marin waved his hand helplessly and said, let's call him De Hua. At this time, Robert also came to join in the fun, Dad, I also want a Chinese name, please give me one, it must be loud. Grand. Hey, little guy, you have a lot of requirements. Marin glanced at Robert. However, considering that he will be a cardinal when he grows up and may become the Pope in the future, he does need a loud name. Otherwise, hundreds of years later, the Chinese will definitely burst into laughter when reading this paragraph, the XXTH Pope XXX, originally named Robert, Chinese name Ma Er Guzi. Marin shuddered and decided to let this poor kid go. So, he began to think seriously. Are there any other great people with the surname Ma? Ma Chao. Well, I have this one, but it's not right. Ma Liang too. Ma Zhou, I have this one too. What about his own name? Ma Luo. Mule Ma. Ma Bo. I thought it was Uncle Ma. Matt. Marin thought of the Shah Mat with a haircut and thought it would be better to forget it. I can't use the characters in my own name, so I can use my surname. Ma Hua, doesn't sound good. Ma Fu. Ba. Ma man, sounds like a poor horse, running slowly. Marin was a little distressed. He decided to find a celebrity with the surname Ma from later generations, Ma Sonli. Marin suddenly wanted to laugh. It doesn't seem serious for the Pope to perform crosstalk. How about Ma Jingtao? He is a roaring emperor after all. Marin thought so hard that his head hurt. In the end, he gave up and said, forget it, just call him Ma Long. Ma Lin thought, after all, he is an Olympic champion, it's not a bad name to use this name. Besides, dragon is very noble in Chinese, so it is not disgraceful to call the Pope Ma Long. What about the courtesy name? Robert asked. Dr. Liu did not dare to speak, for fear of making Marin unhappy. Marin thought for a while and said, let's call him Yongzhen. Yongzhen? What does it mean? Robert asked. It means to enjoy a long and legitimate life. It is indeed an extremely noble name. It is also the reign title of Emperor Xuanzong of Tang. In ancient times, there was Yongzhen reform. Dr. Liu said. But he didn't say anything more, because the Yongzhen reform failed in the end because of the coup, and Tang Xuanzong was also abolished. Really? After all, Marin studied history, so he didn't remember it at first, but when he recalled the Yongzhen reform. Forget it, anyway, it was a taboo for Chinese people at that time, and it was not popular in the West. Marin waved his hand and said impatiently, your name is Ma Long, and your courtesy name is Yongzhen. The interpretation of Yongzhen is to be forever loyal to God. Don't stop with other explanations, take my explanation as the official explanation, understand? Robert nodded stupidly and said, okay, my Chinese name will be Ma Yongzhen in the future. This was said quite proudly, with a sense of Ma's dominance over Shanghai. However, what he will dominate in the future is Roma Beach, which is much more difficult than Shanghai Beach. After all, Ma Yongzhen was only dealing with a group of hooligans who deserved to be beaten, while Robert, Ma Yongzhen, was dealing with a group of shrewd cardinals. 2 days later, a pigeon letter came from Rome. Marin opened it and saw that the Vatican had prepared an investigation team to go to Cuba and Haiti to investigate the local indigenous people. The Pope's father-in-law asked him to prepare as soon as possible to let the investigation team see that syphilis is rampant on Haiti, and it would be best if there were priests treating those syphilis patients. In this way, the previous lies can be made up. Nima, this is a bit difficult. Marin dared to send people to contact smallpox patients because of cowpox. But for syphilis, he really has no way for the time being. If he sends people to catch a few syphilis patients, there will be no problem. But the problem is, how to ensure the safety of his own people. You know, just like the American Indians have no resistance to smallpox, Europeans have no resistance to syphilis. Once infected, skin ulcers are basic and can be fatal. Moreover, only with the casualties of Charles VIII's army in front, can the Europeans be frightened and not dare to covet. If we send our own missionaries to contact those syphilis patients, won't this cost lives? Marin had a headache and didn't know how to show the investigation team how the priests he sent to America rescued local syphilis patients. This is the highlight, and it must be performed well. Otherwise, Europeans will lack awe of America. The Pope's father-in-law is indeed an old ginger and knows the importance of this play. Once it is performed well, it can shock all countries. What should I do? Do I really send my own people to die? Marin was very entangled. At this time, Caesar pushed the door in and watched politics, as usual, that is, watching how Marin handled government affairs, mainly looking at the documents that Marin had approved. If Marin was free, Caesar would ask questions. Father, what's wrong with you? Are you uncomfortable? Caesar asked worriedly. Marin no longer treats Caesar as a child, but as a real heir. So he simply expressed his concerns. Caesar tilted his head and thought for a while, then said, Father, you are saying that you are worried that your own people will be infected with syphilis because of their low resistance to syphilis. Then why don't you use the locals to take care of those patients? Didn't you say that the locals have a high resistance to syphilis? Caesar's words woke Marin up. Yes, Europeans have no resistance to syphilis, but the locals do. Mua. Good son, you helped your father solve a big problem. He only thought about using European missionaries to show off and take care of those Taino syphilis patients, but he didn't think that the missionaries didn't necessarily need to take care of those local syphilis patients in person, they could instruct the locals to take care of those syphilis patients. The locals have a strong resistance to syphilis and just treat it as an ordinary skin disease. As long as you do a good job of hygiene and wear masks and gloves, there should be no problem taking care of these people. In this way, no European missionaries will take this risk. It's just, if you don't show the miserable condition of syphilis, it doesn't seem to be scary enough. For the locals, syphilis is just a serious skin disease, not very fatal. But the miserable condition of Europeans suffering from the disease is the most terrifying. Only by showing the miserable condition of Europeans suffering from syphilis can we fool people. In the end, Marin decided to extract a few death row prisoners from the death row, send them to Haiti, and infect them with syphilis to show them to the investigation team. As long as we grasp the time well, let these people get syphilis before the arrival of the delegation. When the delegation arrives, these people will basically be covered with pus and look miserable. At that time, we will lie that these people are responsible for rescuing the locals and are infected. As for whether these people will let the cat out of the bag, just cut off their tongues. At the same time, prevent the death row prisoners who can write from being mixed in. By then, they will have no tongues and cannot tell the truth, and the people in the investigation team will not dare to approach them. Naturally, no one knows the truth. Chapter 1858 Return of the Amazon Expedition. After making the decision, Marin immediately began to arrange the matter. However, he only told Caesar about using local people to take care of syphilis patients. Marin did not tell him about arranging death row prisoners to show the miserable situation and cutting tongues. Training successors should also be careful. At such a young age, you can show some strategies, but it is better not to show too terrible things, so as not to teach the child wrongly. The Pope's father-in-law told Marin that because the representatives of several German principalities had not yet arrived in Rome, Marin had plenty of time to arrange in advance. Therefore, Marin directly ordered to go to the prison to find a few death row prisoners who could not write, and put them on the speedboat with the upper edge gaff sail. This three-masted slender speedboat is a bit like a clipper, but it is a little fatter. It is specially used by the North Sea Kingdom to convey important messages and is rarely used. North-south sailing ships rarely have a tailwind, so the modern longitudinal sails such as the upper edge gaff sail are very suitable for north-south sailing. After arriving at Haiti Island, these people directly arranged for these death row prisoners to get sick. After a while, the investigation team almost arrived. It was just right to see their miserable side. It would be best if someone died in front of the investigation team, which would be scary enough. In short, we must show the distinguished members of the investigation team the horror of the evil diseases in the American colonies and make them a little scared. After returning, what they saw and heard will become important evidence to prove that Marin did not lie. In fact, there was no need to wait for the members of the investigation team to return from America, and someone would testify for Marin. Because the Amazon expedition team came back. Just the year before last, in 1514, the first batch of Amazon expedition teams came back and published the best-selling book, Escape from the Amazon. Later, Marin came up with an idea. He decided to recruit people from other countries to explore the Amazon River basin in Brazil, let them experience the horror of the Amazon jungle firsthand, and then come back to tell their stories. Of course, in name, they were going to capture rare and exotic animals. Later, Marin selected adventurers to implement this plan and sent people to Portugal, Spain and France to recruit adventurers to set off. In the end, about 400 or 500 people from these three countries joined the adventure team. Shortly after Marin sent a speedboat to notify Haiti Island, the adventure team also returned. They returned from the base on Tobago Island. Before that, there were about 497 adventurers who went there. However, only 319 people survived. Moreover, many of the 319 survivors were disabled by the beasts in the Amazon jungle. Some had their legs bitten off by crocodiles, some had their arms broken by jaguars, some had lost sensation in one foot due to untimely treatment after being bitten by venomous snakes, and some were disabled by the attacks of cannibals. In the end, less than 200 people returned intact, not even half of the original total number. However, they were lucky to be able to come back alive. Because the 178 people who were unlucky were permanently sleeping in the terrifying Amazon jungle, either dying in the mouths of crocodiles, venomous snakes and jaguars, or being eaten by piranhas, or being captured and roasted by cannibals. In short, this returning team was extremely miserable. However, they also captured 50 crocodiles, 12 jaguars, many unknown giant venomous snakes, more than 40 piranhas, and 20 cannibals. The fleet stopped in Lisbon for a long time and went ashore to show off the captured animals, which caused a huge sensation. Fortunately, Marin had made arrangements in advance and had bought a large piece of land in Lisbon and built a huge glass greenhouse, so that these animals from tropical regions were not frozen to death. Otherwise, with the temperature this spring, these tropical creatures might be frozen to death. In Lisbon, in this glass greenhouse known as the Tropical Zoo, the expedition leader East threw a purchased pig into the pool where more than 40 piranhas were in front of everyone. Then, there was a violent churning of the water surface, and the domestic pig that was just struggling was directly dismembered by more than 40 piranhas that had been extremely hungry for a long time, and even the skeleton was broken into pieces, which shows how fierce the snatch was. The water surface was soon dyed red. This scene frightened many Portuguese noble ladies who were watching. They screamed like pigs being slaughtered, while the adventurers who came back alive laughed happily. Afterwards, more than 50 surviving Portuguese adventurers began to brag about their adventures in the Amazon jungle in a tavern in Lisbon. Because their stories were so scary and exciting, they didn't need to pay for their own drinks. As long as they stopped and said they were thirsty, someone would pay for their refills. See My little finger and ring finger on my left hand were bitten off by a jaguar that suddenly appeared during a jungle expedition. The big guy finally killed the jaguar, but my 2 fingers were chewed up and could never be reconnected. The speaker was called Neo, a bankrupt businessman in Lisbon. Because he owed a large sum of money and couldn't pay it back, he made up his mind and joined the Amazon expedition. Because the expedition gave a high commission of 1 shilling a day. Although he came back with 2 broken fingers, he finally guaranteed most of his labor capacity. Moreover, the bounty this time was enough for him to pay off his debts, and he could even have some surplus to do some small business. He was lucky because, after he broke 2 fingers, he rested in the temporary base for more than 10 days, and those 10 days were exactly when the entire expedition team encountered the most danger. In those 10 days, 59 people died in the expedition team, accounting for 1/3 of the total loss. This did not count the unlucky ones who were missing limbs. At this time, another member of the expedition team happened to enter the tavern. This expedition member was unlucky, because his left leg was bitten off by a crocodile. "Hey, Jose, you're here too. Look, this is my companion, the unlucky Jose. He had his left leg bitten off by a crocodile during the expedition. We all managed to get him back from the crocodile's mouth with great difficulty." People surrounded Jose, looked at the bitten left leg, and exclaimed, "Don't talk about that, gentlemen, who can buy me a drink? It's just right that I can share with you my inner thoughts when the crocodile bit my left leg. Okay, we'll treat you. Bartender, serve Mr. Jose a drink." After taking a big sip of beer, Jose smiled and said, "I tell you, when my left leg was bitten by the crocodile, I was so scared that I couldn't think or speak. But then my left leg made a crack sound because of the crocodile's bite, and then a huge pain came. I knew my left leg was finished. But this also stimulated me to wake up from the state of complete confusion. I began to struggle and call for help. My companion stabbed the crocodile with spears, but unfortunately the crocodile's skin was too thick and it had no effect. It was not until Anders stabbed the crocodile's eyes with a spear that the terrible crocodile was forced to retreat." "Oh," everyone exclaimed in amazement. The same story was played out in more than a dozen bars in Lisbon. Because these more than 50 Portuguese explorers have received the bounty and are ready to go home. Before going home, they went to the bar and cheated a lot of wine by telling their adventure stories. Chapter 1859, Territory Attacked. Marin naturally knew about the return of the expedition team at the first time. Because, on the day the fleet arrived at the port of Lisbon, the spies of the North Sea Kingdom of Portugal sent the news back by pigeon. In the following days, the pigeons were basically released once a day to report the situation of the day. "Have you started to promote in Portugal?" "Very good." Marin smiled, which was exactly what he wanted to see. For Marin, the main threats to his colonization of America were Portugal, Spain and France. But France is currently being suppressed by England and Spain, and its warships cannot go to sea, so it can only be regarded as a hidden threat, not yet. Only Portugal and Spain have both strong national strength and strong navigation capabilities to compete with Marin for America. Therefore, the first targets of Marin's scare are Portugal and Spain. Because the expedition team returned via the Azores, it naturally stopped at the port of Lisbon first, and then went to Spain, the second threat to Marin's colonization of America. In fact, the retaliation against the Silva family's territory has begun, and the news has reached Lisbon. But when the expedition passed the Azores, the revenge against the Silva family's territory had not yet begun, so Rui Silva warmly entertained the expedition's ship in Angra dos Heroes. Seeing that there was no valuable cargo on the expedition's ship, he didn't have any plans. Although the rare animals captured by the fleet were indeed precious, it was a pity that these things were unique to the savage continent. Even if he robbed them, he couldn't sell them, so he naturally didn't have any plans. But he didn't know that while he was entertaining the expedition, his own hometown was turned upside down. The Silva barony near Braganza City was simply terrible during this period. Because many terrible things happened in the territory during this period. First, a batch of corks weighing thousands of pounds were robbed, and then the entire territory was attacked in various ways. The famous winery in the Silva territory was attacked by thugs late at night. The aging oak barrels were all chiseled with sharp chisels by the thugs, and the fragrant wine flowed out of the barrels and flowed all over the ground. When the winery workers came to work the next morning, they were horrified to find that the entire underground storage room of the winery was filled with fragrant wine, and it was still overflowing. The experienced winery manager reported to the territory stewardess, and the old stewardess hurriedly mobilized a dozen private soldiers in the territory to investigate, but found nothing. In order to track these thugs, stewardess even dispatched experienced hunters and hounds to smell the smell. Unfortunately, these thugs were professional. They scattered two things along the way, scaring the hounds half to death. They used the feces powder of the African Barbary lion to sprinkle on the land, scaring the local hounds so much that they dared not come forward. You know, animals have the habit of marking their territory with feces. And lions, as fierce beasts, often hunt various animals, including dogs. Before these canines die, they often emit a special smell out of fear, which humans cannot smell, but dogs have a sharp nose and can smell. Therefore, many butchers who kill dogs are covered with the despair and death smell left by the dogs when they are killed because of fear. When dogs smell this smell, they will be scared and dare not move. Obviously, lions also have a lot of this smell, and their feces are also mixed with this smell. The Barbary lion is a lion unique to North Africa. It often approaches the pastures of Arabs and Berbers, and eats a lot of dogs. It often eats some dogs, cousins, wolves. Their feces naturally have the smell of despair and fear of canine creatures. Marin knew this principle, so he specially sent people to sneak into the Moroccan area and bought some dry feces used by Barbary lions to mark their territory from experienced mountain people. He made it into powder and mixed it with some fur and bone powder of slaughtered dogs, which became something that made dogs very scared. As long as it is sprinkled in the place where the dog passes, it can scare the dog to stop. Either it is trembling with fear, or it is hesitant and dare not move forward. It is useless for the owner to beat and scold. Therefore, after the local hounds smelled the scent of the Barbary lion and the breath of death of their own kind or even their cousin, they refused to move forward. In this way, the pursuit could not go on. Then, the hunters could only judge based on the footprints. But when they reached the river, the footprints disappeared. It turned out that there was a small boat to pick them up and took the people away. The dogs were scared, and the hunters could not find the footprints, so the pursuit could not go on. Therefore, Butler Rice could only get angry, and then issued a reward, and then there was no follow-up. But the matter was not over. A few days later, a fire broke out in the straw hut area where the lumberyard of Baron Silva was stacked with wood. Tens of thousands of logs in the lumberyard were burned to ashes by a fire, leaving only a small part of them. You know, most of these tens of thousands of logs are oak, which are specially placed in the straw hut to dry. Once dried for a year or two, these logs will be transported to the shipyard to make ships. Therefore, the lumberyard has stockpiled so much wood. But it was burned by a fire. Puff, Butler Rice was so angry that he spit out a mouthful of blood and fainted. Then, Butler Rice became sick and had to lie down to recuperate. But just after a few days of recuperation, his condition began to improve, and then bad news came again. Several cattle farms in the Baron's territory that belonged to the Baron were invaded by unknown people. These unknown people put poison in the cattle feed, blocking several cattle farms with a total of thousands of cattle heads. These poisoned cattle, because the blood was soaked with toxins, even the meat could not be eaten. Unlike those cattle that died of normal causes or were killed, beef can still be used for eating. It's over. It's over. If the Baron knows, he will beat me to death. Old Rice began to fear in his heart. Roy Silva's own sister can be given away as a gift. He is already unkind and ungrateful, so how can he care about a butler? So, Old Rice began to be afraid. But fear is useless. As a servant of the Silva family, the life and death of Butler Rice's family is in the hands of Baron Silva Roy. Therefore, even though he was extremely frightened, he could only send people to investigate everywhere. At the same time, he sent people to report the case to the government and asked the government to send people to investigate the case. After thinking again and again, Butler Rice finally sighed, wrote a letter, and sent someone to Lisbon. Then, when there is a ship to the Azores, he will bring it to Roy Silva. As for how Roy Silva will be angry after knowing it, and how to deal with him, it can only be left to fate and God's mood. In Lisbon, many nobles have received this news. They began to speculate that this was probably the counterattack of the North Sea Kingdom. But it was none of their business, and they were too lazy to get involved in Marin's actions against the Silva family at this time. Moreover, the nobles in Lisbon did not look down on the Silva family, so they were naturally happy to watch the joke. Only Roy Silva's sister Stella Silva cried in front of Manuel I, hoping that Manuel I could help the family to avenge. But Manuel I was in a dilemma. Roy Silva and Marin were both dishonorable. If he questioned Marin why he attacked the barony of Silva, then Roy Silva's sending people to pretend to be pirates to rob the North Sea transport ship would be exposed. This would be a fatal blow to the Silva family. Moreover, Marin was very measured in his actions. Although many people could guess that it was Marin's handiwork. However, if you don't have evidence, Marin can completely deny it. So, in the end, Manuel I had no choice but to let it go. Chapter 1860, he was scared. However, as a monarch, it is not okay to have no solution at all, which will undermine the king's majesty. Therefore, Manuel I planned to suppress the zoo opened by the North Sea Kingdom to warn Marin and prevent him from going too far. But before Manuel I had time to do it, the zoo planned to leave Lisbon and go to the Spanish port of Seville to hold an exhibition of wild continent animals. Seville is not a seaport, but it is one of the most important ports in Spain and the only inland port in Spain. As mentioned before, in this era, due to the threat of shipworms, most ports are located in the freshwater area at the estuary. Of course, there are also inland ports located inside the river. For example, Bremen is one of the most important inland ports in this era. Seville is 120 kilometers away from Cadiz, the outlet of the Guadalquivir River, which is twice as far away as Bremen's 60 kilometers from the North Sea. But because inland ports are not afraid of shipworms and are not affected by pirates and Atlantic storms, the port of Seville is currently one of Spain's most important foreign ports. Moreover, Seville was the capital of the Ivrea dynasty of the Kingdom of Castile as early as the 13th century, so it developed earlier and became an important inland port city early on. At this time, the port of Cadiz was just a seaside entrepot serving Seville. Its status is similar to that of Cuxhaven in Hamburg. It was not until the 18th century that the inland river silted up and it was difficult to carry large ships. The port of Seville began to decline, and Spain's foreign port was transferred from the port of Seville to the port of Cadiz. Therefore, Marin decided to go to Spain at the port of Seville. Moreover, someone had already gone there and built a large glass greenhouse in the port of Seville to supply the lives of those tropical creatures. During the transportation process, the ship was filled with charcoal stoves and charcoal fires were burned to keep those tropical animals warm. On the Spanish side, the enthusiasm for these wild animals from the wild continent was also very high, and they came from afar to visit. It is said that in order to visit these ferocious overseas creatures, the official road from Toledo to Seville was blocked by carriages. Unfortunately, there were no traffic rules in this era, and no traffic police came to clear the way. Therefore, the traffic jam lasted for 2 whole days, causing many nobles to starve on the way. In Seville, the Spanish nobles were also fortunate to see the horrific process of how piranhas dismembered a pig, and many Spanish ladies were scared to scream like pigs being slaughtered. But the strange thing is that while those ladies screamed in fear, they watched the bloody scene excitedly, which was similar to the virtues of those women in later generations who were afraid but liked to watch horror movies. In Seville, the expedition team finally used the killer move, cannibals. These 20 cannibal natives were originally locked in cages. In Lisbon, they were not released. Because at that time, those people were not used to the sailing process, vomiting and diarrhea, and they had no energy at all. When they arrived in Seville, these barbaric cannibals had basically adapted to the climate here. At this time, according to Marin's plan and design, 20 cannibals from different tribes were starved for 2 days. Then, 7 strong men from one tribe were deliberately put together. Then, a young man from another tribe who was dizzy with hunger was thrown into the designated area. Huh? What do you mean? Don't give us food, send us young people from other tribes. The 7 cannibals from the same tribe were stunned for a moment, and then suddenly their eyes turned red, and they pounced on the unlucky outsider fiercely. Coincidentally, they had stone weapons that they shared in their hands. Originally, if there was enough food, they could still restrain their inner wildness and not eat people. Unfortunately, Marin starved them for 2 days like an eagle. At this time, they were already so hungry that their eyes turned green, and they couldn't bear to see edible things the most. So, the unlucky unarmed young man from the outsider, under the gaze of the visiting crowd, was quickly rushed forward by 7 strong men from the same tribe, and killed the unlucky guy in the glass greenhouse in front of many onlookers. Then, several cannibals from the same tribe, as if they were killing pigs, cleaned the young men from other tribes, chopped off their thighs with stone axes, skewered one of them with sticks, and started roasting it over the fire. Ugh, many nobles, both men and women, who were visiting the scene, began to vomit. Some noble women were so scared that they kept screaming, and the scene was once chaotic and out of control. Fortunately, the Seville city guard arrived in time and rushed into the greenhouse to stop the cannibals. But when Ching Jun arrived, the first leg roasted had already been eaten by the natives. Then, a terrible legend spread in Europe. It turned out that the existence of cannibals was no longer a legend, but was actually shown to everyone. In front of many spectators, this group of natives killed people and roasted and ate them as if no one was around, which absolutely shocked the Spanish nobles who were watching. Then, 2 more problems occurred, resulting in only 12 people left out of the 20 Indian natives. The other 8 were either eaten or seriously injured in the fight, and then died because of ineffective medical treatment. This time, people really realized that cannibals really exist, and it is not just a legend. Then, this matter quickly fermented and spread throughout Spain and even the entire Iberian Peninsula. Many people came to visit and wanted to see how cannibals eat people. However, the zoo did not show it. Because the previous accidents were also specially arranged by the zoo. Moreover, when someone was eaten, they also shirked that it was a mistake, but they dared not say that it was deliberately arranged. Now, the only 12 cannibal savages left are all from the same tribe. It seems difficult to want them to kill each other and kill their opponents for meat. After all, cannibals generally do not have the habit of eating their own people. Even if Marin wants to perform, these cannibals of the same tribe are afraid that they will not eat their companions again. Unless new cannibals are sent over. And Marin is not worried about this. Because he really has the source of cannibals. This source does not need to go deep into the Amazon jungle, but can be obtained in the Caribbean Sea. Caribs, a terrible nation active in the Caribbean Sea. They are also cannibals. Although not every tribe of Caribbeans eats people, many Caribbean tribes have the tradition of cannibalism. Just like Grenada Island, it was once besieged by Caribbean cannibals. Therefore, it is relatively easy to capture some Caribbean cannibals from different tribes, much easier than capturing crocodiles and jaguars. However, Marin does not need too many cannibals. After performing in Spain, the expedition team will go to France to perform and scare the French. But it is undeniable that at the moment, the Spaniards are all scared by the horror of the cannibals, and they are scared a lot. Chapter 1861, The Pearl River Estuary. At the same time, about 70 survivors of Spanish adventurers who returned from the Amazon jungle also began to brag about their adventures in large and small taverns in Spain, and cheated for drinks. In order to show their bravery, these survivors deliberately exaggerated their adventures in the Amazon jungle, exaggerating the dangers of the Amazon jungle several times, which made people tremble with fear. One of the adventurers named Rodrigo even claimed that most of the natives of the savage continent were cannibals, and only a small number of them, like the Taino people on Hispaniola, did not eat people. But there are many syphilis patients on Hispaniola, so, the savage continent is really terrible. This concept was actually deliberately promoted to those adventurers by the leaders of the North Sea Kingdom of the expedition team. Most of the surviving adventurers were bombarded with this theory every day on their way back, and coupled with the fear of the Amazon jungle, they couldn't help but believe this conclusion. After all, they saw the horror of the cannibals with their own eyes. Therefore, when they came back to brag, they also unconsciously promoted the view that most of the indigenous people in the savage continent are cannibals. Later, taking advantage of this heat, Marin took the opportunity to send his men to apply to the Holy See, requesting that the Indian native tribes with the bad habit of cannibalism be declared as God-abandoned tribes, which means hopeless barbarians abandoned by God. To deal with this kind of God abandoned, with the bad habit of cannibalism, Marin asked the Holy See to authorize the Kingdom of America to take violent measures against them. Pope Julius II was originally Marin's father-in-law. What objections could he raise to the request of the North Sea Kingdom? Moreover, Julius II did not think that the bad natives with the habit of cannibalism could be saved. After all, God does not forgive criminals. Therefore, Julius II publicly approved the request of the North Sea Kingdom and treated those cannibals as murderers. Of course, try not to do anything to women and children. Unless it can be proved that they have eaten people. Why did Marin do this meaningless thing? In fact, it is still to promote the horror of America. He wanted to make the concept of cannibalism deeply rooted in the hearts of Europeans. In this way, no adventurer would dare to venture to America to cause trouble. Before annexing and digesting England, the North Sea Kingdom did not have the ability to resist other countries coveting America. Therefore, it could only use intimidation as much as possible to stop those adventurers. There is no way. Although the North Sea Kingdom has a sea, it is actually just by the sea. The real coastal ethnic group is only more than 100,000 Frisians, and there are only 30,000 or 40,000 able-bodied men. Only 10,000 or 20,000 can be recruited. If you want to fight against the Spanish and Portuguese countries with a population of millions and a seafaring population of hundreds of thousands, you may be able to win 1 or 2 naval battles, but it is difficult to block their way to America. Because they face the Atlantic Ocean. In desperation, Marin can only pin his hopes on England. Although England's population is only about the same as Portugal, it is surrounded by the sea on 3 sides, so the country's seafaring population is not small, and there are also hundreds of thousands. Although it is temporarily smaller than Portugal's sailing scale, the size is also very large. The most important thing is that the potential is huge. But if you want to annex England, you will first anger France. Let's think about how to withstand the French wave. Marin sighed and began to study how to resist the possible joint attack of France and the Prince's alliance. At this time, in the Far East, after several months of sailing, the fleet of 30 Portuguese warships led by Gama finally arrived at the mouth of the Pearl River. Is this the Ming Empire? Gama climbed up the stern, put his hands on the pergola, and looked into the distance. There was no way, the Portuguese did not have a telescope, so they could only use the traditional way of climbing high to look far. Coincidentally, what Gama was looking at this time was exactly the Hong Kong island of later generations. However, the prosperous Hong Kong island in later generations was now desolate, with only a few dilapidated fishing villages, and the island was basically not developed. Gama curled his lips and said, "It's not that great, not as prosperous as the coastal towns in Portugal." At this time, Bernardo, the translator who had learned some Chinese in Southeast Asia, smiled and said, "Sir, I heard that this is a desolate island at the mouth of the Pearl River, which seems to be the territory of Xianan County. Guangzhou, the most prosperous city in the Ming dynasty, is more than 200 miles away from here, which means more than 20 leagues. More than 20 leagues? So far." Gama was surprised. Bernardo continued, "I heard from the Ming people in Malacca that the Ming dynasty is very large. From Guangzhou to their capital, Jingshi, it is more than 4,000 miles, which is about 300 to 400 leagues. Moreover, it is said that Jingshi is not the northernmost part of the Ming dynasty. Their east-west distance is as far as the north-south distance. Oh, God, what a big country this is. I am beginning to look forward to the profits after opening up the market of this country. The Gama smiled. Sir, the Ming kingdom is not comparable to those small countries, so you still have to be careful. The Gama nodded, but still said confidently, I understand what you mean. If it's on land, Portugal may not be the opponent of this country. But if it's on the sea, let's look at the power of our great kingdom of Portugal. Set off and head directly to Guangzhou port. 30 Portuguese warships, divided into 2 rows, lined up in a long snake formation, sailed into the mouth of the Pearl River. The fleet bypassed Lantau Island in the west and headed north, causing panic among the fishermen at the mouth of the Pearl River. They rowed back to the land, and their panicked appearance made the Portuguese sailors laugh. However, the Portuguese sailors did not bombard the fishing boats. Because they came from afar, they brought limited gunpowder and could not waste it on it. They must use it for battle first. However, they did not know that after Chen Anu, a fisherman from Xianan County, rowed back to the shore, he immediately put on his straw sandals and ran all the way to the Xianan County Tun Mun inspection office, shouting, "Oh no, sir, there are dozens of foreign ships coming from the sea, and there are many yellow-haired foreigners on the ships. They look unfriendly." Tang Quan, an inspector of the Tun Mun inspection office, saw the panicked Chen Anu and said unhappily, "Heoni Lamu, Chen Anu, you bastard. Sir, it's true, if you don't believe me, go and see the Western Ocean yourself." Before Tang Quan climbed up, the patrol soldier Li Fu on the sentry tower shouted, "Sir, there are 30 unidentified foreign ships on the Western Ocean, and each one is very large. Moreover, there may be copper cannons on the ship. I saw the reflection of the copper cannons on the ship." Copper cannons? Tang Quan was shocked, and then roared, "Li Fu, you bastard, did you really see the copper cannons?" Li Fu affirmed, "That's right. When I went to Weiyuan Fort to play with my cousin, I saw the bronze cannons over there. From a distance, the sunlight reflected a golden light. Oh no! Something big has happened. Nyo Dali, get out here. Hey, here they come." Nyo Dali, the messenger of the Tun Mun inspection office, ran out of the camp. "Quick, ride on your horse, hurry up, and go to Weiyuan Fort east of Human to report that there are 30 large barbarian ships coming with ill intentions. Ask them to prepare for war." Understood. The messenger Nyo Dali immediately ran to the inspection station stable, led out a pony, quickly jumped on the horse, and rushed out at full speed, heading north. Chapter 1862, The Battle of Human, Part 1. Although Nyo Dali's name sounds quite majestic, he is actually a short and thin man, less than 165 centimeters tall. Of course, in the Ming dynasty at that time, this was the general height of southerners. There is no way. The south is said to be a land of fish and rice, but in fact, the ancient people were jealous of the lack of oil and water, let alone meat. Hereditary guards like Nyo Dali were deducted from their food and blood by the generals above all day long. It was good enough to be full, and dared to ask for nutrition. Therefore, it was normal to grow this height. Nyo Dali, who was not tall, was quite a match when riding on the back of the equally short southern horse. There was only one horse in the entire Tun Mun inspection station. When he was free, the inspector Tang Quan rode out to patrol and show off. When there was an emergency, Nyo Dali, the messenger, rode out to ask for help. Tun Mun was not far from Human, and the straight line distance was only 40 or 50 miles, but because Nyo Dali had to go northeast to Shenzhen in the future, and then turn to the Weiyuan Fort in the northwest, he had to run more than 60 miles. But because it was urgent, Nyo Dali changed horses at the post station along the way. It took less than 2 hours to run to the gate of Weiyuan Fort, and shouted, "Urgent report! Urgent report! 30 huge warships appeared in Lingdingyang, and there may be copper cannons on them." The soldiers of Weiyuan Fort saw Nyo Dali's clothes and the flag on his back, and knew that he was a messenger. They quickly opened the camp gate, welcomed Nyo Dali in, and had someone lead the horse to the stable to serve him. After seeing the urgent report written by Tang Quan in a hurry in the inspection official's seal on it, Lin Pingyun, the garrison of Human Fort, immediately ordered, Zhang Qianhu, Zhang Ku, the Qianhu of Weiyuan Fort, the specific commander of the fort, quickly release the pigeon to notify Lu Feng, the commander of Dingyuan Fort, on the other side, and let him raise the sun and moon flags to prepare for battle. Although the two forts were only 4.6 kilometers apart, that is, more than 9 miles. However, if a small boat was sent to notify, it might be too late. After all, the boat was very slow. Therefore, Lin Pingyun, the chief garrison officer of the Weiyuan and Dingyuan forts, directly adopted the fastest way to give orders, releasing pigeons. At the same time, Lin Pingyun also ordered to release pigeons to Guangzhou for emergency. Because this fleet was obviously heading for Guangzhou city. Dong 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 dash, the dull sound of war drums sounded, and all the soldiers in the east and west forts of Human Fort stopped all their actions, ran back to the barracks, put on their battle uniforms, packed up their waist knives and spears and other weapons, and entered the battle position. At the same time, both forts raised the Sun and Moon battle flag. The so-called Sun and Moon battle flag is actually a big flag with the word Ming written on it. Ming is the name of the Ming dynasty, indicating the nature and identity of the army. Because the word Ming is the sun on the left and the moon on the right, it is also called the Sun and Moon flag. Subsequently, Wei Yuan Fort raised two flags at the same time: Lin, the garrison officer of the Human Fort of the Ming dynasty, and Zhang, the thousand householder of the Human Fort of the Ming dynasty. And the Dingyuan Fort across the river raised Lu, the thousand householder of the Dingyuan Fort of the Ming dynasty. Of course, the official titles in front are all in small characters, while the surnames in the back are in large characters. After the flag was raised, amid the dull sound of drums, the Ming army soldiers who had finished dressing all entered the designated positions and carried the cloth bags filled with gunpowder to the designated positions. Originally, the containers for the Ming army soldiers to hold gunpowder were gunpowder pots made of ox horns, which had a very small volume. But after visiting the Ming dynasty, Ma Lin taught the technology of rice soup granulated gunpowder and oil paper bags for fixed gunpowder. This technology was first promoted in the Human Fort, which used advanced 12-pound cannons. Therefore, the cotton bags carried by the soldiers were filled with bags of fixed gunpowder. Because oil paper bags are not afraid of water, there is no need to worry about cotton bags getting damp. Of course, cotton bags cannot be soaked in water. As for why cotton bags are used instead of sacks, it is because sacks are rough and easy to generate static electricity due to friction. Cotton cloth is relatively soft and not easy to generate static electricity. Then, the soldiers of the fort opened some large boxes filled with iron ball shells cast one by sand casting. The Portuguese fleet arrived late only when the Ming army of Human Fort was fully prepared. There was no way. The wind was not strong in the Lingdingyang at the mouth of the Pearl River. The speed of de Gama's fleet was only 4 knots, which was about 7.4 kilometers per hour. The Portuguese fleet sailed for several hours for a journey of dozens of kilometers. The Portuguese fleet arrived late only when the Ming army had lunch. "Sir, the People's fleet is coming." The observation sentry on the observation tower of Wei Yuan Fort shouted. Lin Pingyuan, the garrison of Human Fort, immediately climbed up the observation tower, put his hands on the pergola, and looked at the river. This ship type looks like a ship from the Northwest Sea Kingdom of Thailand. Could it be the North Sea Kingdom? Lin Pingyuan frowned. But he quickly overturned his judgment, because the court now clearly stipulated that the North Sea Kingdom generally went through the 3 major ports of Chuanzhou, Fuzhou and Ningbo, and it was unlikely to come to Guangzhou. Moreover, the engineer of the North Sea Kingdom, Hadover, who helped build the fort, once told him that the warships of the North Sea Kingdom would never easily enter or leave the Pearl River estuary without the approval of the court. And Lin Pingyuan had not received any notification from the court about the entry and exit of tribute ships, so these ships were obviously ill-intentioned. Moreover, even if it was a tribute, there was no need to come with 30 ships. In addition, when looking out, Lin Pingyuan also saw the golden light reflected from the copper cannons on the enemy's ship. "It's a warship, right? The 2 cannons A and B will fire warning shots," Lin Pingyuan ordered loudly. The 10 cannons of the Wei Yuan Fort were all numbered with A, B, C, D, E, J, G, S, R, and G for easy command. At this time, the standard procedure, provided by the engineer of the North Sea Kingdom, Hadover, was to fire a warning shot first when encountering a ship of unknown origin. If the other party had no ill intentions, they would definitely stop and then send a small boat to negotiate with the fort. If they had no good intentions, they would often force their way in. The Portuguese were stunned, and de Gama looked at the Wei Yuan Fort in confusion. "What's going on? How can there be cannons here?" De Gama was a little confused. It seems that the Ming dynasty merchants in Malacca did not provide this information. How could he know that the Ming dynasty smugglers stationed in Malacca port had not returned to the Ming dynasty for several months, and he did not know that 2 forts had been built at the mouth of the Pearl River? The Portuguese fleet paused for a while, but after hesitating for a while, de Gama still ordered, "Keep going. The other side has only 2 cannons, don't pay attention. At most, we can fire back at this cannon fort." However, de Gama did not know that the cannons of the Wei Yuan and Dingyuan forts were hidden inside the stone buildings. Without a telescope, you can't see how many cannons there are from a distance. Obviously, de Gama did not see the specific situation in the 2 forts, but judged that there were only 2 cannons in the fort based on the sound of the cannons. So, he arrogantly ordered the fleet to continue moving forward. Moreover, he planned to use the cannons on the ship to bombard the 2 cannons of the fort. Chapter 1863, The Battle of Human, Part 2, because it was a warning, the Ming Army's Wei Yuan Fort's A and B-type cannons did not use full charge or iron ball shells when firing, but used a little stone to deal with it. As a result, the 2 cannons were not powerful enough when they fired. In the ears of the experienced de Gama, these 2 cannons were 5, or 6-pound cannons, similar to the 6-pound cannons commonly used on Portuguese warships, and could not catch up with the main 12-pound cannons of Portugal. It was based on such a wrong judgment, coupled with the fact that the Ming army's cannons were huddled in the stone fortress, and the Gama did not have a telescope to look closely, so a serious misjudgment was made. Hey, I didn't expect this country to have a cannon fortress. However, the power is a bit low. The Gama joked confidently. Then he order the Viso and Braga to approach and use the cannons on the ship to teach the Ming people's small cannon fortress a lesson, let the other side see how powerful we are. The Viso and Braga are both main battleships in the fleet, with a displacement of more than 200 tons, and are Carrack sailing ships. Each ship was equipped with 2 12-pound guns, 6 6-pound guns, and 10 3-pound guns. Except for the 12-pound gun, which was a front-loading gun, the 6-pound gun and the 3-pound gun were rear-loading Portuguese guns. Even for the broadside salvo, there were 3 6-pound guns and 5 3-pound guns on each side, plus 2 12-pound guns at the bow and stern. Under the command of the loud sailor's roar, the two main battleships, Viso and Braga, approached slowly, intending to teach the Ming army a lesson with cannonballs. However, when firing, the cannonballs used by the Portuguese were mostly stone bullets. There was no way, now the whole of Europe was almost popular with stone cannonballs, and only the wealthy North Sea kingdom vigorously promoted iron ball cannonballs. The reason for this was that the steel production in Europe was too low in this era. Europe only entered the stage of furnace smelting pig iron ingots from block iron smelting a few decades ago, and the steel production was quite low. The output of a Crumhorn steel plant in the North Sea kingdom was actually comparable to that of the entire Portugal. There is no way. Portugal is geographically remote in Europe, and its mineral resources are extremely poor. It is precisely because of the lack of mineral resources that Portugal is forced to vigorously develop maritime trade. If there is no foreign trade, Portugal probably does not even have iron to make weapons and armor. Therefore, in the case of scarce metal resources, the Portuguese cannons can only use stone bullets. In fact, not only Portugal, but even a very rich country like Venice generally uses stone ball shells. There is no other reason. The countries along the Mediterranean coast of Europe, especially several countries in the southwest, have very poor mineral resources and expensive steel prices. The Ming dynasty was different. The national steel production reached more than 100,000 tons, and the price of a pound of pig iron was only a dozen coins. Therefore, the shells of the human fort can all be iron ball shells, while Portugal can only use stone shells because of the lack of mineral resources. This situation continued in Europe until the late Henry VIII, that is, the mid-16th century. It was not until later with the rapid advancement of steel technology and the advancement of shipbuilding technology that ships became more and more solid, and stone bullets were difficult to damage the hull, so they had to be fully upgraded to iron ball shells. Come closer, come closer. Let those Ming people often see the power of our great Portuguese cannons. The captains of the two warships shouted carelessly on the deck, as if they were sure of victory. Seeing the two Portuguese ships approaching, Lin Pingan, the garrison commander of Human Fort, was a little confused. Did I make a wrong judgment? These two ships came to negotiate. But when they got closer, he found that the sailors on the two ships began to aim at the fort with copper cannons, and Lin Pingan gave up. At this time, Lin Shobei loudly ordered, "Soldiers, listen to the order, load the gunpowder and teach these barbarians a profound lesson." Then, Lin Shobei turned around and ordered loudly, "Watchtower, light the wolf smoke to warn." Since it was determined that the newcomers were not good, it was natural to light the wolf smoke to warn, so that the nearby Ming army would be aware of the danger. Afterwards, the Ming army gunners in front of the cannons began to tear open the oil paper bags, pour the gunpowder in the oil paper bags into the muzzles, and poke them inside with thick wooden sticks. Then, he stuffed the 10 Jean, 12-pound, iron ball shells in the wooden box into the muzzle and poked them into the bottom of the barrel. At the same time, another artilleryman took out a cut fuse from his briefcase and inserted it into the fire transmission hole at the end of the barrel. At this time, the arrogant Portuguese warship was only more than 300 meters away from the fort, which was the effective range of the Portuguese cannon. And this distance happened to be the best range for flat shooting. The foreign ship is so arrogant. Lin Shobei curled his lips after seeing it from the observation hole. At this time, all 10 12-pound cannons of Weiyuan Fort were ready. The gunner of each gun reported loudly, "Report, the A-type gun has been loaded, please show me." "Report, the B-type gun has been loaded, please show me." "Report, the C-type gun has been loaded, please show me." "Report, the D-type gun has been loaded, please show me." With a series of reports from the gunners, all 10 12-pound cannons were loaded. Lin Pingan nodded to Zhang Ku, the commander of Weiyuan Fort, who immediately shouted, "All gun positions, ignite at the same time." "Yes, ignite the Type A guns." "Yes, ignite the Type B guns." After a series of shouts, the 10 gunners responsible for ignition, holding wooden sticks tied with tinder, stretched the burning tinder to the fuse. After a burst of hissing, burning sounds, the 10 12-pound guns made boom 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 boom. Explosions in a very short period of time. Then, 10 10-gene iron balls whizzed out of the 10 guns and smashed fiercely at the 2 Portuguese warships a few hundred meters away. No, I misjudged it. Seeing the 10 flames spewing out of the Ming army fortress on the shore, before the sound came, the Gama, who was standing on the stern watching the battle a few kilometers away, changed his face. But what made his face even more exciting was yet to come. As the sound came later, the Gama realized a serious problem. The caliber of the artillery in the Ming army fortress was larger than he had imagined, and it might have the power of the main gun on the bow of the Portuguese warship. How could the Ming people have such powerful artillery? The Gama frowned, which was inconsistent with the information he had learned from Malacca. According to the Ming dynasty smugglers in Malacca bribed by the Portuguese, the Ming dynasty originally had no cannons. A few years ago, the king of the North Sea, Marin, presented dozens of Portuguese cannons, but they fired small 2 or 3 pound shells. Even if the Ming people were equipped with artillery, it should not be a large caliber cannon like a 12-pound cannon, but the most common 2 or 3 pound cannon. Could it be that those Ming smugglers deceived me? Da Gama began to doubt. But the current situation has changed dramatically, and he can no longer think too much. Because the Viso and Braga suffered heavy blows. When the Ming army's artillery opened fire, the 2 12-pound main guns, 3 6-pound guns and 5 3-pound guns on the 2 warships also opened fire. However, because the closed turret designed by Marin only left a small firing hole, the turret was very safe. The Portuguese warships swayed left and right due to the recoil. As a result, the 20 stone bullets fired by the 10 Portuguese naval guns on each of the 2 Portuguese warships either hit the thick stone wall of the turret or simply did not hit the turret. On the contrary, the cannons of the Ming army turrets were absorbed by the stone platform because of the recoil, and the shooting and aiming were very stable. Although only 4 of the 10 iron ball shells hit the target in the end, it caused great damage to the Portuguese warships. A large hole was smashed in the stern of the Viso by a 12-pound iron ball, and a sailor inside was hit in the chest by the iron ball and died on the spot. This is still lucky. The Braga, which is closer to the Weiyuan fort and in a more correct position, is miserable. One of the 12-pound iron balls broke the foremast of the Braga, causing the foremast of the Braga to be broken on the spot. The other 2 shells were even more deadly. They hit the side of the Braga, opening 2 holes on the side of the Braga. Oh no, the side is leaking, the sailors on the Braga shouted in horror. Quick, plug the gap. Plug the gap. Captain Joao of the Braga shouted. But before the sailors on the Braga plugged the 2 holes, a few minutes later, the second round of shelling came again. The Braga was hit by 3 more iron ball shells, and more wounds were made. Captain Joao had no choice but to shout, raise the sails, leave this position. Just now, in order to facilitate aiming and shooting, the sailors of the Braga specially retracted the sails so that the warship could stop. But now, seeing that stopping means waiting to be sunk, Captain Joao had to order the sails to be raised. It was the right thing to drive the ship away quickly. At the same time, Captain Pereira of the Viso also ordered the ship to raise the sails and maneuver to avoid a head-on collision with the Weiyuan fort. Because he also saw that the firepower of the Ming dynasty's artillery was stronger than theirs. Chapter 1864, Mr. Sun's Deception. After escaping the firing range of the Weiyuan fort, the Braga and Viso approached the flagship Prince Henry where da Gama was. The 2 captains came to the flagship in a small boat angrily and complained loudly to da Gama. Sir, those Ming smugglers deceived us. At the beginning, they said that the Ming army at the mouth of the Pearl River was unprepared and only had a few ordinary small warships without artillery. But now, this artillery fortress alone has injured our 2 ships. Captain Pereira of the Viso complained. The most unlucky Captain Joao of the Braga frowned and said, Lord da Gama, the side of the Braga was seriously damaged by a shell. If it is not overhauled, it will easily sink once it encounters strong winds and waves in the deep sea. Please help me think of a way. The Braga must have an overhaul of its side. Da Gama was also helpless. How to overhaul? We don't have a port in Ming, and the ports of the Ming people will not let us dock. This is obviously impossible. If we return to Malacca port, I am afraid that the Braga will sink halfway. Captain Pereira interrupted, I want to know now, how many such artillery fortresses are there in Ming? If they are everywhere, we can't attack at all. I just looked, there seems to be a similar artillery fortress on the west bank of the estuary. I don't know how many guns there are and what the firepower is. Da Gama thought for a while and said, then I will send a few warships to test the firepower of the artillery fortress in the west. Then, 3 Portuguese warships approached the Dinuan fort on the west bank and fired test shots. However, out of caution, the 3 ships did not drop their sails and stop, but fired while sailing to avoid the bombardment. Lu Feng, the commander of the west bank artillery fort, also commanded the soldiers of the artillery fort to fight back. The Portuguese tested it out, and it also had 10 large-caliber artillery. Moreover, during this test, despite the maneuvering to avoid, the warship Setubal that went to test was also hit on the side by the iron ball shells and needed repairs. Where did the Ming dynasty get the large caliber artillery? I must find out. De Gama frowned. What he was most worried about was that there were many artillery fortresses like this in the Ming dynasty, so the Portuguese fleet would not dare to go deep into the Pearl River estuary and march to Guangzhou port. Sir, why don't we go ashore and capture a local noble to interrogate him and ask about the situation in Guangzhou? De Gama no longer believed the information provided by the Ming smugglers from Malacca port, so he also approved of this method. In his opinion, the local nobles must know some inside information. So, the entire Portuguese fleet withdrew and docked at a seaside fishing port in Nanlang Town, Xiangshan County, Zhongshan City in later generations, on the west coast in the south, and sent people ashore to surround the house of a wealthy family in Suiheng village. Is this the Sun family, the most powerful family here? Does he know the news in Guangzhou? Bernardo, the translator who knew Chinese, asked Wu Ren, a restaurant waiter who was captured from the town. The timid waiter Wu Ren nodded and said, "Yes, Lord Yi, this Sun family master Sun Wei is a Juren master who has been to Guangzhou city for many examinations and often attends literary gatherings. Therefore, the local who knows Guangzhou best is probably Master Sunday. Okay, come on, rush in and arrest that Master Sun." Bernardo waved his hand, and hundreds of Portuguese sailors brought big stones and smashed the door of the Sun family, and arrested and tied up all the Juren Sun Wei and his family who resisted stubbornly. After Bernardo captured the 6 members of Sun Juren's family, he ordered people to put knives on the necks of others, and then directly asked Sun Wei, "Mr. Sun, tell us what you know about Guangzhou. Otherwise, if my hands shake, your family will go to hell." Sun Wei was about 35 years old, handsome, and one of the only 2 Juren in Nanlang Town. However, another Juren in Nanlang Town had moved to Xiangshan County, and only he stayed in Suiheng village and was unfortunately caught by the Portuguese. Seeing the sword on the neck of his eldest son Sun Bin, Sun Wei was a little worried. As a scholar, he himself was not afraid. At most, he would die for the country. However, if all 6 members of his family fell into the hands of the enemy, that would be a problem. Ancient scholars emphasized family, country and the world, among which family should be ranked before country. Scholars bring honor to their ancestors, to put it bluntly, it is for the family. If his only son Sun Bin died, and he was finished, his family would be extinct. Or, I will make up a lie to fool these barbarians. After making up his mind, Sun Wei bowed and said, "Please spare my family, and I will tell you everything I know." Seeing that he was so sensible, Bernardo didn't waste any words and asked directly, "We want to know, like the 2 artillery fortresses on the left and right sides of the Pearl River estuary, how many are there near Guangzhou? How many artillery pieces are there? Are there such artillery fortresses in other places?" Sun Wei was shocked. As a scholar who often traveled between Guangzhou and Nanlang Town, he happened to know this situation. Because he had a classmate who happened to be a staff member in the Guangzhou government office and knew some inside information. According to his classmate, the court cast a total of 107 Pinglu cannons, this time, 50 of which were transported to Guangzhou to be used for city defense. Among them, the court built 2 artillery forts, Weiyuan and Dingyuan, at the mouth of the Pearl River. Later, the court built 2 artillery forts in Huanpu port outside Guangzhou to protect Guangzhou. As for the other 57, it seems that they were sent to Hujian's Chuanzhou and Fuzhou to build artillery forts. However, the artillery fort in Huanpu port is still under construction. Therefore, the artillery forts that were actually built and put into use are actually only the 2 artillery forts at the mouth of the Pearl River. However, this did not prevent Sun Wei from fooling the Portuguese. So, he cupped his hands and said to Bernardo, "Your Excellency, I happen to know some inside information about this matter. Tell me quickly." Bernardo said happily. "It's like this. I'm in Guangzhou city. I heard that the court has cast a new type of Pinglu cannon that can fire 10 Jin shells. A total of 214 guns have been cast. Sun Wei doubled the number to scare the Portuguese and make them dare not attack Guangzhou. 214 guns. Oh my God, so many." Bernardo was shocked. Yes, it is said that these 214 Pinglu cannons are used to deploy in Guangdong and Fujian provinces for coastal defense. Among them, there are 107 guns in Guangzhou, which are used to build 10 artillery positions, and the remaining 7 guns are deployed on the top of Guangzhou city. Bernardo's face changed, 107 12-pound guns, more than the 12-pound main guns of the entire fleet. Moreover, they are deployed in 10 artillery forts. This is terrible. So Bernardo hurriedly reported the situation to de Gama. De Gama was a little skeptical, so he asked, "Are you serious? Don't tell him." After learning about de Gama's suspicion from Bernardo, Sun Wei raised his hand and said with a righteous face, "Sun Wei, swear to heaven that if I tell even a single lie, I will go to hell after I die." Swear to heaven. Bernardo was also shocked. Bernardo was a Catholic. In his eyes, swearing to heaven was like swearing to God. Such a solemn oath must be correct. After all, in the eyes of Catholics, no one dares to joke with God. But he had no idea what was going on in Sun Wei's mind at that moment. As a Confucian, his chief classic, the Analects, has the saying, "The master does not speak of strange things." Although there were Confucian scholars who believed in gods and Buddhas in ancient China, most of them actually did not believe in ghosts and gods. The so-called swearing was just to deceive these foreigners. Anyway, since he did not believe in ghosts and gods, Sun Wei did not believe in hell, nor was he afraid of retribution. So, he just fooled around and saved his family's lives first. But he did not expect that the Portuguese respected heaven too much, and Bernardo also mistakenly confused heaven with God when learning Chinese. So, he actually believed Sun Wei's oath. The Gama did not doubt him, and he also believed that no one dared to joke with God casually. So, both of them believed Sun Wei's oath, thinking that Guangzhou port was well prepared. So, the Gama gave up the plan to force his way through the blockade of the fort and marched to Huangpu port to plunder. Before leaving Nanlang town, the Gama forced local carpenters to find a lot of wood to repair the side of the damaged warship. Before leaving, the Portuguese colonists also looted the gold, silver and food of many families on the shore, including the money and food of Sun Wei's family. But Mr. Sun didn't care at all. More than half of the 800 acres of paddy fields in Suiheng village were donated to him. As long as the person is still there, the more than 400 acres of paddy fields under his name will make the Sun family rich again in a few years. Besides, the 300 taels of silver in his own secret room have not been found by these foreigners. Chapter 1865 Pirate Mode. After escaping the firing range of the Weiyuan fort, the Braga and Viso approached the flagship Prince Henry where the Gama was. The two captains came to the flagship in a small boat angrily and complained loudly to the Gama. "My lord, those Ming smugglers deceived us. At the beginning, they said that the Ming army at the mouth of the Pearl River was unprepared and only had a few ordinary small warships without artillery. But now, this artillery fortress alone has injured our two ships." Captain Pereira of the Viso complained. The most unlucky Captain Joao of the Braga frowned and said, "Lord de Gama, the side of the Braga was seriously damaged by a shell. If it is not overhauled, it will easily sink once it encounters strong winds and waves in the deep sea. Please help me think of a way. The Braga must have an overhaul of its side." The Gama was also helpless. How to overhaul? "We don't have a port in Ming, and the ports of the Ming people will not let us dock. This is obviously impossible. If we return to Malacca port, I am afraid that the Braga will sink halfway." Captain Pereira interrupted, "I want to know now, how many such artillery fortresses are there in Ming? If they are everywhere, we can't attack at all. I just looked, there seems to be a similar artillery fortress on the west bank of the estuary. I don't know how many guns there are and what the firepower is." The Gama thought for a while and said, "Then I will send a few warships to test the firepower of the artillery fortress in the west." Then, 3 Portuguese warships approached the Dinyuan fort on the west bank and fired test shots. However, out of caution, the 3 ships did not drop their sails and stop, but fired while sailing to avoid the bombardment. Lu Feng, the commander of the west bank artillery fort, also commanded the soldiers of the artillery fort to fight back. The Portuguese tested it out, and it also had 10 large-caliber artillery. Moreover, during this test, despite the maneuvering to avoid, the warship Setubal that went to test was also hit on the side by the iron ball shells and needed repairs. Where did the Ming dynasty get the large-caliber artillery? I must find out. The Gama frowned. What he was most worried about was that there were many artillery fortresses like this in the Ming dynasty, so the Portuguese fleet would not dare to go deep into the Pearl River estuary and march to Guangzhou port. "Sir, why don't we go ashore and capture a local noble to interrogate him and ask about the situation in Guangzhou?" The Gama no longer believed the information provided by the Ming smugglers from Malacca port, so he also approved of this method. In his opinion, the local nobles must know some inside information. So, the entire Portuguese fleet withdrew and docked at a seaside fishing port in Nanlang town, Xiangshan County, Zhongshan City in later generations, on the west coast in the south, and sent people ashore to surround the house of a wealthy family in Suiheng village. Is this the Sun family, the most powerful family here? Does he know the news in Guangzhou? Bernardo, the translator who knew Chinese, asked Wu Ren, a restaurant waiter who was captured from the town. The timid waiter Wu Ren nodded and said, "Yes, Lord Yi, this Sun family master Sun Wei is a Juren master who has been to Guangzhou city for many examinations and often attends literary gatherings. Therefore, the local who knows Guangzhou best is probably Master Sunday. Okay, come on, rush in and arrest that Master Sun." Bernardo waved his hand, and hundreds of Portuguese sailors brought big stones and smashed the door of the Sun family, and arrested and tied up all the Juren Sun Wei and his family who resisted stubbornly. After Bernardo captured the 6 members of Sun Juren's family, he ordered people to put knives on the necks of others, and then directly asked Sun Wei, "Mr. Sun, tell us what you know about Guangzhou." Otherwise, if my hands shake, your family will go to hell. Sun Wei was about 35 years old, handsome, and one of the only two Juren in Nanlang town. However, another Juren in Nanlang town had moved to Xiangshan County, and only he stayed in Suiheng village and was unfortunately caught by the Portuguese. Seeing the sword on the neck of his eldest son Sun Bin, Sun Wei was a little worried. As a scholar, he himself was not afraid. At most, he would die for the country. However, if all 6 members of his family fell into the hands of the enemy, that would be a problem. Ancient scholars emphasized family, country and the world, among which family should be ranked before country. Scholars bring honor to their ancestors, to put it bluntly, it is for the family. If his only son Sun Bin died, and he was finished, his family would be extinct. Or, I will make up a lie to fool these barbarians. After making up his mind, Sun Wei bowed and said, please spare my family, and I will tell you everything I know. Seeing that he was so sensible, Bernardo didn't waste any words and asked directly, we want to know, like the 2 artillery fortresses on the left and right sides of the Pearl River estuary, how many are there near Guangzhou? How many artillery pieces are there? Are there such artillery fortresses in other places? Sun Wei was shocked. As a scholar who often traveled between Guangzhou and Nanlang town, he happened to know this situation. Because he had a classmate who happened to be a staff member in the Guangzhou government office and knew some inside information. According to his classmate, the court cast a total of 107 Pinglu cannons, this time, 50 of which were transported to Guangzhou to be used for city defense. Among them, the court built 2 artillery forts, Weiyuan and Dingyuan, at the mouth of the Pearl River. Later, the court built 2 artillery forts in Huanpu port outside Guangzhou to protect Guangzhou. As for the other 57, it seems that they were sent to Hujian's Chuanzhou and Fuzhou to build artillery forts. However, the artillery fort in Huanpu port is still under construction. Therefore, the artillery forts that were actually built and put into use are actually only the 2 artillery forts at the mouth of the Pearl River. However, this did not prevent Sun Wei from fooling the Portuguese. So, he cupped his hands and said to Bernardo, Your Excellency, I happen to know some inside information about this matter. Tell me quickly. Bernardo said happily. It's like this. I'm in Guangzhou City. I heard that the court has cast a new type of Pinglu cannon that can fire 10 Jin shells. A total of 214 guns have been cast. Sun Wei doubled the number to scare the Portuguese and make them dare not attack Guangzhou. 214 guns. Oh my God, so many. Bernardo was shocked. Yes, it is said that these 214 Pinglu cannons are used to deploy in Guangdong and Fujian provinces for coastal defense. Among them, there are 107 guns in Guangzhou, which are used to build 10 artillery positions, and the remaining 7 guns are deployed on the top of Guangzhou City. Bernardo's face changed, 107 12-pound guns, more than the 12-pound main guns of the entire fleet. Moreover, they are deployed in 10 artillery forts. This is terrible. So Bernardo hurriedly reported the situation to Gama. Gama was a little unconvinced, so he asked, Are you serious? Don't tell him he is lying to you. After learning about Gama's suspicion from Bernardo, Sun Wei raised his hand with a righteous look on his face and said, Sun Wei, swear to heaven. If I tell even a single lie, I will go to hell after I die. Swear to heaven. Bernardo was also shocked. Bernardo was a Catholic. In his eyes, swearing to heaven was like swearing to God. Such a solemn oath must be correct. After all, in the eyes of Catholics, no one dared to joke with God. Chapter 1866, Water Ghost. Not to mention, the pirate mode opened by Gama really hit the soft underbelly of the Ming dynasty. Because the country has been peaceful for many years, the southeastern coastal areas have become relatively prosperous. At the same time, the combat effectiveness of the soldiers in the southeastern garrisons has also deteriorated sharply. Otherwise, there would not be a situation in the Jiajing period a few decades later where a little bit of Japanese pirates would set off a huge wave. Although the coastal areas of Guangdong are not as prosperous as the coastal areas of Jiangsu and Zhejiang, the local area has been stable for many years because pirates have not yet emerged. In addition, the climate is warm and the products are rich. At the beginning, Gama was still very afraid of the coastal garrisons. Because he heard Sun Wei bragging, he thought that each garrison had 5,000 or 6,000 people and was very powerful. However, when attacking coastal towns, Gama was surprised to find that those Ming army garrison soldiers did not come to reinforce in time. How could he know that those Guangdong coastal garrison soldiers had been frightened a long time ago? Let alone reinforcements, it's good enough that they didn't run away in fear. After hundreds of years of stable life, the soldiers of the Southern Guards had long been worn down by the stable life and became more and more like farmers. Only the guards on the northern border and the southwestern border can still retain some combat effectiveness because of frequent battles. Most of the guards on the southeast coast are no different from timid farmers. However, although these guards dare not go out of the city to fight, they still have a set of skills to defend the city. When the Gama's Portuguese sailors tried to besiege Haifeng County, Huaizhou Prefecture, they encountered strong resistance. The main reason is that there is a Haifeng guarding 1,000 households in Haifeng, and there is also a Jiesheng guarding 1,000 households in the south and east of the city. Seeing the attack of the barbarians, more than 1,000 soldiers and horses from the 2,000 households all retreated into the county, and mobilized the city's able-bodied men to defend Haifeng County. These guards may not dare to fight in the field, but with the support of the city wall, they have increased a lot of courage. Moreover, they could force the able-bodied men in the city to serve as cannon fodder in the front. After all, the Gama soldiers were just sailors, not professional soldiers. Facing the 2,000 household stubborn defense, there was nothing they could do. Due to the lack of siege equipment and experience, the Gama could only leave in dismay after looting several undefended towns in the local area. Then, the Gama summed up a set of looting experience: if the county town could be attacked by surprise, it would be attacked by surprise. Once the attack failed, he would give up the attack and turn to looting nearby towns. In this way, although the harvest was not large each time, a lot of wealth was accumulated. The only thing that made the Gama dissatisfied was that there was not much silk in those towns, only cotton cloth was more. After all, the rich families and officials of the Ming dynasty basically lived in the city, and silk shops were naturally mostly opened in the city. There were generally few people selling silk in small towns. After all, there were only a few rich families in a town who could afford to wear silk. And those rich families had the conditions to go to the city to buy clothes. Therefore, silk shops were generally opened in the city. The Gama's looting of coastal towns in Guangdong finally attracted the attention of the Ming dynasty officials. Chen Jin, the governor of Guangdong and Guangxi, was suppressing the peasant uprising of Wang Gongxuan in Fujiang at this time. He was leading tens of thousands of troops to besiege the Fujiang peasant army and could not get away, so he ordered Wang Hong, the deputy envoy of the Haidao, to command 10,000 soldiers of the garrison and hundreds of warships of the Guangdong navy to go and destroy the Portuguese pirates. Speaking of Wang Hong, we have to mention the Portuguese cannon. Because, in real history, it was Wang Hong who was the first big man to advocate learning from the barbarians to control the barbarians. The Portuguese cannon was also salvaged from the sunken Portuguese warship by Wang Hong and was the first to imitate it. Of course, in this time and space, Wang Hong's credit for first imitating the Portuguese cannon is gone. Because Marin had already offered the Portuguese cannon and the manufacturing method of the Portuguese cannon. Even the Napoleon cannon was offered. At this time, the Nantou Sea Road office where Wang Hong was stationed had 4 12-pound Napoleon cannons that were allocated from Guangzhou. Wang Hong was sitting in the public housing of the Nantou Sea Road office, stroking his beard and thinking about things. Not long after, his soldiers came to report, "Mr. Deputy Envoy, I have already found out. Those Portuguese pirates originally had 30 large ships with strong ships and powerful guns. But at the human fort, 2 ships were damaged by the Pingla cannon of the fort. Those 2 ships were said to have gone south later, probably to the Portuguese's lair for repairs. The remaining 28 enemy ships are all hiding in a port on the south side of a deserted island called Xiangjiang Island by the locals, 100 miles south of Nantou walled city. They use this as a base to harass our Guangdong coast." Hong Kong Island officially appeared in documents, probably during the Wanli period. At this time, the term Hong Kong was only used by the people, and the local area was not developed. Hiding south of Xiangjiang Island. 2 ships were damaged by the Pingla cannon. Wang Hong thought for a long time before giving the order, continue to get information, and at the same time, find a good place to land on the north shore of Xiangjiang Island. After his men left, Wang Hong took out a blank memorial and began to write a memorial to request the court to allocate more Pingla cannons for support. Obviously, the warships of the Portuguese and foreigners are afraid of the Pingla cannons. If there are enough Pingla cannons to bombard, the foreign ships will definitely not be able to bear it. Wang Hong plans to land on the north shore of Xiangjiang Island with dozens of Pingla cannons, and then march to the hiding place of the Portuguese on the south shore, and use Pingla cannons to bombard the enemy's warships. However, at present, only the Military Equipment Bureau of the capital has the technology to cast Pingla cannons. So, he can only wait temporarily. In addition, it takes time to mobilize 10,000 soldiers and hundreds of warships. With the efficiency of the Ming army, it will take 1 or 2 months to do it. If you wait a little longer, it is estimated that the Pingla cannons of the court will be delivered. But if you do nothing during this period, it seems not good. After all, he is now entrusted with an important task, and he cannot do nothing. Maybe it is useless to do it, but in the officialdom, the most important thing is to show your superiors. Even if you do useless work, you must let your superiors see that you have worked hard. So, while waiting for the army and the court to provide more Pingla cannons, Wang Hong also summoned all his advisors and generals with rich naval battle experience to ask them to offer advice. At this time, a centurion named Zhou Tsang suddenly said, "Deputy Envoy, have you ever heard of water ghosts?" "Water ghosts?" Wang Hong frowned and said unhappily, a man does not talk about strange things. Zhou Tsang coughed and said, Deputy Envoy has misunderstood. The water ghosts I am talking about are not ghosts and gods, but a kind of strange soldiers in water battles. Zhou Tsang was not a government soldier before, but a pirate leader in the Pearl River estuary who was recruited. Therefore, he is more proficient in water battles than everyone present. Zheng Yuan, the captain of Nantu, whispered to Wang Hong about Zhou Tsang's past. Wang Hong nodded and motioned Zhou Tsang to continue. Zhou Tsang continued, the so-called water ghosts are pirates who are particularly good at swimming. Their mission is to dive to the bottom of the enemy ship with sharp axes and chisels, and use sharp axes and chisels to drill through the bottom of the enemy ship, causing it to leak and sink. Wait, I heard that there are multiple cabins under the ship. Even if one cabin is flooded, the ship will not sink, right? Just seal this cabin, the ship can still hold up, and then repair it. Wang Hong interrupted. Because he inspected Guangdong's coastal defense, he learned a lot of knowledge about naval warfare in advance, so he didn't know nothing. Zhou Tsang smiled and said, Your Excellency is talking about the ship of our Ming dynasty. But from what I learned from inquiring in Nanlang town, the Portuguese ship has a whole empty cabin underneath. Once it leaks, if the hole cannot be plugged in time, it will inevitably take in water and sink. Have people from Nanlang town been on the Portuguese ship? Wang Hong was puzzled. Yes, the Portuguese robbed a lot of property and food in Nanlang town. Then, they forced the local villagers to carry all these supplies on board and put them in the bottom hold. Therefore, many local people have boarded the Portuguese warships and have also gone down to the bottom hold. I have asked, and it seems that the bottom hold of those Portuguese warships only has one compartment. Once water enters, the possibility of sinking is very high. Well, I order you to select a group of soldiers with the best swimming ability from the water fort to practice diving and digging the bottom of the ship. If there are not enough good swimmers in the army, recruit from the public and make sure to gather enough water ghosts to dig the Portuguese ships. Yes, sir. Zhou Tsang gladly accepted the order. Chapter 1867, Nobunaga's Guard. Not to mention, the pirate mode opened by the Gama really hit the soft underbelly of the Ming dynasty. Because the country has been peaceful for many years, the southeastern coastal areas have become relatively prosperous. At the same time, the combat effectiveness of the soldiers in the southeastern garrisons has also deteriorated sharply. Otherwise, there would not be a situation in which a little bit of Japanese pirates would set off a huge wave during the Jiajing period a few decades later. The coastal areas of Guangdong, although not as prosperous as the coastal areas of Jiangsu and Zhejiang, have been stable for many years because pirates have not yet emerged. In addition, the climate is warm and the products are rich. At the beginning, the Gama was still very afraid of the coastal garrisons. Because he heard Sun Wei bragging, he thought that each garrison had 5,000 or 6,000 people and strong combat effectiveness. However, when attacking the coastal towns, the Gama was surprised to find that the Ming army guards did not come to reinforce in time. How could he know that the guards in the coastal Guangdong had been frightened? Not to mention reinforcement, it would be good if they were not scared away. After hundreds of years of stable life, the soldiers of the Southern Guards had long been worn down by the stable life and became more and more like farmers. Only the guards on the northern and southwestern borders can still retain some combat effectiveness because of frequent battles. Most of the guards on the southeast coast are no different from timid farmers. However, although these guards did not dare to go out of the city to fight, they still had a set of skills to guard the city. The Gama's Portuguese sailors encountered strong resistance when they tried to besiege Haifeng County, Huizhou Prefecture. The main reason is that there is a Haifeng guarding 1,000 households in Haifeng, and there is also a Jiesheng guarding 1,000 households in the south and east of the city. Seeing the barbarians coming, more than 1,000 soldiers from the 2,000 households all retreated into the county town, and mobilized the city's able-bodied men to defend Haifeng County. These guards may not dare to fight in the field, but with the city wall as a support, they have increased a lot of courage. Moreover, they can force the able-bodied men in the city to stand in front as cannon fodder. After all, the Gama soldiers are just sailors, not professional land forces. Facing the 2,000 households' defense, there is nothing they can do. Because of the lack of siege equipment and experience, the Gama could only leave after looting several undefended towns in the local area. Then, the Gama summed up a set of looting experience: if the county town can be attacked by surprise, it will be attacked. Once the sneak attack fails, give up the attack and turn to looting nearby towns. In this way, although the harvest is not large each time, it accumulates little by little, and a lot of wealth has been obtained. The only thing that made the Gama dissatisfied was that there was not much silk in those towns, only more cotton cloth. After all, the rich families and officials of the Ming dynasty basically lived in the city, so silk shops were naturally mostly opened in the city. There were generally few people selling silk in small towns. After all, there were only a few rich families in a town who could afford to wear silk. And those rich families had the conditions to go to the city to buy clothes. Therefore, silk shops were generally opened in the city. The Gama's behavior of looting coastal towns in Guangdong finally attracted the attention of the Ming dynasty officials. Chen Jin, the governor of Guangdong and Guangxi, was suppressing the peasant uprising of Wang Gongxuan in Fujian at this time. He was leading tens of thousands of troops to besiege the Fujian peasant army and could not get away, so he ordered Wang Hong, the deputy envoy of the Haidao, to command 10,000 soldiers of the garrison and hundreds of warships of the Guangdong navy to go and wipe out the Portuguese pirates. Speaking of Wang Hong, we have to mention the Portuguese cannon. Because, in real history, it was Wang Hong who was the first big man to advocate learning from the barbarians to control the barbarians. The Portuguese cannon was also salvaged by Wang Hong from a sunken Portuguese warship, and he was the first to copy it. Of course, in this time and space, Wang Hong did not have the credit for being the first to copy the Portuguese cannon. Because Marin had already offered the Portuguese cannon and the manufacturing method of the Portuguese cannon. He even offered the Napoleon cannon. At this time, the Nantou Sea Road office where Wang Hong was stationed had 4 12-pound Napoleon cannons that were allocated from Guangzhou. Wang Hong was sitting in the public housing of the Nantou Sea Road office at this time, stroking his beard and thinking about things. Not long after, his soldiers came to report, "Mr. Deputy Envoy, I have already found out. Those Portuguese pirates originally had 30 large ships with strong ships and powerful guns. But at the human fort, 2 ships were damaged by the Pingla cannon of the fort. Those 2 ships were said to have gone south later, probably to the Portuguese's lair for repairs. The remaining 28 enemy ships are all hiding in a port on the south side of a deserted island called Xiangjiang Island by the locals, 100 miles south of Nantou walled city. They use this as a base to harass our Guangdong coast." Hong Kong Island officially appeared in documents, probably during the Wanli period. At this time, the term Hong Kong was only used by the people, and the local area was not developed. Hiding south of Xiangjiang Island. 2 ships were damaged by the Pingla cannon. Wang Hong thought for a long time before giving the order, continue to get information, and at the same time, find a good place to land on the north shore of Xiangjiang Island. After his men left, Wang Hong took out a blank memorial and began to write a memorial to request the court to allocate more Pingla cannons for support. Obviously, the warships of the Portuguese and foreigners are afraid of the Pingla cannons. If there are enough Pingla cannons to bombard, the foreign ships will definitely not be able to bear it. Wang Hong plans to land on the north shore of Xiangjiang Island with dozens of Pingla cannons, and then march to the hiding place of the Portuguese on the south shore, and use Pingla cannons to bombard the enemy's warships. However, at present, only the Military Equipment Bureau of the capital has the technology to cast Pingla cannons. So, he can only wait temporarily. In addition, it takes time to mobilize 10,000 soldiers and hundreds of warships. With the efficiency of the Ming army, it will take 1 or 2 months to do it. If you wait a little longer, it is estimated that the Pingla cannons of the court will be delivered. But if you do nothing during this period, it seems not good. After all, he is now entrusted with an important task, and he cannot do nothing. Maybe it is useless to do it, but in the officialdom, the most important thing is to show your superiors. Even if you do useless work, you must let your superiors see that you have worked hard. So, while waiting for the army and the court to provide more Pingla cannons, Wang Hong also summoned all his advisors and generals with rich naval battle experience to ask them to offer advice. At this time, a centurion named Zhou Tsang suddenly said, "Deputy Envoy, have you ever heard of water ghosts?" "Water ghosts?" Wang Hong frowned and said unhappily, "A man does not talk about strange things." Zhou Tsang coughed and said, "Deputy Envoy has misunderstood. The water ghosts I am talking about are not ghosts and gods, but a kind of strange soldiers in water battles." Zhou Tsang was not a government soldier before, but a pirate leader in the Pearl River estuary who was recruited. Therefore, he is more proficient in water battles than everyone present. Zheng Yuan, the captain of Nantou, whispered to Wang Hong about Zhou Tsang's past. Wang Hong nodded and motioned Zhou Tsang to continue. Zhou Tsang continued, "The so-called water ghosts are pirates who are particularly good at swimming. Their mission is to dive to the bottom of the enemy's ship with sharp axes and chisels, and use sharp axes and chisels to drill through the bottom of the enemy's ship, causing it to leak and sink. Wait, I heard that there are multiple cabins under the ship. Even if one cabin is flooded, the ship will not sink, right? Just seal this cabin, the ship can still hold up, and then repair it." Wang Hong interrupted. Because he inspected Guangdong's coastal defense, he learned a lot of knowledge about naval warfare in advance, so it's not like he doesn't know everything. Zhou Tsang smiled and said. Chapter 1868 Helping to cultivate talents with bad intentions. This behavior of the chess piece is naturally a good thing for the future young master Ganfu Nobunaga. However, for Marin, it may not be. When Kong Tai reported these self-willed practices of the chess piece to Marin, Marin frowned. Frankly speaking, the appearance of Ganfu Nobunaga was actually an accident. At first, Marin did not want this son. But who told Ganfu Mizuko to look so much like Teacher Tsang? Marin couldn't control himself and had Gonfu Nobunaga. From the fact that Marin did not use the surname Ma for Nobunaga, it can be seen that Marin did not attach so much importance to this unexpected son. Moreover, in Marin's plan, Gonfu Nobunaga will only be the spokesperson for the interests of the North Sea Kingdom in Japan in the future, not the real controller. Therefore, the chess piece's behavior of privately cultivating his own team for Nobunaga actually made Marin a little worried. However, he couldn't say anything clearly. Marin still needs to win over Gonfu Mizuko to help him do things, so he can't publicly accuse the chess piece of these small actions. Otherwise, if the clever Gonfu Mizuko sees the truth, they may not be willing to work hard in the future. However, ruling a country is not just about having a few reliable guards. To govern a country, one must not only rely on a strong army, but also a large number of civil servants to help maintain rule. Why are the civil servants in the Ming dynasty so powerful? Because the emperor must rely on them to rule the world. The emperor is just a lonely man, and what he can really manage is just a palace, and he may not be able to manage it. In fact, it is the civil servant group that really manages the world. And if Nobunaga Gonfu wants to rule Japan and become the shogun in the future, he must have a civil servant group that supports him, plus a strong army. Yes, the civil servant group. Marin figured it out instantly. No matter how hard Gonfu Mizuko and her 4 maids try, they are weak. They want to support Nobunaga, relying on their own strength is completely a dream, and they must rely on Marin's strong military support. And if Nobunaga wants to be the shogun in the future, he must get the support of daimyo from all over the country. Even, get the support of the monk class. Because the civil servants who can help rule the people can only come from the daimyo and monk class. Of course, the monk class is actually from the aristocracy, just like the missionary class in Europe. Unlike the European custom of non-eldest sons becoming priests, the Japanese aristocracy has a tradition of becoming a monk to avoid disaster. Many aristocrats who failed in the struggle would choose to become a monk to avoid disaster. Then, the monk class in Japan had a great influence on the political situation in Japan. After all, there are many emperors and former bosses among the monks. In the final analysis, Japan is actually still in the hands of the aristocracy, the same virtue as Europe. The Ming dynasty of the same period was much fairer than Europe and Japan because of the popularization of education and the imperial examination system. However, because of the exclusive respect for Confucianism, all the scholars in the world came from the same school, and their thoughts were highly consistent, thus forming a powerful civil service group that could influence the emperor's will. It is not difficult to influence the political situation in Japan, as long as the civil servants come from the North Sea Kingdom. The reason why those Japanese aristocrats can be so arrogant is that Japan did not popularize education and the imperial examination system, and the political power was monopolized. In fact, as early as the Tang dynasty, Japan also imitated China to have an imperial examination system. However, because the Japanese nobles were too powerful, the imperial examination system was changed. For example, in the Tang dynasty, a system of parallel examinations and dignitaries' recommendations was implemented. The main reason was that the aristocratic families in the early Tang dynasty were too powerful, and the Tang dynasty royal family had to compromise and allow dignitaries to recommend an imperial examinations in parallel. This was also learned by the Japanese envoys to the Tang dynasty. But because the Japanese emperor had long been reduced to a puppet, and fair imperial examinations harmed the interests of the great nobles. Therefore, Japan's imperial examination system became more and more distorted, and finally after the 11th century, it was completely replaced by the recommendation system and became a resource monopolized by the nobles. Then, the Japanese emperor had no capital to fight against the nobles. Because the nobles controlled the talent recommendation channel, there would be no new blood to replenish it. Therefore, whether before or after the crossing, Marin felt that Deng's restoration of the college entrance examination was a wise decision. He allowed many real talents to stand out and drive the development of society. The rapid development of Chinese science and technology later was inseparable from the emergence of real talents. If the recommendation system of that era was still used to go to university, China would not be able to develop in 100 years, just like ancient Japan. In fact, the significance of restoring the college entrance examination is no less than that of reform and opening up. Although the Japanese aristocracy monopolized education and culture, and the Japanese civilians could not turn over, that was only for Japan. The talent training of Beihai country is something that Japan cannot interfere with. Marin's plan is to use the universities of Beihai country to train civil servants for the future Nobunaga shogunate in Japan. Even, Marin plans to use the first batch of civil servants to assist Nobunaga to be the Germans of Beihai country. What is the situation of education in Beihai country? Those children have basically been brainwashed in the most comprehensive way since childhood, and most of them are full of love and support for Marin and the Hoffman family. Using the college students who have been brainwashed since childhood in Beihai country to help Nobunaga in Japan, Marin can rest assured. Because even if Nobunaga has his own ideas when he grows up, these college students from Beihai country will not be in the same mind with him. Of course, using all Germans is too ugly and difficult to be accepted by the Japanese. So, next, Marin plans to send people to Japan to select a group of smart children aged 8 to 10, and send them to Beihai Kingdom to study abroad. These children have been educated in Beihai schools since childhood, and have been instilled with the idea of loyalty to Marin and the Hoffman family all day long. When they grow up and graduate from college, their butts will naturally sit on the side of Marin and Caesar, not Nobunaga. In this way, through this means, Marin can control Japan in disguise. Your ministers are all on my side, what can you use to compete with me? Of course, you can also choose those stupid traditional Japanese nobles. But can those people really compare with the elites who have received modern university education? Can the barbaric and ignorant Qing dynasty compete with the British Empire in the Victorian era? The ideological levels of both sides are not in the same era. When Marin and Ganfu Shuizi said that they would help Nobunaga train a group of capable college students as future helpers, Ganfu Shuizi was very grateful. How could she know that the talents that others helped to train had long been added? Just like the so-called talents who studied in the United States in later generations, especially those in the liberal arts field, many of them were actually taught in a distorted way. After returning to China, many of these people had completely different thinking and positions. Not only could they not help the country, but they became troublemakers and always made discordant voices. For example, those public intellectuals a few years before Marin traveled through time always promoted some discordant arguments. They kept saying, I was in the United States and so on, and they were disgusted with China in various ways. Little did they know that these people were actually just brainwashed by Western education. Especially those who went to the United States to study liberal arts through connections or at their own expense, their thoughts were more easily influenced, and they were more likely to become public intellectuals. This is the brainwashing of studying abroad in college. In a few years, this effect has been achieved. Of course, it cannot be said that what those public intellectuals said was completely wrong. There are indeed many problems, but they naturally sat on the wrong side of the butt, and their remarks naturally have no value. In his previous life, Ma Lin had met someone who defended Ma Rong. He was an overseas student who was self-conscious and progressive. He also believed that those who opposed Ma Rong in China were narrow-minded and lacked tolerance. Ma Lin felt terrible at the time. Damn, the level of brainwashing by these foreigners is really high. Especially the brain-dead European and American Virgin Mary faction in later generations, they are brain-dead themselves, and they have also influenced many people. The abolition of the death penalty and the non-punishment of juvenile criminals came from the hands of these white leftists, as well as the perverted animal protection. The FA for the protection of minors, scumbags, back then was the work of the so-called elites who studied in the West in the early years. Well, the devilish smile of the murderous teenager in Xinjiang emerged in Ma Lin's mind. I'm not even 14 yet, it's okay. That little girl died in vain. If it were someone as ruthless as Marin, he would have been brought to the North Sea Kingdom for education and brainwashing when he was a child. When he grew up, he would definitely stand on Caesar's side instead of Nobunaga's side. And this would also make it easier for the North Sea Kingdom to control Japan, a colony. Chapter 1869, The Artisan School Becomes Real. There is no free lunch in the world, and no other country will really be kind enough to help you cultivate talents. In fact, many of the top elites who studied abroad in the United States in later generations were retained by the United States at a high price. Many people who returned after graduation were actually looked down upon by the United States. Of course, some of them are truly patriotic. There are also some real elites who saw the development prospects in China and returned to China to start a business. For example, Lao Li of Baidu. Therefore, it is very simple to distinguish whether it is a real returning elite, those who return to China to start a business, those who have venture capital willing to invest, not those whose fathers invest, or are dug back to be the backbone are definitely powerful and are real elites. Those who hold overseas study diplomas, especially those in the humanities, and compete for jobs in the talent market with a bunch of losers. Well, I didn't say anything. They are just better than us. Tsongu said that he was a poor student abroad, but he can be considered a top student of Huaqing University and Peking University after returning. It is precisely because of the experience and lessons learned from the performance of those big verses that made Ma Lin understand that talent cultivation should not be entrusted to others. Otherwise, people will definitely add additional ingredients to your teaching. Of course, science is an exception. Technology geeks generally don't care about politics and are more pure. Just like the great scientists of the older generation such as Qian Lao, although they have also been to the United States, they have not been misled. The main reason is that they spend all year round in laboratories and libraries and really don't have time to be fooled. To be honest, Marin is also thinking about whether to learn from the Americans of later generations and have two distinct educational methods, private schools and public schools. The difference between this model is that private schools hire the best teachers and manage students more strictly so that they can learn cultural knowledge well and become elite talents in society in the future. As for public schools, well, we can't say that we give up obviously, we have to put it another way, we must carry out quality education and all-round development. Well, students, you must develop your hobbies well. What? Main course? It's okay, it's not important. Only the elites in private schools pay attention to the main subjects. They have a miserable life. You enjoy the most humane modern education model. So, everyone, go and have fun. Then, many years later, Obama, who is also a black man and has been studying in private schools, became the President of the United States, while most black people, well, they can play basketball, rap, and fool around and commit crimes. As for the main subjects, the black brothers who went to public schools said, "Oh, our physical education teacher is awesome, he can take the English teacher and math teacher's class. You Chinese people are so miserable, the Chinese teacher and the math teacher dared to take the physical education teacher's class. Aren't you afraid of being beaten?" This kind of public and private education method is very conducive to the solidification of hierarchy. It just so happens that Marin lives in an era of strict hierarchy. Adopting this public and private education method is very conducive to maintaining social stability. Because, as a top aristocrat, Marin also needs to solidify the hierarchy, rather than aristocrats and civilians competing together. In that case, it will be a mess, and it is easy to cause the rebellion of the enlightened people. However, this kind of public and private education method is also harmful. For example, the old Americans in later generations, because of this kind of public and private education method, certainly safeguarded the interests of the elite class, but it also brought a bad result, that is, the young people trained in public schools like to be too wild and don't like to work hard. There are too few elite students in private schools, most of whom are graduates of public schools who love to be wild. Therefore, most young people don't want to work hard, and the whole society is naturally decadent, and the economy can be good. There is a ghost. Moreover, the wild atmosphere of public schools has also affected the atmosphere of private schools in turn. After all, young people are good at learning from each other. Then, the whole American society is decadent. This is a typical case of wanting to fool people, but in the end, they also got involved. Therefore, Marin thought about it and still felt that it was inappropriate. He was afraid that the decadent thought would appear hundreds of years in advance. However, it is indeed not in the interests of the nobles or Marin to let the common people and the children of the nobles compete fairly. In the final analysis, the existence of royal power still needs the nobles to desperately maintain it. If the interests of the nobles are not protected, how can they be willing to maintain the royal power? Therefore, in order to protect his own royal power, Marin had to go against his conscience to safeguard the interests of the aristocracy. But universal education is also very important, which helps to select and train technical talents for the North Sea Kingdom. Well, technical talents. Marin's eyes lit up. In fact, in the early days, in order to cope with the dissatisfaction of the aristocracy, Marin promoted the education of civilian children among the people under the guise of craftsman school to open smoothly without causing a backlash from the nobles. After all, the children of civilians becoming craftsmen does not harm the interests of the nobles. No matter how powerful the nobles are, they need a large group of craftsmen to serve them. But Marin didn't think so at all at the time, but was selling dog meat under the guise of sheep's heads, and really wanted to train those civilian children. After all, Marin was a civilian in his previous life, and he was naturally close to civilians. It was not until he had been a lord for more than 10 years that Marin finally realized that I was also a noble. As a noble, it is natural to consider the interests of the aristocracy. In particular, Marin is still the representative of the aristocracy, the monarch. It is ridiculous for an aristocratic class to want to let the common people come forward. For example, when China established the new dynasty, many people who wanted to survive were the eldest sons of landlords. There was no way. If you were not a young master of a landlord, you could not go to school. But after they succeeded in their lives, they found that it seemed that their land and property had to be handed over. Of course, they were really great and willing to have their property confiscated. But Marin is not so selfless. In essence, Marin is just a selfish ordinary person. He can serve the country and the people, provided that his own interests are not harmed. If you support the common people and the aristocracy to compete, you are actually harming your own interests. Because after the aristocracy was defeated, no one would come to maintain the royal power. The Ming dynasty used the civil service group to suppress the noble group. The consequence was that the noble group declined and no longer had the ability to protect the Ming Empire. The civil service group is different from the noble group. The noble group rests with the country. When the dynasty is over, the nobles will also be buried with them. But the civil service group was able to transform itself into the civil service of the new dynasty and continue to be domineering. When the Ming dynasty fell, those nobles were so poisoned by the thoughts of the civil service that they naively thought that they could get a good end by learning from the civil service and surrendering. As a result, the civil service officials were still civil service officials after surrendering to the Qing dynasty, while the nobles were confiscated of their property after surrendering, and they were either killed or demoted to commoners. The nobles of the previous dynasty still wanted to be rich in the new dynasty. I thought too much, and it was a favor to keep my life. So, although the king and the nobles were fighting for power and profit, in the end, their interests were still the same. Their struggle was actually a class struggle and a struggle for unequal distribution of spoils. But their interests were different from those of the civilian class. Therefore, after thinking about it, Marin felt that he could not let the children of the common people and the children of the nobles compete for official positions. However, in the early days, because of the serious lack of talents, some smart children of the common people could be promoted to official positions. Then, give them titles and pull them into the aristocratic class. It doesn't need a very high title. A low-level title of a knight is enough to pull him into the aristocratic class. After thinking this through, Marin made up his mind, the artisan school is the artisan school. In the past, it was just a sheep's head and a dog's meat, but in the future, it will be consistent and change from virtual to real. He plans to make the school that trains children of civilians a real artisan school in the future to solidify the hierarchy. Of course, there is also a back door, that is, graduates of the artisan school can also join the army. If you can get military merits, you will also have the opportunity to get a title. In addition, if you become a scientist and achieve great scientific research results, you can also be consoled by being awarded a knight like Newton. Chapter 1870 Baron Adair's Request. In fact, Newton's knighthood was not awarded for scientific research, but for being the director of the Royal Mint and carrying out currency reform, which was a good job. In addition, his Cambridge University classmate Montague became the Chancellor of the Exchequer. So, he got the noble title of knight. But it is undeniable that Newton's knighthood did set a precedent for scholars to be knighted. In later generations, Britain found that it seemed to be quite cost-effective to give scientists the title of knighthood without paying. Then, it was even more excessive. Even football coaches like Ferguson were knighted. Later, the idol player Beckham also wanted to be knighted. However, he did not succeed. After all, Beckham is just handsome and has not done anything that has made great contributions to Britain. It is difficult to be knighted just by selling his face. Unless, as the captain, he can lead the England guys to win the World Cup. In fact, the title of knight, which cannot be inherited, is not of great significance in practice. It is more of an honorary nature, just like the certificates of honor that students receive. Of course, the honor of a knight is much more powerful than a certificate of merit. In many things, it enjoys certain priority and is recognized by the whole society. Therefore, many scientists have also sharpened their heads to get one. In short, there are not many knights for scientists. Can you be knighted without particularly outstanding contributions? However, the North Sea Kingdom seems to have made an exception. Leonardo da Vinci is now a fucking baron. But Marin thinks it is basically difficult to have scientists who can reach the height of Leonardo da Vinci in this era. If there is another one, Marin would be eager. It's just a title. If you can exchange it for a scientific god, it's a sure win. In addition to the factualization of the artisan school, Marin also clarified the hierarchy of military academies. That is, military academies after elementary school are just schools for training soldiers and non-commissioned officers. Ordinary students can be soldiers, and those who are particularly outstanding can be non-commissioned officers, that is, grassroots officers in the army. If you want to be a real officer, you must go to a military university. Then, on the issue of attending a military university, Marin will also begin to prefer the children of nobles. Especially for command majors, they will basically only be open to the children of nobles. Only technical majors such as engineers and artillery will be open to outstanding civilian children. In this way, it can be regarded as opening a convenient door for civilian children. However, in order to motivate ordinary soldiers to fight bravely, Marin also stipulated that soldiers who have won the titles of martyr and combat hero, even if they are civilian children, can have a place in the military university, only one. With this kind of stimulation, those civilian children can fight bravely in battle. Although it is only the qualification to go to the military university, not the title, it is easier to make merit and get promoted if you can cross the natural barrier between non-commissioned officers and officers. Then, it will be easier to be a knight. In this way, while Marin opened some back doors for civilian children, he also strictly controlled the size of officers to avoid the expansion of military strength. He remembered how Prussia was kidnapped by the army in later generations. When the military junkers took control of the dominance of Germany, it was inevitable to start a war. Therefore, while strengthening the army, Marin also had to suppress the influence of the army. The ideal state is that civil officials slightly suppress military officials, but cannot interfere in military affairs. To be honest, there are too few able-bodied men in the North Sea Kingdom now, and few people can serve as soldiers. There are only 300,000 or 400,000 able-bodied men in the mainland. Even if 1 out of 10 men is selected, only 30,000 or 40,000 people can be selected. It is impossible to mobilize all the people, because there are no machines in this era, and industrial and agricultural production cannot be separated from labor. If the whole people are mobilized, social production will come to a complete halt. Therefore, the population problem is still the main problem restricting the rise of the North Sea Kingdom. And Marin's desire to get the more than 300,000 victims outside Paris is getting more and more eager. Now, a few months have passed, and Baron Adair, a famous prodigal son in Paris, has finally fallen into the trap and lost all his wealth. Under the guidance of someone with a heart, he opened up his relationship and obtained the position of managing more than 300,000 refugees outside Paris. However, after becoming the refugee management officer, Baron Adair felt something was wrong. Why the upper nobles were hinting that he should deal with these refugees? How to deal with them? Kill them? It was not until the representative of the North Sea Kingdom came to him and gave him a bag of gold coins that he knew how to deal with those refugees. Isn't this a bargain for outsiders? At first, Baron Adair was very unhappy. Although he was a prodigal son, he was also patriotic. He knew that if these more than 300,000 refugees were given to others, it would simply be aiding the enemy. In the agricultural era, population is the guarantee of social productivity. If these more than 300,000 refugees were given to the North Sea Kingdom, it is estimated that an area as large as a duchy could be reclaimed. After all, many German duchies have a total population of only 200,000 to 300,000. Baron Adair even thought that if France could not afford to support these refugees, it might as well give them to the Duchy of Lorraine and other German principalities close to France. However, his superior, Baron Boger, scolded him, "Are you stupid? I also want to send these 300,000 refugees to the Duchy of Lorraine and other princes close to France. But, have you ever thought about whether they can afford to feed these people? My great kingdom of France does not have so much food to feed those disaster victims. Can those small princes close to France afford it? Then why can the North Sea Kingdom afford it?" Baron Adair said with his neck stiff. "Fuck, they have a high grain production, right?" Baron Boger was a little angry. "Why is France's grain production not high?" Baron Adair continued to talk back. Baron Boger was furious. After beating Baron Adair, he explained, "They have volcanoes." "Forget it, this is a state secret, I won't tell you. Anyway, you have to remember that we fight for Naples just to have abundant food production like the North Sea Kingdom. But now, we can't afford to support those 300,000 refugees, so we can only send them away first. If we continue to stay in Paris, it will be easy to cause trouble." In the end, Baron Adair, the stubborn donkey, still obeyed Baron Boger's arrangement and was willing to act as the middleman to sell the victims to the North Sea Kingdom. Because he knew that after the money was sent to the king, it would be used for war to help the great France seize the Kingdom of Naples. Then, the food of the Kingdom of France would increase. As for his own infamy, Baron Adair was simple-minded and didn't think so deeply. Anyway, it was right to serve France. Besides, Baron Boger promised him that some of the money from selling the victims could be given to him so that he could use it to pay off his debts. For a gambler, this is definitely good news. These are nothing, but Baron Adair made a request that made Marin extremely worried and even a little difficult to deal with. Because Baron Adair proposed to send his men to follow the refugees to America to see if America can really accommodate more than 300,000 French disaster victims. Chapter 1871 Orc Mask. Baron Adair's request seemed reasonable, but it made Marin extremely nervous. What did the French mean? Did they want to spy on the situation in America and then grab the territory from me? He didn't know that Baron Adair's request was just a decision made casually. Anyway, it wasn't him who was sent to observe the situation, but just an ordinary clerk. But Marin was so nervous that he was afraid that the French wanted to grab the territory from him. Then, a huge misunderstanding occurred, causing huge losses to the North Sea Kingdom. We can't let the French see the real situation in North America. Marin walked around the office anxiously, talking to himself. However, it's not good to refuse directly. After all, the victims are still in the hands of the French. If you want to get the victims, you must agree to their request. If the French really see the real situation in North America, and come back and say it, I'm afraid Spain and Portugal will be tempted, not to mention whether France will be tempted. In this era, the French navy was suppressed by Spain and England, but the French knew the truth and could spread the news. Once Spain and Portugal find out, that would be a big problem. In desperation, Marin had to call his confidants such as Kohler and Schwartz to discuss countermeasures. This is the situation, what do you think? Marin asked his subordinates after introducing the situation. Schwartz frowned and said, why would the French make such a request? Are they interested in America? Or, have they heard some news? Kohler shook his head, probably not. My people monitor public opinion in Paris and have never heard of any legends about America. Then why did they suddenly think of sending people to America to take a look? Marin interrupted, okay, it doesn't matter why the French want to send people to America to take a look. What's important now is, how to fool the French. It may be difficult to prevent their people from going to America to take a look, but if they see something they shouldn't see. At this time, Saul suddenly suggested, how about we learn from what we did in Cuba, build fake castles, and fool the other side. In addition, arrange for the Indians to act out and install defenses to attack our defenses for the people sent by France to sea. Acting? Marin's eyes lit up. Okay, let's do it. Marin slapped the table and order the fleet to hoist the upper edge of the gaff sail, set off in advance, and go to the Delaware Peninsula to set up the scene. Well, all the houses built before will be demolished, and the bricks will be used to build the Great Wall. Marin had previously transported a lot of bricks to the Americas, and deliberately stopped at the port of Le Havre to show them to the French. However, those bricks were not transported to America to build the so-called Great Wall, but to build houses for those French residents who would immigrate there in the future. In addition, Marin also planned to build a city there to promote the development of the local economy. But the French's request to send someone to take a look put Marin in an extremely passive situation. In order to make up his lie, Marin had to really build a Great Wall for the French to see. In order to enhance his persuasiveness, Marin also needed to mobilize the Indians to cooperate in acting. For example, attacking the Great Wall or something to show how dangerous and terrible America was. In addition, order a complete halt to the construction and reclamation of houses along the coast of southwest New Jersey across the Delaware Peninsula, and don't let the French representatives see the development of the New Jersey region. The New Jersey region and the Delaware Peninsula are separated by the Delaware Bay. When the French representatives go there, they will definitely be able to see the situation of the southwest coast of New Jersey from afar across the Delaware Bay. Therefore, Marin must demolish all the buildings in the southwest coastal area of New Jersey and erase all traces of development, so that the French representatives will mistakenly believe that it is still wild there. As for the attack and defense of the Great Wall, it is easy to build the Great Wall. Just send tens of thousands of people to rush the work and it can be built. The biggest problem is to find Indians to pretend to attack the Great Wall. This requires thousands of people, and there are only a few thousand local Delaware people in total, and even fewer strong men, which is obviously not enough. Therefore, Marin must send people to Cuba to recruit actors. After all, Terra has 100,000 Taino people and Sivans and other indigenous people under his command. As long as a few thousand obedient strong men are selected, put on makeup, and pretend to attack the Great Wall, the effect can be achieved. However, this takes time. Therefore, Marin gave instructions to the negotiators in Paris. He agreed to send someone to take a look, but it would take a few months. Because the Great Wall over there has not been repaired yet, it is not safe enough. As for the victims, Marin plans to temporarily take them to the refugee camps in the ports of the North Sea country in batches for resettlement. When the Great Wall over there is repaired, they will be transported to live in the American colonies. At the same time, the French representatives were also invited to visit. In fact, the North Sea country can now transport refugees. However, because the Great Wall is really not repaired, and the most important actors who play the Indian barbarians need several months to be transported from Cuba, and they also need to be trained, so Marin had to delay for a few months to prepare. However, transporting thousands of Indians from Cuba to the Delaware Peninsula and transporting them to Guantanamo are two completely different concepts. Guantanamo is in the southeast of Cuba Island, not far from the Havana colony, convenient transportation, and it takes little time. It would take a long time to transport thousands of Indians from the Havana colony to the Delaware Peninsula, a distance of several thousand kilometers, in an era when the average ship speed was only about 7 knots. Moreover, Marin had boasted before, and portrayed the Indians as a race like orcs. By the way, orcs. Marin thought of something very important and decided to do something about it. What did he think of? Makeup. Since the North American Indians have been portrayed as orcs, why not put on some makeup and dress those Indians up as real orcs? Wait, I don't seem to need to find Indians. If I use makeup, white people can also. In Marin's mind, the image of Daniel Wu being made up as the ugly Gul'dan in the future emerged. As long as the makeup skills are good, a handsome guy can also become an orc. So, Marin ordered to find a group of leather mask masters to listen to his command. What did Marin want them to do? Of course, it was to make orc masks. If you make exquisite orc masks, the kind with green faces and fangs. Then, let the strong soldiers wear them, and let them hold the orc axes like blood roar, stand under the Great Wall and roar, and shout a few words of Loktar, ogre, and other orc language, which would be even better. Marin did what he said, and sent people to find a group of mask-making masters to make orc masks with green faces and fangs under his parent-child guidance. At the same time, he also found a group of makeup masters to study how to make ordinary people into orc warriors in Marin's memory. Well, it seems that in the later Warcraft games, wearing orc masks is popular on Halloween. A few months later, Marin could easily select several thousand strong and reliable soldiers from his own army, put on orc masks, disguised as orc infantry, holding big axes, and perform bravery and terror under the Great Wall. What am I doing? A live-action version of Warcraft? Only there are no cameras. Marin laughed dumbly, thinking that this was a big deal. And it was very funny. Chapter 1872 Orcs Will Never Be Slaves. At the beginning, Marin was going to make the most classic orc color, green. After all, the image of the green-skinned orcs is deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Because of his certain sketching skills, Marin easily depicted the outline of the orcs and asked the mask master to make the corresponding mask leather cover. But the problem followed: there was no synthetic cheap dye in this era, and the green dye was too expensive. Marin and his men experimented with making a green-skinned orc mask and dyeing a soldier's skin green, which cost as much as 1 gold coin. The most pitfall is that these green-dyed skins have to be replaced frequently. After all, human skin sweats, which easily fades the dye, and then needs to be replenished. If there are thousands of people, it will cost thousands of gold coins to make up once, which is not cost-effective. Therefore, Marin had to reluctantly give up the most classic green-skinned orc image and change it to the brown-skinned orc image of the Draenor version. The brown-skinned orcs look the same as the green-skinned orcs, but the skin color is different. And brown skin is very easy to deal with. Just smear some mud and splash some soy sauce to get brown skin. At present, the soybean production in the New York colony is very high, so there is no shortage of soybean soy sauce, which has become an important seasoning for cooking in the North Sea Kingdom. Marin got yellow mud, mixed it with soy sauce, stirred it evenly, and then smeared it on the warriors who served as models. The orc mask and other things were also soaked in soy sauce and turned brown. Then, after putting on the mask, a standard Draenor orc was born. Looking at the appearance of this strong soldier named Tucker after makeup, Marin was particularly satisfied. Because it looked very much like the brown-skinned orcs in his memory. However, he always felt that something was missing. "Come on, Tucker, take it." Marin threw a pure wooden, blood-roar battle axe to Tucker. Then, he ordered someone to fetch a watermelon grown in a greenhouse and said to Tucker, "Jump and split this watermelon, and then roar." Tucker did as he was told. He jumped up and chopped the blood roar on the watermelon. Although it was made of wood, the watermelon was more brittle, so it was split in half. "Why do I feel that Tucker is not imposing enough?" Marin muttered. Then, he ordered Tucker, "Tucker, come, follow me and shout, 'Orcs will never be slaves. Orcs will never be slaves.'" Tucker shouted loudly. However, Marin could not hear the momentum, he just felt that Tucker was reciting loudly. "Why do I always feel that this Tucker lacks domineering and murderous aura?" At this time, Khan, who was chewing a watermelon on the side, interrupted, "Tucker is just a new soldier, he has never participated in a battle, how can he be domineering and murderous? Didn't you say that murderous aura is cultivated after actually killing people?" "Huh." Marin turned around and saw Khan, the melon-eating crowd, chewing the watermelon that was split in half by Tucker. Suddenly, Marin's eyes lit up. "You, stand up and take 2 steps. Marin ordered Khan. Khan was confused, holding the watermelon in his hand, and stood up and walked blindly for 2 steps. Well, he's strong and muscular, stronger than Tucker. He seems more suitable to play the role of Old Howler. Thinking of this, Marin ordered, "Come here, make up Count Khan, according to Tucker's makeup." Then, Khan was pressed on the chair with a confused face, accepting the torment of the makeup artist. Half an hour later, an orc stronger than Tucker appeared. "Tucker, give Blood Howler to Khan," Marin ordered. Obviously, Tucker, the male protagonist, was replaced. Tucker was just a strong recruit from the North Sea Kingdom, so he didn't dare to say no, so he very respectfully offered the Blood Howler with both hands and handed it to Khan. Khan weighed the pure wood Blood Howler and curled his lips, "It's too light." This guy practiced weightlifting with a 300 gene stone at the age of 18. This fake cosplay version of the wooden Blood Howler naturally looked light in Khan's hands. Marin was so angry that he gave him a slap on the head, acting. "Do you know how to act? You have to pretend that it is a heavy weapon." "Okay, I'll try my best," Khan said aggrievedly. Then, he closed his eyes and imagined how heavy the light wooden axe in his hand was. Marin asked someone to bring a new watermelon and asked Khan to jump and chop it. Khan suddenly opened his eyes, jumped over, and chopped it down with an axe. As a result, the axe broke, and the table on which the watermelon was placed collapsed. Marin didn't care about the watermelon that fell to the ground at this time, but asked Khan to shout that line. "Orcs will never be slaves." Khan shouted, his voice full of domineering and murderous aura, matched with his ferocious orc costume, majestic and indomitable. "Unless you provide food and accommodation." Marin almost blurted out. Khan acted too much like it, he really killed people, and the watermelon was smashed on the head. Therefore, Khan is not lacking in domineering and murderous aura. Therefore, for a while even Marin had an illusion that Khan was the first tough guy in Warcraft, Grom Hellscream. Great, the male lead is finally confirmed. Marin clapped his hands excitedly. Then, poor Khan had to go out again to play the chieftain of the Warsong clan of the Orcs. The Warsong clan naturally couldn't have only Grom Hellscream, so Marin needed to select some extras for Khan. But after picking and choosing, Marin found that the rough guys who looked like the Spike Commando were the best match for this beast. The Spike Commando itself was composed of a group of tough guys, and their direct superior was Khan himself. These guys were incredibly strong, and they walked as fast as if they were wearing full plate armor, holding maces and smashing things randomly, which was very similar to the style of orcs. Moreover, they were all sturdy in size, very similar to orcs. Then, 100 wolf Fang commandos were put on orc masks, covered with soy sauce and yellow mud, and transformed into 100 strong, war-song orcs. Director Marin Marda ordered, Khan, lead them in shouting slogans. Khan said helplessly, okay, boss. Then, he raised the blood roar and took the lead in shouting, Loktar. The 100 war-song orcs under him also responded, Ogre. Loktar. Ogre. In this way, after shouting hundreds of times, Khan couldn't help but complain, boss, just these 2 lines? So stupid, can you have 2 more lines? Khan felt that as a leading actor, he couldn't just shout 2 lines over and over again. Marin touched his chin and said, well, you're right, we can't just have these 2 lines. Let me think, there seems to be something like, power and glory, blood and thunder, etc. However, those are all translated into Chinese, and I don't have ready-made orc language to refer to. Marin was a little distressed. But after seeing Ganfu Shuizi holding Nobunaga and watching the fun, Marin came up with an idea, how about this, I'll add a few lines for you. What lines? Khan asked in confusion. Learn from me, Baka. Baka. Khan stupidly led a group of younger brothers to shout blindly. Dead dead. Marin taught again. Dead dead. Khan and his men continued to shout. Compression belt. Marin said this sentence by some strange coincidence. But unexpectedly, Khan and his orc warriors followed and shouted stupidly, compression belt. It was so full of energy. Marin laughed so hard that he couldn't straighten his waist. Chapter 1873 Husky equals Frostwolf. On the side, Mizuko, who was holding Nobunaga's liver, was also confused, what was going on? A group of big men dressed as beasts shouted, no, no. It was so eye-catching. But the problem is that normal people usually shout, no, with fear, why did 101 strong men shout, no, with murderous faces? Marin, who finally stopped laughing, did not explain to these guys, but just asked them to shout, compression belt, less, and shout, baga, and dead dead, more. Because every time these rough men shouted, compression belt, Marin would laugh once. The Warsong clan was selected, and the Warsong elite was also in place. But the orcs are not just the Warsong clan, there must be at least big clans like Blackrock and Frostwolf. The Blackrock clan is easier to deal with a full body of black armor, and then matched with a black hammer, well, the Blackrock clan can handle it. As for the leader of the Blackrock clan, Orgrim, Marin chose Nicholas Cage, the leader of the Warsong Special Forces, to play the role himself. Cage also brought 200 Special Forces members to participate in the performance. Although the soldiers of this Special Forces are not as strong as the Wolf Fang commandos, they are more flexible and have strong combat power. Then, the Frostwolf clan made Marin feel troubled. It is easy to find personnel, just find a few strong ones, but where can you find wolves? Wolves are easy to find and can be caught alive, but it is difficult to make wolves obedient. If you raise wolf cubs from childhood, you can raise a group of obedient wolves, but now there are only a few months, and there is no time to find wolf cubs and train them. However, this is acting, and you don't necessarily have to find real wolves. Oh, I can find a husky to pretend to be a wolf. Marin slapped his head and remembered the top spot of the 3 idiots of sledding, the husky. The husky is also called the Siberian husky, which looks very much like a wolf and is also a very popular pet dog in later generations. However, for now, it seems that the husky has not become a pet, and is still working hard as a coolie dog pulling a sled. So, Marin called Kohler and asked him to send someone to rush to the Arctic Ocean region on the northern coast of Russia to buy hundreds of huskies from the local Eskimos to temporarily play the role of Frost Wolf. Then, Marin arranged for someone to make a batch of wolf head hats. Wearing a wolf scalp hat and holding a husky. Well, it should be very similar to the Frostwolf clan. The key is that huskies seem to like to howl like wolves. When instructing Kohler to buy huskies, Marin emphasized that huskies who like to howl like wolves should be purchased first. In this day and age, Europeans have not seen the funny huskies, and they don't know that huskies are not wolves. Suddenly seeing a group of huskies, normal people thought they were wolves. Then, the huskies raised their heads and howled like wolves. Okay, it would be strange if they were not regarded as wolves. As for the person who played the role of Durotan, the chief of the Frost Wolf, Marin directly found Chilich, the head of the German Shepherd Training Center. This guy is a dog expert and the head of the German Shepherd Training Center. He is most familiar with dogs. He will bring 300 professional dog breeders and trainers from the German Shepherd Training Center, lead huskies, and pretend to be the Frost Wolf clan. These people are all masters of dog breeding and training, and it should not be difficult to deal with the funny huskies. If the huskies can be trained to howl like wolves in front of the battle, it will be more dramatic. The main forces of the three major clans have been found, and the rest are not so important. After all, even if you are shooting a movie, only the people in the front row can be on camera, and the people in the back row are not even qualified to be on camera. Therefore, Marin randomly selected 2,000 or 3,000 strong soldiers, put on masks, and smeared soy sauce and mud all over their bodies, and they were considered orc warriors. Their task is to roar in the back row to create an atmosphere, and they will not really participate in the war. At the front, Marin also needs a group of human infantry to fight with the orcs, and then pretend to be defeated with great force. In view of the fact that the orcs' fighting method is to smash with a big axe and a big hammer, if it hits a person, even a wooden hammer can hurt people. Therefore, Marin simply copied the configuration of the human infantry in Warcraft, all holding shields. In this way, when acting, the axes and hammers of the orc soldiers hit the shields, so there is no need to hurt people. Then, these human infantry only need to pretend to be knocked to the ground and scream a few times. This requires acting talent, so Marin spent a long time interviewing tens of thousands of soldiers before selecting 1,400 acting soldiers. Their mission was to fight the orc army outside the Great Wall on the day the French representatives arrived, and to perform a miserable defeat so that the French could see the ferocity and terror of the orc soldiers. Your acting is too fake. Why did you fall down before the hammer hit your shield? Are you trying to scam me? Director Marin angrily sprayed at an acting soldier. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, I'll do it again. Then, the acting soldier performed another miserable defeat. This time it was much more real. He fell to the ground only after the hammer hit him and the shield made a sound. Then, the orc warrior pretended to go forward to finish off the enemy, and chopped the mud next to the soldier with an axe. However, the human warriors who fell to the ground seemed to have been chopped off, and let out earth-shaking wails. Well, good, the next group, this is a big scene where Grom will challenge a group of people alone, and the actors who get beaten are very demanding. Marin carefully explained the scene to a group of soldiers with the best acting skills. Grom's axe will rotate and hit your shields. Khan will control the force and will not really hurt you. However, you need to perform the feeling of "I was hit hard." Not only do you have to hit the bottom, but you also need to fly backwards to show the great force. This is very important. In many martial arts scenes, the leading actors often only make gestures, but the extras who are beaten not only have to pretend to be hit, but also fly backwards and pretend to be knocked away by internal force. And this kind of actor is not an ordinary extra, but a special actor who is good at being knocked away. Although Marin is not a professional actor, he has read many entertainment novels and knows some inside stories. So, he took the initiative to demonstrate. Khan, come and hit me. Khan was confused. Really? You idiot. I'm talking about acting. Marin shouted angrily. Khan said, oh, and then smashed the blood roar softly, hitting the shield, basically without any strength. But the moment Khan's blood roar battle axe touched the wooden shield held by Marin, Marin suddenly screamed and flew backwards, very realistic, as if he had suffered 10,000 points of critical damage. Khan was a little confused now. I really didn't use any strength. But fortunately Marin quickly got up and said to the other special actors, did you see it clearly? At the moment of contact with Khan's axe, you have to push the ground with your front foot, jump back suddenly, and fall to the ground. Then, a group of special actors spent all day training the funny scene of flying backwards after being hit. Marin pretended to push with both hands, and a group of funny, special actors flew out with screams. Chapter 1874 Roasting a Gorilla. Marin looked at the soldiers flying backwards and nodded with satisfaction. Well, not bad, we have 30% of the strength of the La Masia diving team. That guy, Busk, right? Don't open your eyes secretly. You are now dead, don't move. Hearing the words of Director Marin, the soldier immediately closed his eyes and dared not peek again. At this time, Assistant Director Kohler asked, Your Majesty, how will it end after the fight? Will the orcs take the opportunity to attack the city? Marin nodded. Of course we have to take the opportunity to attack the city. However, we can arrange for the musketeers on the top of the city to shoot blanks, without bullets. Then, arrange for Khan to pretend to be shot, and the orcs will retreat completely. You see, the chieftain is injured, and it is reasonable for the orcs to retreat, right? Marin has perfected the idea. Kohler used a pen to record the script that Marin had made up temporarily, and asked again, what about these corpses on the ground? If the French go out of the city to check after the battle, they will be exposed. It shouldn't be. Marin said uncertainly. What if we meet a fool? In that case, well, let the orcs take all the bodies away when they retreat. Marin thought for a while and said. Carry away. What do you mean? Why do the orcs take away the bodies of the infantry? Kohler was a little confused. Marin rolled his eyes and said, of course, we take them back to eat. Eat? Kohler's hand trembled with fear, and the quill pen fell down. Nonsense, the character I arranged for the orcs is barbaric. Is it strange that barbarians eat people? Moreover, if the corpses are taken away, the French will not be able to find evidence. Will he dare to investigate in the orc camp? Marin said unhappily. Kohler picked up the quill pen, thought about it, and asked again, how to make the French believe that the orcs are really eating people. If they take them back to eat, it won't be shocking enough. Marin thought about it. Should he really roast a dead body for the French on the top of the city? No, it would be horrible to roast people. Marin himself thought about it. Finally, he thought about it and made a decision. How about this, you send the largest African gorilla in the Auric Zoo to America. Before the battle, order people to kill the gorilla, peel off the skin, and chop off the head. The largest gorilla is more than 1.7 meters tall when standing upright, and looks very much like a human. When the time comes, let Khan and his men stand in front of the enemy camp and put the skinless and headless gorilla in the shape of a big and grill it on the grill. Let the city wall see it and scare the French representative. After saying that, Marin gestured the word big. After all, it was a Chinese character, and Kohler didn't understand it. The African gorillas in Marin's Auric Zoo were bought from the Portuguese, and the Portuguese also bought them from the Kingdom of Congo. Of course, when they were bought, these gorillas were still small gorillas, but now they have grown up and are very strong. Peel off the skin, remove the head, and hang it on the bracket. If you look at it from a distance, you really think it is a person. At this time, Kohler suddenly stopped writing and asked awkwardly, then, will Khan perform eating gorilla meat? Khan is Kohler's brother after all, and Kohler always feels weird when his brother eats human-like gorilla meat. On the side, Khan jumped up in fear after hearing the conversation between the two. I will never eat gorilla meat, I am a human, not an animal. I can't eat human-like gorillas. Marin naturally knew that gorillas are the cousins of humans, and would not really force his confidants to eat gorillas. So he waved his hand and said, of course I won't let you eat the gorilla. What I mean is that you should set up your camp not far from the city wall, and roast a gorilla in a position that can be seen from the top of the city wall. After roasting, carry it into the house and throw it somewhere. Then, you can use deer legs and wolf legs to replace them, pretending to be human arms and legs. Of course, use a knife to trim them into the shape of human arms and legs, and cut off the hooves. After the gorilla is carried in, you can hold these fake arms and legs and chew them for the people on the top of the city wall to see. After saying this, Khan felt better. Marin snorted coldly, you are surprised by what you have seen. If you knew that the Lingnan people in my great foodie empire in the future would eat gorillas and monkeys for you to see, your monkey brain would understand. Next, Marin directed the scene where Khan was shot. Are you too? Why did you lie down as soon as the gun went off? Seeing Khan's poor performance of lying down and pretending to be dead when he heard the gunshot, Marin was angry. Khan looked innocent, boss, I haven't been shot either, I don't know how to act. Marin stroked his forehead and said, okay, learn it. After that, Marin snatched the axe from Khan and pretended to be Grom. He roared and rushed towards the wall. At this time, Kohler cooperated with the ventriloquism. Bang, Marin, who was still charging, suddenly stopped, as if he was electrocuted. Then, Marin looked down and seemed to see his gunshot wound. At this time, Marin's left hand quickly broke a bag of tomato juice, and the bright red blood flowed down. Then, Marin did not fall down immediately, but used the blood roar to support the ground, half knelt on the ground, and looked painful. However, he still stubbornly shouted, Lokhtar. After a while, he slowly fell down. At this time, Kohler took the lead in applauding, and Khan, Cage and others also looked at Marin with admiration and applauded together. As for the other extras, seeing the big guys clapping, they also clapped along. Cage was smarter than Khan, and he said with admiration, Your Majesty is your Majesty, and you have portrayed the image of a brave and unyielding king to perfection. I think that's what a real hero should be like after being shot. Obviously, this guy was flattering. Marin rolled his eyes and thought to himself, where are we going? Have you read The Self-Cultivation of an Actor? I haven't read it either. But I have seen a lot of movies, and the heroes in those movies are all played like this. Only the dead extras would lie down when they heard the gunshot, without even struggling, and be killed directly. But the fact is that after a bullet hits the human body, blood will flow out or flow into the chest cavity, and the person will die when the blood has almost flowed out. Unfortunately, the extras in our anti-Japanese war dramas were all shot to death. Only the unlucky ones who were shot in the head, that is, shot in the head, would die immediately. Next, it was Orgrim and Durotan who supported the shot, Grom Hellscream, and led all the orcs to retreat. According to the plot, these people should have nervously run to Grom and shouted, Great Chief, what's wrong with you? But Marin didn't know how to say, Great Chief, in Orcish. He only knew how to say it in Chinese and English, but English-French people could hear it. So, Marin could only make up on the spot, learn from me, big boss, what's wrong? The latter sentence was said in Chinese, with a northeastern accent. Big boss, what's wrong? Cage and Chilich shouted together in a northeastern accent with a big bald taste. Of course, it was not standard enough, and Marin helped correct it several times before it sounded like that. Of course, none of this matters. What matters is that the French people watching the battle on the city wall believe it. So, if they really forget their lines, Marin allows them to say 1.2.3.4.5.6.7, but they cannot shout too loudly so that the French people on the city wall can hear it. Moreover, their expressions must be serious and they are not allowed to laugh. At this time, in the Oryx Zoo, on the Gorilla Mountain, the strongest gorilla, King Kong, who has just defeated all the male gorillas to become the Gorilla King and is doing something with a female gorilla, does not know that in order to act, he will be sent to America to be skinned and roasted, so, now is his last happy time in the zoo. Chapter 1875 de Gama visits Conti. In order to achieve a realistic effect, Marin specially conducted several drills in a barracks near Auric, imagining the barracks wall as the Delaware Wall. Of course, it was kept secret to avoid being known by the French. Every time a rehearsal was performed, the army would clear the field in advance. However, the problem lies with the Frostwolf clan. Because the Huskies have not yet arrived, they can only take their own German shepherds to make up the numbers to fight. But the German shepherds are too fierce, and it is difficult to tell what is acting and what is real fighting. So, during the battle, the German shepherd almost really bit someone. This is the result of the dog owner desperately holding it back, otherwise it would really be an accident. Marin sighed and said, "Put muzzles on the German shepherds." With muzzles, the German shepherds can't bite. This time, the acting went much more smoothly. But when the real Huskies arrived, Marin felt that he was still too naive. After a short period of special training, these Huskies had no problem howling like wolves in front of the battle, but when it came to the real battle, these Huskies that looked like wolves were scared. What should I do? Marin had a headache. These Huskies were acting as wolves. What kind of animals are wolves? They are fierce beasts. How could wolves retreat and run away when they see a battle? It was the dog expert Chilich who gave the advice, "Your Majesty, let's let those soldiers who play the infantry play with the Huskies and feed them." Why? Marin didn't react for a while. Chilich explained, "These Siberian Huskies are very timid, and they seem to be frightened by those sword and shield infantrymen. Therefore, there is only one way to get the Huskies to cooperate with the performance: let those Huskies no longer be afraid of those sword and shield infantrymen. And the only way to make those Huskies not afraid of those infantrymen is to let them get familiar with them, and let them think that those soldiers are playing games with them. And the best way to make them get familiar quickly is to let those soldiers feed the Huskies immediately after launching a charge. In this way, the Huskies will form a habit, and when they see those sword and shield infantrymen charging, they will think that it is time to eat, and they will excitedly pounce on them. From a distance, it seems that they have launched an attack. Isn't this a conditioned reflex?" Marin looked at Chilich in great surprise. This guy, he is really good at raising dogs. As far as Marin knows, even if police dogs are trained to perform tasks in later generations, they will mistakenly think that their owners are playing games with them. Therefore, it is a good idea to let the infantrymen who launched the charge play games with the Huskies, and then feed them jerky immediately. Sure enough, after feeding them several times, the greedy Huskies were no longer afraid of the human infantrymen who were charging with swords and shields. They even couldn't help but want to pounce on them just to eat a bite of jerky. Then, the Frost Wolf orcs tried hard to hold the rope to prevent them from letting go. In this way, the Frost Wolf, led by the Frost Wolf orcs, showed a brave and competitive attitude after the battle. In fact, it was just this group of greedy Huskies who wanted to eat jerky. However, in the eyes of the onlookers who did not know the truth, this scene was as if the group of wolves were eager to bite the group of human infantrymen in front of them to death. At the same time, the charging human infantrymen would tie the meat strips to feed the Huskies on their knees. If the Huskies want to eat, they can just bite the meat strips on their knees and tear them apart. However, from a distance, this scene looked like a wolf biting the soldier's knee, which was very scary. Seeing such a good effect, Marin clapped his hands excitedly and said, "Great, Chilich, you are really an expert in dog breeding. In this way, the timid era can also play a wolf. Well, I will increase your pay." Marin's acting was in full swing, and the Ming dynasty in the Far East and the Southeast coast were also in full swing. The Ming court was really angry and mobilized troops from all over the country to go to the Guangdong coast and garrison various towns. At the same time, the military bureau of the capital, based on the record of the human fort, received instructions from the cabinet, and also began to cast cannons with all its strength, preparing to vigorously build forts in various coastal areas. De Gama saw that he could not get any advantage on the Guangdong coast, so he led the fleet north and began to harass the coastal area of Fujian. The Ming court was also prepared. However, some inhabited islands along the coast of Fujian could not be defended and were looted by the Portuguese fleet. Even the Portuguese fleet captured a lot of able-bodied men as their slaves. However, because the Ming dynasty had been prepared, although Portugal broke through some islands along the coast of Fujian, it did not get any benefits. Because the valuable things had long been taken into the city by local governments. The counties along the coast of Fujian also strengthened their vigilance, and with the reinforcements sent by the general of Fujian, the Portuguese were helpless. Moreover, the guards along the coast of Fujian also resisted, using some simple firearms to damage 3 Portuguese warships. The firearm that damaged the Portuguese warship was called the bull-mouthed gun, which was a firearm that existed when the Ming dynasty was founded, and it was also the most important firearm of the Ming dynasty navy. The bull-mouthed gun has a caliber of 3 inches and 4/7 points, a length of 1 foot and 1 inch, and a weight of 63 pounds. It is a short-barreled small-caliber artillery with a caliber of about 11 centimeters, or 110 millimeters, which is a standard short-barreled large caliber. However, its barrel is too short, only 3 times the caliber. It looks more like a mortar. In addition, this kind of bull-mouthed gun also fires stone shells, which are low-cost. Because of the short barrel, the range of the bull-mouthed gun is very limited, and the lethality is also limited. Fortunately, the Portuguese warships are not that strong, so these bull-mouthed guns with average performance actually damaged 3 Portuguese warships in the battle. Then, the Gama was at a loss. Because he couldn't find a place to repair the ship. Faced with the aggressive Portuguese fleet and the lessons learned from Nanlang Town, Xiangshan County, the Ming court ordered that all the wood that could be used for shipbuilding in coastal towns, including carpenters who knew how to repair and build ships, were forcibly moved into the city and protected by officers and soldiers. In this way, it would be difficult for the Gama to replicate the previous practice in Nanlang Town. So the fleet temporarily stopped at a small island off the coast of Fujian. Just when the Gama was worried about the repair of the 3 warships, the translator Bernardo suddenly said, "My lord, I heard from those fishermen that the Dongfan Island, the territory of the North Sea Kingdom Marin in the Far East, is just to the east. Why don't we send the damaged ships to Dongfan Island for repair? At the same time, find a way to get some supplies there." Because the Ming dynasty began to pay attention to the gathering of materials in coastal areas, many valuable things were moved into the city, and the Portuguese sailors were not good at siege, so they could only do nothing. Especially gunpowder and artillery shells, which became less and less, making the Gama very anxious. Ming dynasty officials seemed to be aware of this problem and strictly prohibited the storage of gunpowder outside the city. Therefore, the Portuguese could not replenish gunpowder at all, which greatly affected the fleet's sustained combat effectiveness. After all, Portuguese warships rely on the power of artillery. Therefore, the Gama wanted to take the fleet to Dongfan Island for supplies, and it would be best if he could buy some gunpowder and artillery shells. At the same time, repair the 3 damaged warships. However, just when they were about to leave for Dongfan Island, Kong Tai, the person in charge of Dongfan Island, sent someone to deliver a letter. Neutrality during wartime? What the hell? The Gama was confused. Then, Kong Tai's messenger explained it to him in detail, and the Gama finally understood. But now the Portuguese fleet was really short of ammunition, and the 3 damaged ships could hardly hold on. So, the Gama decided to visit Conti in person in an attempt to change Conti's neutral position. At the very least, he had to repair the 3 damaged ships. Chapter 1876 Questioning. The Gama caught a fisherman who was familiar with the local sea route in the coastal area, asked him to lead the way, and took his flagship, Prince Henry, to Taiwan Island. Other ships were temporarily left on Majo Island controlled by the Portuguese fleet. Because of the invasion of the Portuguese fleet, most of the people on Majo Island withdrew to the inland for refuge, and only a few stayed. The Portuguese fleet used the harbor on Majo Island to temporarily stop. However, because the Ming court ordered the control of wood and carpenters, it was difficult for the Portuguese to repair ships. And the newly cut wood could not be used to repair ships at all. Coincidentally, Majo Island was the first place that Kong Tai contacted when he was smuggling. Therefore, the Gama found Lin Afu, a fisherman who knew the route to Taiwan Island, on the island. Lin Afu once followed the local rich man Li Baiwan to escort a batch of smuggled cattle to the mouth of the Tamsui River in Taiwan Island, so he knew the route. In fact, when the government retreated to evacuate the population on the island, Lin Afu also wanted to retreat. However, he caught a cold and could not get out of bed, so he stayed there and was caught by the Portuguese as a guide. Under the guidance of Lin Afu, the Prince Enrique successfully arrived at Tamsui City at the mouth of the Tamsui River in the northwest of Taiwan Island. At this time, Tamsui City has become the largest trading port on Taiwan Island. Because the Tainan Plain in the southwest of Taiwan Island has not yet been developed, the most developed area on Taiwan Island at this time should be the Taipei Basin, which was captured by Marin's army. Today, due to the large-scale development of the Taipei Basin, Kong Tai moved the governor's office into the basin, and built Hohhot City in the Taipei area of later generations as the capital of Dongfan Island. In fact, Hohhot City should have been the name of Hohhot in the Ming dynasty. It was a city built when Sanyangzi belonged to the Ming dynasty and was named Hohhot City by the Ming dynasty. However, that was during the Wanli period, and there is no shadow now. Hohat means, to surrender and be educated. In later generations, outstanding athletes were often naturalized by countries that lacked such athletes. In later generations, naturalization was just a common thing. However, in this era, naturalization was of great significance, representing the dynasty's power over the world. Therefore, when Kong Tai applied to name the new city Hohat City, Zhengde was very happy, even more excited than when Kong Tai presented the Napoleon cannon. Because there were foreigners willing to naturalize, it proved that he was a very successful emperor. Then, the Ming court relaxed many restrictions on Kong Tai's recruitment of craftsmen and refugees in the Ming dynasty. Then, Kong Tai took the opportunity to recruit many craftsmen and disaster victims. At present, 80,000 acres of land have been reclaimed in the Taipei Basin of about 240 square kilometers, becoming the source of food for the entire Dongfan Island Governor's District. And Hohat City is still very small, only 1 square kilometer, and is only about 25 kilometers away from Tamsui City at the mouth of the Tamsui River. When the Gamas, Prince Enrique, arrived at Tamsui City, the city lord van der Beck, who was responsible for guarding Tamsui City, immediately ordered the firing of artillery warnings. At the same time, he sent people to rush to Hohat City, 25 kilometers away, to report to Conti. At this time, Tamsui City was no longer the small fortress with a length and width of only 50 meters. At this time, because of the role of the trade port, Tamsui City had built more than a dozen long bridge docks for mooring ships. At the same time, a small town with a length and width of 500 meters was built with Tamsui Fort as the center. Because of the status of the trade port, it has become prosperous here, even more prosperous than Hohat City. Strictly speaking, Tamsui City is currently a trading port, while Hohat City is the governor's residence. Although Hohat City is larger, its economic vitality is far less active than Tamsui City. In order to ensure the safety of Tamsui Port, Marin ordered the original Tamsui Fort to be transformed into an artillery fortress equipped with 20 artillery pieces. Many windows on the second floor are equipped with an 18-pound red cannon. Normally, these windows are tightly closed, but once an enemy ship approaches, these windows will be opened and cannons will be fired outward. When the Gamas, Prince Henry, approached Tamsui Port, van der Beek immediately ordered a window to be opened and fired a cannon at the sea surface as a warning. However, the Gama on the ship narrowed his eyes, the cannon is hidden in the window. No wonder the Ming dynasty has such a cannon fortress, it turns out to be the North Sea State Church. Thinking of this, the Gama's anger rose, assholes. These guys taught the Ming dynasty to build a cannon fortress, causing my great kingdom of Portugal to suffer heavy losses. They must give an explanation. After that, the Gama ordered the boat to be lowered, and he took the boat directly to Tamsui Port. Under the vigilance of the guards of Tamsui Port, the Gama went ashore angrily and met van der Beek, the lord of Tamsui City. As soon as they met, the Gama revealed his identity and said, "I am the Gama, the commander of the Portuguese Eastern Fleet, and I want to see your Governor Conti." Van der Beek was stunned. He was not a traditional nobleman, and he learned Latin later, so he was not very proficient. After figuring out what the Gama meant, van der Beek saluted and said, "Please wait, I will send someone to inform Lord Conti." He still knew the name of the Gama, who was the first Portuguese to discover the route to India. The Portuguese side has always insisted that the Gama was the first person to discover India, and was unwilling to admit that it was Columbus who discovered India. Therefore, the Gama's reputation is also very big. Hearing that the Gama was visiting in person, Conti did not dare to neglect it, and hurriedly rushed from Hohat City to meet with the Gama. As soon as they met, the Gama asked, "Governor Kong Tai, it was you who taught them to build the artillery fortress at the mouth of the Pearl River in the Ming dynasty? Do you know how much trouble this behavior has caused to the Kingdom of Portugal? At the mouth of the Pearl River, 2 ships in my fleet were damaged by the enemy's artillery and are now forced to return to Malacca for repairs. Now, 3 ships on my side have been damaged, and it's all your fault. Why did you teach them to make artillery and build artillery fortresses? I need a reasonable explanation." Kong Tai, after listening to Da Gama's question, asked calmly, "Excuse me, Lord Da Gama, is there a provision in the treaty signed between the North Sea Kingdom and Portugal that the North Sea Kingdom cannot sell artillery to the Ming dynasty?" Da Gama was stunned, and after thinking about it, he said helplessly, "It seems not." Kong Tai spread his hands and said, "Isn't that enough? There is no stipulation in our treaty with your country that forbids the sale of artillery to the Ming dynasty. There is no problem at all for us to sell artillery to them. Let me tell you, the craftsmen of the Ming dynasty are really amazing. I only sent them dozens of cannons, but they were able to imitate the 12-pound bronze cannon based on the samples sent." Kong Tai's words were equivalent to shifting the responsibility completely. "I didn't teach them how to cast cannons, they imitated it. What about the artillery fortress at the mouth of the Pearl River? Don't tell me they figured it out by themselves." Da Gama rolled his eyes and refuted. Kong Tai patted his head and said, "You are talking about this problem? Indeed, we have craftsmen who went to help them repair the artillery fortress. However, they were not sent by me, but were bribed and invited by Ming officials privately. Ming officials paid hundreds of gold coins privately, and the craftsmen went to help them repair the artillery fortress. Now, I have strictly punished the unruly craftsmen. The so-called strict handling is actually to criticize in a notice and then deduct a few months' salary. However, for the craftsmen who received a lot of rewards from the Ming court, deducting some salary is really nothing. Severe punishment. Must punish severely. The Gama said angrily. But Kong Tai pretended to be embarrassed and whispered, "But, what reason can I use to punish those craftsmen? You know, the North Sea Kingdom emphasizes rule of law. If you want to punish them severely, they must break the law first." But as far as I remember, they did not break any laws, nor did they violate any terms of the agreement signed between the North Sea Kingdom and the Kingdom of Portugal. The Gama was so angry that he was speechless. Chapter 1877 Threats and Deterrence by Force. The Gama caught a fisherman who was familiar with the local sea route in the coastal area and asked him to lead the way. He took his flagship, Prince Henry, to Taiwan Island. Other ships temporarily stayed on Majo Island controlled by the Portuguese fleet. Because of the invasion of the Portuguese fleet, most of the people on Majo Island withdrew to the inland for refuge, and only a few stayed. The Portuguese fleet used the harbor on Majo Island to temporarily stop. However, because the Ming court ordered the control of wood and carpenters, it was difficult for the Portuguese to repair ships. And the newly cut wood could not be used to repair ships at all. Coincidentally, Majo Island was the first place that Kong Tai contacted when he was smuggling. Therefore, Da Gama found Lin Afu, a fisherman who knew the route to Taiwan Island, on the island. Lin Afu had followed the local tycoon Li Baiwan to escort a batch of smuggled oxen to the mouth of the Tamsui River in Taiwan, so he knew the route. In fact, when the government retreated to evacuate the population on the island, Lin Afu also wanted to retreat. However, he caught a cold and could not get out of bed, so he stayed and was caught by the Portuguese as a guide. Under the guidance of Lin Afu, the Prince Enrique successfully arrived at Tamsui City at the mouth of the Tamsui River in the northwest of Taiwan. At this time, Tamsui City has become the largest trading port on Taiwan. Because the Tainan Plain and other places in the southwest of Taiwan have not yet been developed, the most developed area on Taiwan at this time should be the Taipei Basin, which was captured by Marin and his army. Today, because of the large-scale development of the Taipei Basin, Kong Tai moved the governor's office into the basin and built Hohhot City in the Taipei area of later generations as the capital of Dongfan Island. In fact, Hohhot City was originally the name of Hohhot in the Ming Dynasty. It was a city built when Sanyangzi returned to the Ming Dynasty and was named Hohhot City by the Ming Dynasty. However, that was during the Wanli period, and there is no trace of it now. Naturalization means submission and education. In later generations, outstanding athletes were often naturalized by some countries that lacked such athletes. In later generations, naturalization was just a common thing. However, in this era, naturalization is of great significance, representing the dynasty's power over the world. Therefore, when Kong Tai applied to name the new city Hohhot City, Zhengde was very happy, even more excited than when Kong Tai presented the Napoleon cannon. Because there were foreigners willing to naturalize, it proved that he was a very successful emperor. Then, the Ming court relaxed many restrictions on Kong Tai's recruitment of craftsmen and refugees in the Ming dynasty. Then, Kong Tai took the opportunity to recruit many craftsmen and disaster victims. At present, about 80,000 acres of land have been reclaimed in the Taipei Basin, which is about 240 square kilometers, and has become the source of food for the entire Dongfan Island Governor's District. Hohhot City is still very small, only 1 square kilometer, and is only about 25 kilometers away from Tamsui City at the mouth of the Tamsui River. When Da Gama's Prince Enrique arrived in Tamsui City, the city lord van der Beck, who was responsible for guarding Tamsui City, immediately ordered the firing of artillery warnings. At the same time, he sent people to rush to Hohhot City 25 kilometers away to report to Kong Tai. At this time, Tamsui City is no longer the original small fortress with a length and width of only 50 meters. At this time, Tamsui City has built more than a dozen long bridge docks for mooring ships because of its role as a trade port. At the same time, a small town with a length and width of 500 meters was built with Tamsui Fort as the center. Because of its status as a trade port, it has become prosperous here, even more prosperous than Hohhot City. Strictly speaking, Tamsui City is currently a trading port, while Hohhot City is the governor's residence. Although Hohhot City is larger, its economic vitality is far less active than that of Tamsui City. In order to ensure the safety of Tamsui Port, Marin ordered the original Tamsui Fort to be transformed into an artillery fortress equipped with 20 cannons. Many second-floor windows are equipped with an 18-pound red cannon. Usually, these windows are closed, but once an enemy ship approaches, these windows will open and fire outward. As soon as Da Gama's Prince Henry approached Tamsui Port, van der Beck immediately ordered a window to be opened and fired a shot at the sea as a warning. However, the Gama on the ship narrowed his eyes. The cannon is hidden in the window. No wonder the Ming Kingdom has such a cannon fortress, it turns out that it is the North Sea State Church. Thinking of this, the Gama's anger rose. Assholes. These guys taught the Ming Kingdom to build a cannon fortress, causing my great kingdom of Portugal to suffer heavy losses. They must give an explanation. After that, the Gama ordered the boat to be lowered, and he took the boat directly to Tamsui port. Under the vigilance of the guards of Tamsui port, the Gama went ashore angrily and met the lord of Tamsui city, Van der Beck. As soon as they met, the Gama revealed his identity and said, "I am the Gama, the commander of the Portuguese Eastern Fleet, and I want to see your Governor Conti." Van der Beck was stunned. He was not a traditional nobleman, and he learned Latin later and was not very proficient. After figuring out what the Gama meant, Van der Beck saluted and said, "Please wait a moment. I will send someone to inform Lord Conti." He still knew the name of da Gama, who was the first Portuguese to discover the route to India. The Portuguese side has always insisted that da Gama was the first to discover India, and was unwilling to admit that it was Columbus who discovered India. Therefore, da Gama's reputation is also very big. Hearing that da Gama was visiting in person, Conti did not dare to neglect it, and hurriedly rushed from Hohhot city to meet da Gama. As soon as they met, da Gama asked, "Governor Kongtai, it was you who taught them to build the artillery fortress at the mouth of the Pearl River in the Ming dynasty? Do you know how much trouble this behavior has caused to the Kingdom of Portugal? At the mouth of the Pearl River, 2 ships in my fleet were damaged by the enemy's artillery and are now forced to return to Malacca for repairs. Now, 3 ships on my side have been damaged, and it's all your fault. Why did you teach them to make artillery and build artillery fortresses? I need a reasonable explanation." Kongtai, after listening to da Gama's question, asked calmly, "Excuse me, Lord da Gama, is there a provision in the treaty signed between the North Sea Kingdom and Portugal that the North Sea Kingdom cannot sell artillery to the Ming dynasty?" Da Gama was stunned, and after thinking about it, he said helplessly, "It seems not." Kongtai spread his hands and said, "That's it. There is no stipulation in our treaty with your country that we are not allowed to sell artillery to the Ming dynasty. There is no problem at all for us to sell artillery to them. Let me tell you, the craftsmen of the Ming dynasty are really amazing. I only sent them dozens of cannons, and they were able to imitate the 12-pound bronze cannon based on the samples sent." Kongtai's words were equivalent to completely shifting the responsibility. "I didn't teach them how to cast cannons, they imitated it. What about the artillery fortress at the mouth of the Pearl River? Don't tell me they figured it out by themselves." Da Gama rolled his eyes and refuted. Kongtai patted his head and said. Chapter 1878, Liu Xiaozai's Advice. In fact, in order to keep it secret, Conti did not show the 8 most powerful 32-pound cannon guns on the ship, but only showed the 18-pound red cannon. Moreover, the red cannons were painted with gold paint, which looked like copper cannons. This was a special request from Marin. The cannon guns must not be shown to European counterparts to avoid being imitated. As for the red cannons, they were also painted with gold paint to pretend to be copper cannons. Then, on the Beihai warships, the 12-pound Napoleon cannons were just the most common firepower, generally arranged on the upper deck. This luxurious firepower configuration made da Gama extremely envious. However, he also knew that with the supply of saltpeter in Portugal, it was difficult to afford so many heavy artillery. Unless, the Ming dynasty could be forced to give in and agree to sell them a large amount of saltpeter. But da Gama underestimated the toughness of the Ming dynasty. Although the coastal areas of Guangdong and Fujian provinces were turned upside down by Portugal, the Ming court did not think about peace, but how to defeat the opponent, no matter how much it cost. This is the difference between the Ming dynasty and the Qing dynasty. Until the late Ming dynasty, even if the Ming army's combat effectiveness became bad, the Ming court never thought of compromising with the outside world, but tried every means to resist to the end. For example, when the Japanese pirates plagued the southeast coast, the Ming court never compromised with the pirate group. Faced with the rise of the later Jin dynasty, although the war was unfavorable, it never compromised. However, later the peasant uprising army and the Qing dynasty attacked from both inside and outside, and finally finished. Moreover, it was mainly broken from the inside by the peasant army, not by foreign enemies. In the late Qing dynasty, whoever came would surrender. Belgium, a little bit, dared to blackmail. The century-old humiliation of the country began in various peace talks. Therefore, Marin didn't understand why some people in later generations still missed the Qing dynasty. If it was the Manchus, it would be fine, after all, that was the time when they were masters. The Han people also miss it. It's simply sick. Comparing the Ming and Qing dynasties, there is nothing to compare in the early stage, both are very strong. However, the gap between the late dynasties of the 2 dynasties is too big. In the late Ming dynasty, the chaos was mainly in the north and northeastern borders, mainly in drought-stricken areas. At that time, the Jiangnan region was still prosperous, which made foreign missionaries envious. In the late Qing dynasty, even the prosperous south was in dire straits. Of course, the Ming dynasty was doomed to be unable to be too strong because of the poor financial and taxation system left by Zhu Yuanzhang. It can only be said that when compared with the Qing dynasty, the Ming dynasty won. Among them, the reason why the Ming dynasty was stronger than the Qing dynasty was that the situation in the late Ming dynasty was much better than that in the late Qing dynasty. Moreover, it is not the end of the Ming dynasty yet. The Ming dynasty is still in the middle stage and its strength is still strong. Moreover, the current emperor Zhengde is still a warlike emperor. Therefore, whether it is Marin or Conti, who is an expert in China, they all know very well that the Portuguese will never get their wish. However, Conti would not remind the Portuguese. He was also happy to see the great man de Gama hit a wall. Seeing de Gama's surprised eyes, Conti added fuel to the fire and ordered, "Come on, fire a few shots to open the eyes of Lord de Gama." Then, a rumbling sound of cannon sounded, and the warship began to sway due to the recoil. Seeing the cabin full of gunpowder barrels, de Gama said with envy, "Governor Conti, let's not talk about repairing the warship. But can you sell us a batch of gunpowder? We have come from afar, and the gunpowder reserves may not be sufficient." Conti shook his head again and again, "This is not possible. This violates the principle of neutrality in wartime. If our Grand Duke knows about it, he will remove me from my position. I'll pay double the price." De Gama was also furious. Anyway, he had robbed a lot of money from the fleet along the coast of Fujian and Guangdong. Conti still shook his head. He didn't dare to offend the Ming dynasty. De Gama wanted to persuade him, but Conti ignored him directly. Before de Gama left, Conti gave de Gama some gifts as personal gifts. However, they were all luxury goods. As for the gunpowder and wood for repairing ships that de Gama wanted most, Conti did not mention them. Looking at the 10 tall warships waiting in Tamsui port, de Gama shook his head and could only leave with regret. After all, although the Portuguese warships are more numerous, their firepower cannot be compared with others. The most important thing is that once a warship is damaged, even the dock for repairing the ship cannot be found. However, Conti's 10 warships can return to the dock for repair at any time. Over time, it must be the 10 warships of the North Sea Kingdom that will win. However, he did not know that these 10 warships had strengthened keels and thickened sideboards, and were not afraid of the Portuguese's small-caliber artillery at all. Moreover, the sideboards and the part below the waterline were wrapped with nickel iron sheets, which were not only strong but also corrosion-resistant. However, the nickel iron sheets on the sideboards were covered by thin wooden boards, and de Gama did not see them. The nickel iron skin below the waterline was also painted black, and it was no longer visible as metal. With regret, de Gama left Tamsui port and returned to his flagship, Prince Henry. He decided to grab another wave, and then return to the deep water bay base on Xiangjiang Island for repairs. Especially the 3 injured ships, they need to go back for repairs before they can continue to be used. But de Gama didn't know that his base on Xiangjiang Island had long been targeted by Wang Hong, the deputy envoy of the Guangdong-Guangxi Haidao. During the period when de Gama led his fleet to harass the coast of Fujian and Guangdong, Wang Hong had already sent spies to the north bank of Xiangjiang Island and established a temporary base. He also built a hidden dock on the north bank of Xiangjiang Island that was conducive to landing. After learning that the Portuguese fleet was not at home, Wang Hong did not immediately order the capture of the Portuguese temporary base in Deep Water Bay, but refrained from taking action, and then sent people to monitor the Portuguese temporary base, preparing to take action later. Wang Hong believed that even if the base was captured, it would be meaningless if the Portuguese warships were not there. The Portuguese attacked the coast of Fujian and Guangdong with warships, not this temporary base. Therefore, the most important thing to eliminate the banditry is to destroy the enemy's warships, not the enemy's temporary base. Therefore, Wang Hong did not send troops to attack this base while the enemy was not at home, but sent spies to monitor it day and night. At the same time, the family was actively training shipbuilding water ghosts to prepare to pierce the enemy's warships in the future. Just when Wang Hong was actively preparing for war, a middle-aged scholar who claimed to be a traveling scholar suddenly came outside the Nantou water fort, asking for an audience and offering advice. The scholars in the Ming dynasty were noble, and even Wang Hong, a senior official of the 4th rank, would not offend them easily. Because who knows when this scholar will pass the imperial examination and become an important bureaucrat. If he neglects the other party and the other party is a grudge holder, it will be equivalent to making a political enemy in the future. What's more, this scholar claimed to be here to offer advice, which made him more worthy of his attention. However, Wang Hong did not know that this scholar who came to offer advice was actually specially arranged by Kong Tai under the instruction of Ma Lin. The scholar's name was Lv Feng, and he was originally a down-and-out scholar in Hujiang Xinghua Prefecture. Lv Feng passed the examination for the scholar at the age of 23, and was originally very proud of himself. However, in the next 20 years, he failed the examination repeatedly. In middle age, he was still a scholar. Then, he began to doubt himself and gave up the examination for the Juren, and instead taught in a community school in the countryside, barely making a living. The community school was equivalent to the local primary school in the Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties. It was to teach children under the age of 15, and was generally taught by scholars of average level. Scholars with high levels generally continued to study in the prefectural school or county school, concentrating on preparing for the Juren examination. Only poor scholars who had little hope of passing the Juren examination, or whose families were in financial difficulties and hoped to be teachers so as to receive some shuxiu to subsidize their families, would serve as community school teachers. After Kong Tai became the governor of Dongfan Island, he sent people to recruit talents everywhere. It happened that LV Feng's father was seriously ill and needed a lot of money for treatment. And his salary as a community school teacher was not enough. Then, Kong Tai used a few large silver ingots to poach LV Feng. Of course, LV Feng went to Dongfan Island in the name of study tour. Now 2 years have passed, and LV Feng is still studying. It happened that Kong Tai needed someone to help give advice to the chief officer of the Guangdong Navy, and he couldn't expose himself. So, he simply sent LV Feng to do this. Chapter 1879, Fire Attack and Destroying the Rudder. I am Lu Feng, a student from Xinhua Prefecture. I passed by here while studying. I learned that the deputy envoy was preparing to wipe out the bandits. It happened that I had some experience in naval warfare, so I came here to offer some advice. Please forgive me, deputy envoy. After saying this, Lu Xiaocai bowed. Wang Hong was worried about how to deal with the Portuguese bandits. Although he did not hold much hope, he was still willing to listen to Lu Feng's ideas for reference. So, he waved his hand and said, Mr. Lu, there is no need to be polite. Sit down and talk. I am really troubled by the way to wipe out the bandits. If you have any good ideas, please feel free to tell me. If it can help in eliminating the bandits, I will definitely help you to ask for credit from the court. After Lu Feng found a small stool to sit down, he presented the strategy designed by Marin to Wang Hong. Fire attack. Mr. Lu, do you know that those large Portuguese ships are rampant on the sea? How can the fire ships get close? They will hide. Wang Hong frowned, thinking that Lu Feng was a little unreliable. Lu Feng said confidently, Sir, the pirates' ships are sailing on the sea all year round and are difficult to approach. But sir, the pirates' warships also need to dock to rest at night. If there is an important anchorage, you can find a good place and wait for the pirates to go ashore and sleep. In the middle of the night, you can send hundreds of small fireboats filled with sulfur, saltpeter and kerosene to rush into the enemy's anchorage and burn many pirate ships. The pirates have come from afar and it is difficult to repair their ships. If many ships are burned, they will definitely not be able to continue and can only retreat. Wang Hong became interested. You mean to send fireboats to rush into the enemy's anchorage in the middle of the night? It's a bit difficult to sail on the sea in the middle of the night. Lu Feng nodded, that's right, sir, deputy envoy. If it's pitch black at night, it's naturally difficult to sail on the sea. But what if there is moonlight? Those experienced old boatmen can also sail at night. Students suggest that we recruit a group of boatmen who are good at operating boats at night, with a dozen people on each boat, to operate the sails and row the oars, so that the fireboats can rush towards the enemy ships. When they get close to the enemy ships, they will set the boats on fire, and then jump off the boats and swim away. Of course, there should not only be moonlight that night, but it would be best if there is a south wind. In this way, the fireboats can rush into the enemy ships with the wind and burn the enemy ships. Wang Hong stroked his beard and thought for a while, then clapped his hands and said, Great. If the fireboats can really stick to the enemy ships and burn, the enemy ships will surely be burned. However, what if the enemy ships escape? After all, the enemy ships are not the linked ships tied together with iron chains in The Burning of Chibi. Seeing the fireboats rushing over, the pirates' boatmen will surely try their best to operate the boats to avoid them. Then, Wang Hong told them about his plan to send water ghosts to stab the ships. After listening to this, Lu Feng shook his head and said, Sir, if the pirates only have 2 or 3 ships, it would be feasible to send people to build ships. After all, as long as 1 or 2 ships are sunk, the enemy will be seriously injured. But, I heard that the pirates have 20 or 30 warships. It would be a bit difficult to sink them all. After all, the pirates can hear the axe and chisel hitting the ship as long as they are not stupid. It would be good if 2 or 3 ships can be taken. After all, the pirates will not watch the water ghosts drilling the ship. As for the problem of enemy ships avoiding the fire ships, I have a good idea. Oh, tell me quickly. Wang Hong also became interested. Lu Feng took out a piece of paper and explained while drawing with the carbon stick he carried with him, this time, I went to Dongfan Island and was fortunate to see the Beihai Kingdom's barbarian ships on Dongfan Island. The Portuguese, like the Beihai Kingdom, came from the west, and the ships probably have similar structures. Wang Hong nodded and agreed with Lu Feng's opinion. LV Feng continued, when sailing on the sea, the barbarian sailboats rely on the power of the sails and the rudder to control the direction. If the fire ship rushes into the harbor where the enemy ship is stationed, if the enemy ship wants to avoid it, in addition to raising the sails and setting sail, it must also turn the rudder to change direction. After speaking, LV Feng also drew a simple diagram. Wang Hong's eyes suddenly lit up. What does LV Sheng mean to destroy the enemy ship's rudder so that it can't avoid the fire ship? LV Feng nodded, then shook his head, yes and no. What do you mean? Wang Hong asked in confusion. Since the adults have arranged for the water ghosts to drill the ship, if they do it in the middle of the night, it will be quiet at night, and the sound of drilling the ship will definitely attract attention and easily arouse the vigilance of the Portuguese pirates. Therefore, drilling the ship in the middle of the night is not advisable. But if the enemy ship wants to avoid the fire ship, it cannot do without the rudder to control the direction. Therefore, if you want to make the enemy ship unable to avoid the fire ship, you don't need to drill the ship, just destroy its rudder. How to destroy it? Wang Hong asked. Lu Feng first drew the most popular crowbar-controlled rudder system in Europe at that time, which was also the direction-changing system used by Portuguese ships. This is the rudder. It is connected to the horizontal axis that changes direction through a main shaft. The sailor uses a crowbar to pry the horizontal axis, and the rudder can swing left and right to control the direction of the ship. What the student means is that there is no need to send people to drill the bottom of the ship. Before the fire ship attacks, just let the water ghosts carry large iron nails, blades and other sharp weapons, sneak into the stern of the enemy ship underwater, and use iron nails or sharp blades to mix into the gaps in the rudder to prevent it from turning. Wang Hong frowned and said, can't the pirates send people underwater to clean up these things? It won't affect the pirates' ships from escaping from the fire ship. Lu Feng smiled and said, Deputy Envoy, time is running out. By the time the enemy sends sailors to find the problem, the fire ship will have rushed to the front and burned fiercely, and even burned these pirate ships together. Wang Hong's eyes suddenly lit up. What Lu Xing means is that there is no need to destroy the enemy ship's stern rudder, just make it temporarily unusable, and wait until the fire ship approaches to burn the enemy ship. Lu Feng nodded and said, yes, sir. Both chiseling the bottom of the ship and destroying the stern rudder will take a long time and will be easily discovered. After all, it is quiet in the middle of the night, and both chiseling the bottom of the ship and destroying the stern rudder will make a lot of noise. However, if we just insert sharp objects such as nails into the gap of the stern rudder to prevent it from turning in a short period of time, our goal will be achieved. Moreover, this will make very little noise and will not easily attract the attention of the enemy on the shore. In this way, our water ghosts can quickly and quietly cause problems with the enemy ship's rudder. Before the enemy ship reacts and sends people to repair it in the water and get the ship back on track, our fire ship will rush over. Wang Hong slapped the table excitedly and said, in seconds, we can make their rudder malfunction so secretly that they cannot escape. When the fire on the fire ship burns the Portuguese warship, we will win. Mr. Lu, if this battle is successful, I will definitely ask the court for credit for you. The court will not bury talents like you. Lu Feng waved his hand calmly and said, Your Excellency is too kind. I am just fulfilling my duty as a scholar. In fact, what Lu Feng was thinking was, MMP, this is not the strategy one thought of. If I had that ability, I would have become a counselor for some big boss a long time ago. Chapter 1880, Oil Fraud. In fact, the tactic of fire attack and pre-destruction of the enemy ship's stern rudder proposed by Lu Feng is an upgraded version of Zheng Zhilong's Liaolua Bay battle against the Dutch. In the Liaolua Bay battle, because Lu Xiang's fleet took the main attack, and Zheng Zhilong was unfamiliar with Western ships and did not send anyone to do anything, the Dutch lost 3 of their 8 warships, and the remaining 5 were injured and fled. And Marin's upgraded version of the fire attack method also comes with the means of letting the water ghost destroy the enemy's stern rudder. In this way, when the Portuguese find that the fire ship is coming, even if they board the ship and raise the sail to escape in time, they will not be able to turn and run away in time because of the failure of the rudder. As long as you are stuck with the fire ship, there will be absolutely no good end. In addition, Marin's plan also includes the tactic of letting the water ghost carry a kerosene bottle. The so-called kerosene bottle is actually to load kerosene into an ordinary porcelain bottle and carry it with the water ghost. When the fire ship rushes nearby, the water ghost throws the kerosene bottle onto the deck of the enemy ship. The porcelain bottle was fragile and fell on the deck, causing kerosene to flow all over the deck. At this time, if the fireboat approached again, it would be easy to ignite the deck. As for the water ghosts, there was no problem. They were good at swimming and could easily avoid the range of the fireboat. Even if they were on fire, a person could suffocate them by diving into the water. After Lu Feng introduced the kerosene bottle, he asked the servants who accompanied him to take out dozens of kerosene bottles. These were a mixture of gasoline and kerosene extracted from the petroleum produced in the Chuxiangking oil well in Miaoli, which was very flammable. Although the current output of the Chuxiangking oil well is very low, the daily output is currently only a few dozen kilograms. However, it is still no problem to use it to refine dozens of bottles of kerosene. In fact, there was also fierce kerosene in the Ming dynasty, which was also extracted from petroleum. There are records of petroleum in the Song dynasty, and it was also used relatively early in ancient China. However, the use of petroleum in ancient China was relatively primitive, that is, to use petroleum directly as a weapon of arson, and its burning intensity was far less than that of the mixture of refined gasoline and kerosene. After all, petroleum is mixed with too much diesel and lubricating oil that is difficult to ignite with open flames. The mixture of gasoline and kerosene refined by Marin in a distillation kettle is very easy to burn, and it will catch fire at a touch, and it will burn very quickly and be difficult to extinguish. This is still the result of Marin's suppression. He asked the craftsmen to deliberately increase the distillation temperature, and the gasoline obtained was mixed with a large amount of kerosene with a high ignition point. If it were all gasoline, it would burn more horribly and more dangerous. In order to prove the power of this kerosene, Lu Feng specially asked people to find wet firewood and spread it on the ground. Then, he took out a porcelain bottle filled with kerosene and smashed it on it, so that the kerosene soaked the wet wood. Then, Lu Feng asked for a torch and threw it on it. Then, the kerosene burned violently, and the fire was extremely fierce. Then, the wet wood under the kerosene was also burned by the raging fire, and bursts of white gas came out that was the evaporated water vapor. When the water vapor was dried, the wet wood dried up, and then it also burned in the fierce fire. It was burned to ashes in a short time. This is really fierce. LV Sheng, do you still have this kind of fierce kerosene? I want a lot. Wang Hong said excitedly. He has also seen the world and has seen ordinary kerosene. However, although ordinary kerosene is also easy to burn, it is not so fierce. This mixture of gasoline and kerosene, when burning, the flames will rise suddenly, unlike ordinary burning, the flames will rise slowly. This kind of burning is most suitable for setting fire to ships. LV Feng shook his head and said, this is a few dozen bottles of Dongfan Island's chief steward Kong Tai. Kong Tai is called the governor in Beihai Kingdom, but in the Ming dynasty, he cannot be called the governor, but only the chief steward, who handles affairs on behalf of Ma Lin, the Dongfan Earl who cannot stay permanently, sent me when I was studying in Dongfan Island. It is said that this kind of fierce fire oil is extracted from petroleum by Western alchemists. He doesn't have much petroleum, otherwise he could produce more. Wang Hong's eyes lit up and asked, is this thing extracted from petroleum? What is the yield? Wang Hong knew about petroleum. He had also read Shen Kuo's Dream Pool essays and knew that this thing was produced in northern Shaanxi and was widely used as kerosene by the Ming army. However, the power of this fierce fire oil in front of him exceeded his imagination. It was the most suitable weapon for fire attack. If it can be mass-produced, it will definitely make the combat effectiveness of the Ming Navy soar. LV Feng followed Kong Tai's instructions and said, honestly, I heard from the steward Kong that only a great alchemist in their Beihai Kingdom can refine this kind of fierce fire oil, and the yield is very low. 1 caddy of fierce fire oil can only produce less than 1 tael. The 1 tael here is not 1 tael of 1 caddy in 10 taels, but 1 tael of 1 caddy and 16 taels, which is about 37.3 grams, 1/16 of a caddy. But in fact, even if the refining means are backward and there is no means of cracking and hydrogenation, the total proportion of gasoline and kerosene refined by ordinary distillation kettles has reached about 20%, that is, 20%. But Kong Tai deliberately reported 1/16 to Wang Hong, that is, 6.25%, because of an order from Marin. He wanted to cheat the oil resources of the Ming dynasty. As a history student, Marin remembered that although the Ming dynasty did not drill the first oil well in Jiazhou, Sichuan until 1521, and buried it quickly, the ancient Chinese had been collecting oil a long time ago. Of course, those oils are oil seedlings that emerge from the surface by themselves, and the output is not high. The ancients did not drill wells specifically to extract oil. The oil well in Jiazhou, Sichuan, was accidentally opened when people used the Zhuodong well drilling method to open a salt well. But because the locals did not know enough about oil, it was not the brine well they needed, so they filled up this artificially dug deep oil well, which was a pity. The oil in northern Shaanxi and other places came from the handmade shallow wells several meters deep dug by the locals. The output of a well is about the same as that of Chuxiangqing, and the daily output is only a few dozen kilograms. But the Ming dynasty was so big that it was not just 1 or 2 earthen oil wells. One here and one there, the total output per year must be tens of thousands of kilograms. However, these tens of thousands of kilograms of oil were simply and crudely used as kerosene for fire attacks without further processing. Ma Lin's intention was to take advantage of the opportunity to help the Ming dynasty process gasoline and kerosene mixed oil with more firepower to cheat more oil from the Ming dynasty. By then, even if 6.25% of the mixed oil is sent back to the Ming dynasty, there will still be more than 13% of gasoline and kerosene left. What's more than 20% of diesel can be obtained to provide fuel for the diesel engines of the North Sea Kingdom. The remaining oil from refining gasoline, kerosene and diesel can also be refined into mineral lubricants, which can be said to kill two birds with one stone. The mixed oil of gasoline and kerosene has super strong firepower. After the Ming dynasty realizes the power of this fierce fire oil, it will definitely find a way to expand production. By then, send more oil to Marin. Even if the gasoline and kerosene are sent back to the Ming dynasty, the diesel saved alone can make Marin a fortune.